When nothing ever goes your way, and you feel like you're stuck, that's when I gave up. As she drifts through the darkness of space, a voice calls out, asking, "Do you regret it?" A handsome white-haired young man with mismatched eyes appears before her, softly speaking her name, Darcy. He smiles gently at her and says, "Marceau, if you stay, I'll stand with you. If you decide to run, I'll follow you to the end of the world." Kneeling beside her bed, he looks up at her with devotion. "You said it's okay for me to do that." Offering his hand, a warm but sorrowful smile graces his face as he says, "I just wish for your happiness." Looking at memories of Prince Ryan, Leguan, and Knight Kazan, Marceau realizes he is right and thinks to herself, "I no longer need to care." With a peaceful smile, she gently shakes her head, finally letting go of her lingering regrets. She places her hand gently in his, declaring, "No, I do not regret my decision." A radiant smile spreads across Marceau's face as her purple eyes shine brightly against the starry sky. Hand in hand, they walk away together, heading toward a bright and beautiful light. In a different time, Marceau bows deeply in a red gown, saying, "My apologies, Lady Leguan. It was absolutely my fault. No excuses." Lady Leguan claps her hands in delight and replies, "Please, Marceau, I'm fine. I'm actually glad that you finally opened up to me. Let's be friends." Marceau looks back at her with a gentle, soft smile, hoping things might actually change. Yet a cruel song echoes through the kingdom, "Precious Leguan, jealous Marceau, endless drama, evil she was so." In the carriage, Marceau's maid is furious at the street children singing the mocking song, but Marceau softly reassures her, saying, "No worries." Looking out the carriage window, Marceau quietly thinks to herself, "There's no more Lady Marceau anyway." Recalling her knowledge of the novel's plot, Marceau plans to prevent the next incident at the ball, where Leguan is destined to be shot with an arrow on the terrace. Standing before Leguan, Marceau prepares for the event, thinking, "And I just took the first step." Riding to the ball, she looks determined, hoping she can finally prove that she has changed. Finding Leguan on the balcony, Marceau urgently warns her, "Leguan, you can't be here. Come, let us leave this place," leaving Leguan utterly confused. Suddenly, a sharp arrow pierces right through Marceau's back, blood splattering in the night air as she shields Leguan. Collapsing on the stone terrace, Marceau weakly comforts herself, thinking, "It's all right, at least I saved her." She lies helplessly on the ground, tears of pain and exhaustion filling her eyes. As she bleeds, the faceless crowd of noble onlookers merely whispers and gossips, completely devoid of sympathy. Hearing their cold whispers, Marceau gasps in utter shock and disbelief. The nobles mockingly gossip, speculating that Marceau must have barged onto the terrace to push Lady Leguan and take her place with the prince. They mock her obsession with Prince Ryan, assuming her injury was just a failed dramatic stunt. At a tea shop, noble women whisper that Marceau might have even hired the assassin herself to gain attention, as Marceau sits nearby, hearing every cruel word. Marceau recalls how even her simplest gestures, like helping Leguan with her coat, were twisted by others as signs of jealousy. Even when she compliments Leguan's brooch, the onlookers twist her words, claiming she was actually being passive-aggressive. Although Leguan has always been kind to her, Leguan's lover, Prince Ryan, treats Marceau with nothing but disdain. The elite Knight Commander Kazan, along with everyone else in this fantasy world, harbors nothing but deep hatred for her. Standing under her wide-brimmed sun hat, Marceau looks down, feeling completely isolated and exhausted by the endless prejudice. Leguan approaches her with a bright smile, saying, "Would you like to go for a walk? I'm worried that you look tired recently. It's nice to take a walk and get some fresh air." Walking through the garden, Marceau tiredly thinks, "I actually just wanted to rest in my room." Watching Leguan walk ahead of her, Marceau continues, "But I ended up accepting her offer." As Leguan reaches out toward a flower near the water's edge, Marceau thinks, "Perhaps I want to believe that there's still hope." Suddenly, Leguan slips off the stone edge and falls backward toward the deep fountain. Marceau reacts instantly, screaming Leguan in pure terror. Knight Commander Kazan runs toward the scene, shouting in panic, "Are you all right?" Kazan pulls a coughing Leguan from the water, who weakly tries to defend Marceau, gasping, "Kazan, I'm fine. Lady Marceau has helped." Despite Leguan's defense, Kazan glares back at Marceau, thinking that she has targeted Leguan once again. Glaring at Marceau with pure fury, Kazan snarls, "It's you again, Marceau." Guards seize Marceau as she desperately protests, "Let go of me, I didn't do it," only to be told, "It's the prince's order." Shivering in her room, water drips slowly from Marceau's wet gown, matching her quiet, broken spirit. Kazan reports to Prince Ryan, explaining that while they will monitor Leguan's condition, Leguan claims Marceau was only trying to hold her before she fell. The prince scoffs coldly, muttering, "I'm concerned about Leguan's soft heart. She wouldn't need to look after this wench." Prince Ryan glares down at Marceau, asking coldly, Did you think you'd have a chance if Lejon was out of the picture? Marceau stands frozen as the prince sneers, "You're despicable, Marceau." Left completely alone, she silently wonders, how come no one ever believes me? Looking down upon them in the grand palace hall, Prince Ryan scolds her, declaring, "I've been easy on you since you're the Marquis's daughter, but you dare lay a finger on my lover?" As a dismissive smirk plays on the prince's lips, Marceau looks back at him, feeling a deep, quiet despair, wondering, how come nothing ever changes? Prince Ryan gazes at Marceau with utter contempt, remarking, "There's always a reason why a woman is unloved." Although Marceau had tried desperately to act differently and change her destiny, Prince Ryan steps closer to deliver his final threat. "I've warned you plenty of times, Marceau. From now on, I won't be so generous." Standing in the dark, she realizes the bitter truth. If nothing ever changes, no matter what I do. Marceau quietly turns away from the prince, saying, "I understand," leaving him completely taken aback as he mutters, "What?" With a calm, defiant smile, Marceau looks back and declares, "From this moment on, I shall do nothing at all." Announcing her complete retirement from high society, Marceau proclaims, "I won't go near Lady Lejoin, and I'll stay away from all social meetups. I'll lock myself up and reflect on my sins for the rest of my life," before slamming the door behind her, leaving the prince to gasp, "Wait!" Having run out of the palace, she gathers her dress, thinking to herself, "I tried so hard but failed to achieve my goals." Leaving the grand estate behind, Marceau reflects on giving up the life she once cherished, while rumors quickly spread among the nobility about the Marquis's only daughter suddenly withdrawing from all social activities. At a social gathering, Prince Ryan sips his wine, scoffing, she's ever so self-centered." Staring into the distance, Marceau quietly sighs, thinking, "But how come I feel—" Under a bright, sunny sky, Marceau's maid Letty runs up to her in relief, asking, "Are you all right, my lady?" To which Marceau calmly replies, "Thanks for waiting. Let's head back to the estate." Gasping in horror at her dripping wet dress, Letty cries, "What happened to you? You're soaking wet." But Marceau simply smiles and reassures her, "Don't worry about it. It's all fine now." Brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, Marceau complains, "I got so annoyed at how he was accusing me, so I told him I'll just head home and stay there." As they walk back to their carriage, Letty asks in concern, How are you going to do that?" And Marceau casually replies, "What do you mean how?" She confidently reminds herself of her high-born status. "I'm a daughter of a rich, noble family." Back at her wealthy estate, a massive treasure chest overflows with priceless pearls, diamonds, and glowing colorful gemstones. With a triumphant, beautiful smirk, Marceau realizes that she has all the resources she needs to live comfortably. Flopping face down onto her massive bed, she lets out a long, exhausted sigh of relief. Whew! Lying comfortably on her stomach, Marceau calls out her dessert order, 10 macarons with black tea and a piece of cake loaded with strawberries, please. And Letty happily responds, "Sure thing, my lady." Marceau raises her fist in absolute joy, celebrating, "It's all over. I don't care what happens to the plot. I'm gonna live happily ever after with my cat." Letty brings in a magnificent 3-tiered dessert stand loaded with sweet treats, saying, "My lady, please have a seat," as Marceau replies with a bright, "Okay." Sitting comfortably on her sofa, Marceau happily sips her tea, bidding farewell to her past troubles. Ryan, who never listened to anything I say, and frustrating Lejoin, who can't read the room, goodbye. Sipping her warm tea, Marceau contemplates, how did I not think of this before? I guess I was used to the pressure of social networking in the modern world. Anyway, resting on her couch in a spotlight, she ponders, how should I spend my time now? Reminiscing about her past life, Marceau notes that unlike the modern world, there is very little entertainment at home, making her wish she had a smartphone or personal computer to get through the lockdown. Suddenly, a brilliant idea strikes her like lightning, and her eyes widen in shock. Marceau calls out, "Letty," and her faithful maid immediately replies, "Yes, my lady." Enjoying a strawberry, Marceau smiles and declares, "I want to meet a merchant of enchanted items." That's right, I can make enchanted items. She recalls that enchanted items are crafted by refining arcanium stones, with horseless carriages and voice recorders being notable examples of such magic. By taking the arcanium stones to a sorcerer, they can refine the magic to fit any custom request. However, arcanium is incredibly expensive, and sorcerers are not fond of enchanted tools since these items allow ordinary people to use magic without them. Because of this, the general public often fears and judges them. The emperor and the high nobles also condemned enchanted items and spread misinformation, leading citizens to question how they could ever trust horse-free carriages. Consequently, the prevailing rule in society became clear: no one uses them. Lying on her couch, Marceau scoffs at the public superstitions, thinking, how can you cast a curse with a recorder? Such a silly thought. Nibbling on a sweet treat, she plans her master business move, knowing that investing in enchanted tools is her golden ticket, as Leguan and Ryan will soon popularize an enchanted carriage on a date. Once that happens, the demand for enchanted tools will skyrocket, allowing the imperial family and high-ranking wizards to amass incredible wealth, just as they did in the original novel plot. Tapping her fingers in anticipation, Marceau grins, thinking, and I am plenty wealthy to prepare for this in advance. She analyzes the distribution of arcanium mines, noting that the Etoile March owns 2 out of the 5 existing mines, the royal family owns 2, and the final mine belongs to Leguan's family, the Ethical March. Looking out at her beautiful garden, she remarks, I have both arcanium and ample capital. If I'm going to stay inside, I may as well gain some extra cash. Above all else, it's just too boring without magical devices. But as time ticks by, Marceau narrows her eyes in suspense, wondering, well, could it be? Looking up at the ticking clock, she thinks to herself in worry that I got scammed. She remembers Letty's promise of finding a merchant for a 2 o'clock meeting, yet it is already 1:58 and there's still no sign of them at the front entrance. Sitting on her couch, Marceau sighs, I thought this was going to be easy with the power of the Etoile March. I guess I was wrong. Just as she prepares to wait, a sudden, powerful gust of wind blows through the room and a cloaked sorcerer suddenly materializes right before her eyes. Staring in absolute shock, Marceau gasps to herself, a man materialized? The mysterious cloaked man lowers his hood, revealing a handsome young man with white hair and a warm, enchanting smile. Marceau is shocked, realizing that teleporting directly inside her mansion takes an incredible amount of magical expertise. She thinks he can teleport inside the mansion? That requires quite a bit of skill. Marceau is highly annoyed by how casually this mysterious man is speaking to her right off the bat, her modern past life sensibilities refusing to let it slide. She thinks, anyhow, why is he being informal already? I can't accept this as a former Korean girl. Her crimson eyes widen in complete shock as she looks up, utterly captivated by the mesmerizing figure standing before her. Light catches the soft strands of his white hair as his cold, brilliant blue eyes look back at her with an air of absolute elegance. Surrounded by white lilies, his ethereal beauty shines under a soft, celestial glow. Breaking the quiet spell, the white-haired man calmly introduces himself. I'm the merchant. I'm also a wizard. Offering a warm, handsome smile amidst the blooming lilies, he introduces himself, saying, you can call me Darcy. Marceau stares in disbelief, thinking to herself, someone like this exists in this world? He's even more attractive than the main character of this story, Ryan. A dark, ominous vision flashes in her mind, showing Darcy surrounded by venomous spider lilies and skulls, representing a dangerous poison. Yet she feels an irresistible pull toward him, thinking, yet I can't help but reach out. Marceau mumbles to herself in deep thought, wondering, how could someone like this not appear in the plot of the novel? Could he truly be a mere merchant? He's too handsome to be an extra. Darcy tilts his head curiously, asking, I am indeed a merchant. What do you mean by extra, though? Causing a panicked Marceau to quickly wave it off, stammering, oh, it's nothing, my lord. Marceau realizes in embarrassment that she accidentally spoke too formally to him, despite her high status, thinking, I was caught off guard and spoke too formally. Sitting across from him, she hesitantly asks him, hey, do you know who I am? Darcy sighs, leaning his head on his hand as he correctly names her status without a shred of intimidation. The only daughter of Marquis Etoile, Marceau Etoile, right? Marceau quietens down, realizing that his informal attitude isn't due to ignorance of her powerful family background. She thinks, well, it wasn't because he doesn't know my position. Darcy boldly admits, I hate speaking formally to nobles. I ask for your kind understanding, my lady. And Marceau nervously concedes, very well, while thinking that the informal speech actually suits his charming personality better. Darcy gazes out thoughtfully, questioning society's obsession with class differences. I don't get why people get so fixated on social status when we're all the same people. Marceau looks at him with wide eyes, deeply impressed to find someone in this rigid fantasy world who shares such progressive, modern values. She thinks, calling out the nobles like that in this world? It's been a while since I've met a person with a modern view. Marceau generously grants him permission, saying, you may speak freely. And Darcy simply shrugs with a relaxed, thanks. When Marceau asks how he managed to get in here, Darcy nonchalantly reveals, I used an enchanted device I made. Showing off a sleek purple ring on his finger, he explains, it's a ring that allows you to teleport. I made it pretty recently, so I've been meaning to test it out. Knowing how difficult spatial magic is, Marceau thinks in awe. Teleportation requires a great deal of time and effort to draw complex runes. He seems to have accomplished it so effortlessly. Watching Darcy sit with absolute confidence, Marceau's gut feeling is confirmed. This man is exceptionally talented. Surprised by his skills, she asks, "So you can make the enchanted devices yourself?" And Darcy proudly confirms, "Yep, and I also sell them." The two sit opposite each other in the sunlit parlor, a newly found mutual understanding settling between them as they prepare to talk business. Marceau looks down quietly, carefully preparing to propose her grand secret business venture. Clasping her hands together, Marceau announces her intent. "There's a device I'd like to commission. I'll provide the arcanium stones." When Darcy asks for how much, Marceau casually drops an astronomical offer. "Let's make it 5 billion golds." Darcy regains his composure, smiling with intrigue as he asks, "All right, what could a noblewoman, especially the only daughter of Marquis Twilit, that want to commission?" Sitting back comfortably, Darcy notes how rare it is for a high noblewoman to actively seek out forbidden magic. "It's understandable to be curious about my intentions. In a world that condemns magic, it's surprising to see a noblewoman seek it out." With a flourish, Marceau presents her detailed blueprints to Darcy, revealing her carefully drafted design with a proud "ta-da!" Smiling brightly, she holds up the drawing of a classic video camera on a tripod, declaring her plan: video recorder and player. She envisions her ultimate, delightful goal of creating a movie theater to escape reality. Scene shifts to a dark, gloomy night where the heavy, ominous footsteps of armored guards echo through the silent, cold corridors of a locked facility. A guard's hand firmly grips his spear as they patrol the highly secured palace grounds. Darcy reflects bitterly on the hypocritical freedom allowed by his captors. "The people that imprison me allow me to go on walks to relieve their conscience." Looking out at his heavy security with a mocking smile, Darcy notes, "It's a laughable gesture, but thanks to it, I heard that the daughter of Etoile is seeking out a magical tool merchant. Look at them standing guard, so determined not to lose me." Walking freely back into his quarters, Darcy chuckles at the incompetence of the guards. "Funny, they never even notice when I've been out." The majestic yet decaying, shadowy spires of his isolated palace stand tall against the dark, starry night sky. Walking past the cold iron bars of his luxurious prison, Darcy moves silently through the shadows. Loosening his tie, Darcy reflects on his meeting with Marceau. Marceau Etoile. She was a bit different than what the rumors told. I was ready to resort to threatening her to get what I needed. He tosses his purple teleportation ring onto his cloak, thinking, I didn't expect a noblewoman to be genuinely interested in crafting enchanted tools. Moreover, who knew the reason for it was so that she can comfortably quarantine in her home? The magic ring sizzles and burns on the fabric, representing his burning desire to escape the suffocating chains of his captivity. It's ironic because I want to walk free, but I'm trapped. Leaning back in a luxurious bath, Darcy muses that Marceau has thoroughly piqued his interest, especially since the massive supply of arcanium she provided will easily fund his secret research. Reaching toward his eye, he decides to remove his magical disguise. I should take this out now. Standing shirtless before his mirror, Darcy prepares to peel away his artificial contact lens. Staring deeply into his reflection, he reveals his true self, his heterochromatic eyes, one brilliant blue and the other a striking, glowing crimson. Resting on his pink sofa in a comfortable bathrobe while holding a pipe, Darcy casually calls out to a knock on his door. Yep, come in. He holds up a glowing red-orange arcanium stone in his hand, watching it sizzle with magical heat. An attendant enters, noting the smell of burnt herbs in his long bath, addressing Darcy by his true title, Your Highness, as the young prince silently laments the suffocating weight of being constantly watched. I had to let off some steam and privacy, you know? You're a man, I'm sure you understand. The prince lies smoothly as the guard blushes and retreats. As the door shuts, the guard bids him farewell, leaving the prince alone in his room with a hidden sack of glowing purple arcanium crystals stashed under his couch. Reflecting on his progress, the prince thinks to himself, teleporting short distances was a success, but I can't quite get far enough to reach another country. Looking over the blueprints Marceau provided, the prince is deeply impressed, thinking, a recorder player? This is more intuitive and innovative than I expected. With a charming, mischievous smirk, Darcy chuckles softly to itself as he plans his next moves in secret. The morning sun shines brightly over the grand and beautiful Etoile mansion. Letty enters Marceau's bedroom and reports, My lady, I've emptied out the room next door and got some heavy curtains as you ordered. Marceau smiles in relief, replying, thank you, Letty. Lying on her bed, Marceau thinks, I'm glad the contract went through. She recalls Darcy's eccentric condition during their meeting. I'll make it. However, our meetings need to be one-on-one only. If anyone else finds out about our contract, I'll terminate it immediately. Marceau reflects on Darcy's incredible talent. Being able to start work immediately must be a feat of a genius. Even though the drawing was too crude for a professional, I'll have to trust him for now. I gave him all the arcanium he would need. Suddenly sitting up with a spring, Marceau realizes, I'd have to tell the troupe about this too. Marceau considers the limitations of the technology, thinking, we can't edit the footages, so I can't make movies per se, but I can record plays and operas to play back. She weighs her options carefully, thinking, I could buy out the troupe, but people will gossip about that for sure. I don't want to have to worry about every move I make. Letty looks at her mistress with absolute loyalty and says, yes, my lady. Marceau instructs her maid, let's gather together the cherry troupe and the entire opera staff. When a shocked Letty asks, every member? Marceau confidently replies, yep, have them gather at the garden. Grateful for her maid's hard work, Marceau happily thinks, Letty's been getting busier lately. You're the best. Marceau's mind wanders as she brainstorms ideas for her new theatrical productions, thinking, should I commission a new script? Something reminiscent of a K-drama would be nice. She vividly imagines a dramatic scene of a mother-in-law throwing money and demanding a breakup, until Letty quietly interrupts her thoughts. With a sudden shift in the atmosphere, Letty announces in a serious tone, it's Lady Lejuan. Staring at the sealed envelope in her hand, Marceau thinks, Lejuan sent me a letter saying she misses me. Sighing at her desk, Marceau realizes she is in a tight spot. This is not good. The word will get out whether I invite her over or decline. Marceau recalls Lejuan's innocent and friendly nature, thinking, I know she doesn't think much of it. Lejuan is genuinely worried that she hasn't seen me in a while. Despite Lejuan's good intentions, Marceau sighs, thinking, but we were never close enough to be inviting each other over to our places. She notes that over the past year, she had never once invited Lejuan over. She remembers the difficulties of their past interactions. It was mostly because of the dirty looks the male leads were giving me, but also because time spent with her wasn't the most pleasant. Marceau recalls the painful comparisons made by society. Whenever I was with her, people compared us and put me down. She reflects on how differently they were treated. Because when you're loved as who you are, you don't need to be perceptive of your surroundings. I know Lejuan is not a bad person. However, no matter how much I tried, picking out the right clothes and practicing proper etiquette, Marceau thinks bitterly about her past role in the story. I was always overshadowed by her mere existence. She remembers the endless self-doubt of her past life. Then I would ask myself every time, what did I do wrong this time? In her darkest moments of despair, she used to wonder, what is wrong with me? Snapping out of her melancholy, Marceau kicks her legs in the air, thinking, whatever it is. Wiggling her bare toes with a carefree smile, Marceau relaxes on her sofa, concluding, none of that matters anymore. I feel liberated now that I've given up. Determined to move forward, she prepares to write a letter, thinking, even so, I suppose it's necessary to meet up once and for all and tie things up properly. Of course, if we meet alone, there's a high chance things will go south again for me. Holding her quill with a smirk, Marceau decides on a safer strategy. I'll have to ask to meet with the male main characters too. A peaceful and beautiful glass greenhouse stands elegantly in the garden under a bright blue sky filled with singing birds. Sitting alone in her luxurious parlor, Marceau reflects on her busy schedule. I still haven't had a chance to meet with the troupe yet. I was preoccupied scheduling with the three main characters. Lejuan has no idea how considerate I try to be for her. That's just another day in the life of a heroine, I guess. Sipping her tea, Marceau shakes off her worries. Whatever, I don't want to dwell on this any longer. I'm supposed to see Darcy today to discuss about the enchanted devices. With a massive check of 5 billion gold ready and a grand tower of delicious sweets prepared, Marceau eagerly awaits their meeting, noting that it is almost 2 o'clock. Right on cue, Darcy makes a dramatic entrance, his cloak billowing as he steps into the room. Brushing his white hair back, Darcy lets out a heavy, irritated sigh. Marceau is taken aback by his intense demeanor, anxiously thinking to herself, what's going on? He looks pissed. Darcy quickly shifts back to his cheerful, casual persona, waving with a smile. Hi, gosh, I got caught up on the way here. Watching him, Marceau thinks, for a moment, he looked so scary. If we had met elsewhere, I'm sure his temper would have been worse. Clearing her throat, Marceau gets straight to business. It's been exactly 2 weeks. How's the project coming along? Darcy crosses his arms and fixes her with a piercing look, asking, before I answer that, let me ask you, why are you making this? It's as if you don't plan on stepping out ever again. Looking away resolutely, Marceau answers, I am never going out. She secretly reasons, it's futile to try to hide it. Rumors will go around anyhow as I continue to stay inside the mansion. Everyone will eventually catch on, so I can share this much. Darcy stares at her in absolute shock, his brilliant blue eyes wide with surprise. Nervous under his gaze, Marceau hesitates, wondering, well, how can I be as vague as possible? Knowing the risks of gossip, Marceau thinks, I need to nip any potential problems in the bud. Merchants in particular spread words easily. She then tells him, many noble families have their own issues. There's something personal going on within the Étoile March. She continues stammering to make up a plausible excuse. So I decided to obey my father, and the thing is, As Darcy remains completely silent, staring at her intently, a sweating Marceau panics internally. Why is he not responding to what I'm saying? A contrasting memory of a man in a pink suit sitting across from her flashes in the background, highlighting her past social struggles. Marceau tightly clenches her fist on the glass table, trying to maintain her composure. Looking down, Marceau softly begins to explain her true feelings. With a look of profound weariness, Marceau admits her deep-seated exhaustion, tired of people. Darcy looks at her in silent empathy. As Darcy looks out of his barred window, he deeply relates to her feeling of being trapped. I'm sick and tired of being locked up. Leaving the country instead of seeking revenge? Darcy asks in disbelief if Marceau is truly sick and tired, to which she cheerfully replies that she has no desire to see anyone and would happily rot in her room forever, believing she'll be happiest that way. A close-up of Darcy looking somber and deep in thought as he asks Marceau if she even understands what it truly means to be locked up. Looking surprised, Marceau responds confidently that she indeed understands what being locked up means. Against a bright blue sky, Darcy contemplates the irony of the only daughter of Marquis Étoile declaring her intention to lock herself away from the world. Sitting back on the sofa, Darcy asks where the enchanted device is, silently noting that he initially assumed she simply had a peculiar taste. Remembering her weary expression, Darcy recalls Marceau's soft admission, I'm tired of people. Darcy stares intently, wondering to himself what could have possibly happened to make her look so profoundly exhausted and make such a sad expression. Looking at her teacup, Marceau gently suggests that the deadline might have been too tight, but Darcy quickly reassures her that the deadline was not the problem. Smiling charmingly with his hand on his chin, Darcy proposes amending their contract, expressing a sudden curiosity about her self-lockdown and asking her to show him how it is done. Marceau questions why he is so interested, noting that he is a merchant, but Darcy playfully shrugs and replies that he spends a lot of time alone too, adding that he isn't a very popular merchant. Confused by his behavior, Marceau looks on as Darcy dramatically sweeps back his cloak against a backdrop of blue roses, announcing that he has successfully completed the devices she requested. Boasting that he is quite good at his job, Darcy asks Marceau to show him her hand. Darcy taps a sleek, camera-like enchanted device into Marceau's weighted hands with a gentle click. Marceau is absolutely astonished as she holds the device, realizing it is almost identical to the modern camera she imagined from her previous world. Staring at the camera in disbelief, Marceau is deeply impressed by Darcy's genius, wondering how he built such an incredible device so quickly and realizing she strongly wants to continue working with him. Marceau looks at Darcy in silent admiration, thinking how incredibly rare it is to find someone so remarkably skilled. The two of them walk side by side down a grand, sunlit hallway, their footsteps echoing softly through the elegant mansion. Walking behind Marceau, Darcy silently reflects on his secret plans, thinking that soon he will be able to escape the palace and the emperor who constantly exploits him. Darcy compares his situation to that of another prince, thinking that while he could live publicly if he revealed his royal identity, he refuses to waste his precious time living a life bound by duty. As they walk down the bright corridor, Darcy thinks to himself that if he can just get through his birthday this year, he will finally achieve his freedom. A beautiful rainbow shines across a clear blue sky, mirroring Darcy's resolve that he will no longer be held back by anything. A grim memory of a blood-stained knight in armor riding a horse flashes by as Darcy resolves to repent for the heavy sins he has committed in his past. Darcy smirks to himself as he walks behind Marceau, deciding that until his escape he will pass the time by learning more about this unusual woman who wants to quarantine. Looking around the luxurious hallway, Darcy silently marvels at the sheer opulence of the Étoile mansion, wondering just how much wealth was poured into building such a fancy place. Marceau opens a large wooden door with a soft creak, introducing the room as her designated theater room. They step into a massive, sparsely decorated bedroom, and Darcy looks around in surprise, commenting on how surprisingly empty the room is. Looking slightly amused and bewildered, Darcy smiles wryly as he remarks on how bare and vacant the space actually is. Darcy wonders what there is to even do in such an empty room, while Marceau excitedly points out that they now have his newly completed enchanted device. Marceau clicks the camera, sending a brilliant beam of light projecting onto the wall like a modern movie screen, and Darcy proudly smiles, calling the invention a piece of cake. Curious about her routine, Darcy asks what she usually does in this room alone, and Marceau explains that she typically just lies down and listens to music. Marceau eagerly lists her favorite pastimes, explaining that she plans to record plays to watch, read books, and indulge in snacks, all from the comfort of her room. Darcy looks completely dumbfounded, pointing out in disbelief that she plans to isolate herself in her room just to do such simple things, while Marceau nods in agreement. Over a cute cat pattern background, Darcy asks why she doesn't just go outside, but Marceau simply replies that she likes being alone, leaving him thoroughly puzzled. Darcy crosses his arms and stares at Marceau with a look of utter perplexity, while Marceau remains silent under his intense gaze. Walking across the wooden floor, Marceau tells Darcy that she doesn't expect everyone to understand right away and offers to demonstrate her peaceful routine. Standing by the window, Marceau begins drawing the heavy curtains and requests that Darcy lie down on the sofa to experience it for himself. Darcy flops comfortably onto the sofa, curious to see what kind of demonstration Marceau has prepared for him. Lying on his back, Darcy stares up with his striking blue eyes, waiting quietly as the room begins to dim. Marceau stands by the window, casting a warm and gentle smile back toward Darcy as she prepares to block out the sunlight. Marceau pulls the massive curtains completely shut, explaining that her absolute favorite times of the day are midnight, the hours leading up to dawn, and dawn itself. The room plunges into a cozy darkness as magical music notes float gracefully through the air, surrounding a resting Darcy on the sofa. Darcy closes his eyes, relaxing as he listens to the soothing melody drifting through the quiet room. Feeling the deep peace of the room, Darcy notes how gentle the music is, while Marceau softly asks him what he thinks of the pleasant atmosphere. Marceau suddenly springs onto her bed and lies down flat, cheerfully declaring that their only task now is to space out and listen to the music, leaving a stunned Darcy asking, "Wait, that's it?" Darcy sits up slightly and chuckles, admitting that this peaceful relaxation is vastly different from the grim confinement he had envisioned. Lying comfortably on her back, Marceau begins to explain her perspective, starting to say, "Sometimes I just..." Darcy watches her in silent fascination as magical music notes drift through the serene, dimly lit bedroom. Marceau continues explaining her quiet joy, sharing that she loves to spend peaceful, uninterrupted time with herself like this. Floating music notes fill the quiet space as Marceau reflects on the necessity of giving herself the room to rest and recover whenever she is completely worn out. Looking down at her with a gentle, soft smile, Darcy stares at Marceau, deeply touched by her simple but profound way of finding peace. Darcy asks Marceau what more she could possibly need since she already has everything as the only daughter of Marquis Etoile, but Marceau softly replies that she is still a human being who needs her own space. Reflecting on her past social struggles, Marceau thinks about how relationships always pan out differently than she hopes, admitting that at times she simply needs to get away from it all. Looking at her with his sharp blue eyes, Darcy tells Marceau that she gets tired because she worries too much about what other people think, advising her to simply stop thinking about it. Marceau closes her eyes and gives a gentle, weary smile, finding comfort in Darcy's direct but surprisingly comforting words. Pulling the heavy curtains slightly back to let in a sliver of sunlight, Darcy asks Marceau what kind of enchanted device she would like him to make next, prompting her to eagerly reply. Standing in her empty bedroom, Marceau excitedly gestures and explains that she wants a device to enlarge the screen to fill up the whole wall, leaving Darcy looking highly skeptical. Surrounded by beautiful white roses, Marceau brightly explains that she wants the entire wall to become a massive projection screen, while Darcy stares at her with a calm, analytical expression. Darcy confidently promises to meet her in the theater room in 2 weeks, and when Marceau asks if it will be too difficult to build, he proudly boasts that he can make anything. Standing alone in her room, Marceau lets out a heavy sigh, mentally preparing herself for a difficult meeting that she can no longer avoid. Looking resolute and slightly tense, Marceau tells herself that the dreaded time has finally come to face her social circle. As Marceau steps outside into the bright, sunny garden, a cheerful voice suddenly calls out her name, cutting through her anxious thoughts. Surrounded by a vibrant aura of bright yellow flowers, a beautiful blonde girl flanked by 2 handsome young men eagerly runs toward Marceau, thanking her for the invitation. Marceau smiles politely as she welcomes her guests, but internally she resolves that today is the day she will finally put an end to this awful relationship. Sitting in the elegant drawing room, the blonde girl happily expresses how worried she was after hearing that Marceau hadn't stepped foot out of her house for quite some time. Marceau calmly explains that she simply hasn't been feeling very well lately, prompting the blonde girl to gasp in shock and ask if she is suffering from a serious illness. Sitting beside her, one of the young men looks over at Marceau with a concerned expression, asking if she is truly feeling unwell. Marceau remains completely silent under their gaze, her expression solemn as she observes their seemingly caring reactions. Looking at her blonde guest, Marceau reflects that Lejuan is genuinely worried about her, noting that she is indeed a kind-hearted heroine who reaches out to everyone. Marceau recalls a past memory of her and Lejuan holding hands happily in front of a grand fountain, showcasing their close bond. A soft clinking sound echoes through the quiet drawing room as Marceau gently places her teacup back down onto the saucer. Taking a deep breath, Marceau firmly announces that the true reason she invited them all over today is to let them know she will no longer be seeing Lady Legon in the future. The guests look at her in stunned silence, and when Lejuan asks why, Marceau calmly replies that she has realized she made too many mistakes in their relationship. Sipping her tea, Marceau claims she didn't realize it was wrong to associate with Lejuan in the first place, adding that she will quietly reflect on her farts while quarantining in her mansion. Clutching her hands to her chest in distress, a wide-eyed Lejuan insists that Marceau didn't do anything wrong at all. Staring at Lejean with a cold, piercing gaze, Marceau silently tells herself that even if Lejean says that, absolutely nothing has changed. Marceau bitterly wonders if Lejuan was truly oblivious to the harsh criticisms Marceau faced simply for standing by her side, concluding that there is absolutely no way she didn't know. Looking at Lejean smiling happily beside her handsome companions, Marceau remembers how Lejean always avoided dealing with the painful situations her presence caused. In her memories, Lejuan is always surrounded by adoration and laughter, while Marceau is left standing isolated and forgotten in the distant background. Under a dark, gloomy background, Marceau reflects that while it isn't a crime to be avoidant, the consequences are still incredibly heavy. Looking at them with complete emotional exhaustion, Marceau firmly decides that since she is the one suffering, she will be the one to leave. Furious, the hot-tempered male lead stands up and yells, demanding to know how she dares to give orders to Leguan, but Marceau calmly responds that she is simply trying to keep her distance. Smiling serenely, Marceau reassures them that they won't have to see her at any social events either, promising to remain completely isolated just as she has been lately. As a tense silence falls over the room, the blonde male lead crosses his arms and skeptically asks if Marceau truly expects them to believe her sudden declaration. Marceau glances sideways, sweating slightly as she wonders why Ryan, the other young man, is staying so unusually quiet, while a tense silence hangs in the air. Crying out that she truly believed they were friends, a weeping Lejuan suddenly dashes out of the room, prompting the angry male lead to yell her name in panic. As the angry male lead immediately runs after the crying heroine, Marceau calmly watches them go, thinking to herself that a male lead always ought to chase after her. The handsome blonde prince remains seated, staring at Marceau with a cold, calculating look, refusing to join the chase. Looking directly at Marceau with a stern and suspicious expression, the blonde prince tells her coldly that people do not change that easily. Shrugging nonchalantly, Marceau mockingly reminds him that she is simply doing what he wanted, staying home since he previously declared she isn't allowed to do anything anyway. Marceau reasons that since most of the hardships Lejuan faced were supposedly caused by her, exiting the plot will naturally allow Ryan to spend more peaceful time with Lejuan. Staring at the blonde prince's stern face, Marceau cynically wonders if he will be able to avoid conflict with Leguan given his own difficult personality. Offering a beautiful but sharp smile, Marceau silently wishes that His Highness will suffer just as much as she has in this complicated web of relationships. As her maid gently combs through her long, wavy purple hair, Marceau happily thinks to herself that the simpler one's social life is, the better. Looking stunning in a gorgeous red off-the-shoulder gown, Marceau stands before the mirror, thrilled that the day has finally arrived for her to meet the actors. Turning to her loyal maid, a smiling Marceau warmly thanks Letty for helping her get beautifully dressed for the big event. As Marceau reaches for her bag, she casually mentions that she suspects there is a mole around them, causing Letty to flinch in absolute shock and ask if the spy is inside their mansion. Looking thoughtful, Marceau explains that Ryan has been reacting suspiciously fast to her every move and asks Letty to quietly look into the matter. Letty agrees to investigate as Marceau wraps her lace-gloved hand around the sleek, modern camera device Darcy built, asking if they should get going. A soft creak echoes as a door opens, and the gathered crowd begins to murmur with excitement and curiosity as they wait for the lady of the house. Stepping elegantly through the double doors with Letty by her side, Marceau warmly greets the gathered crowd with a polite, "Hello, everyone." Looking radiant in her off-the-shoulder red gown and delicate lace gloves, Marceau welcomes her guests with a stunning, graceful smile. Petal, the round and friendly playwright, introduces himself with a polite bow, expressing his absolute pleasure at meeting Lady Marceau. Welcoming him warmly, Marceau praises Petal's potential to write incredible plays, leaving the playwright completely starstruck and honored by her kind words. Marceau casually glances over at the rest of her guests with a calm, calculating expression. Observing the actors gathered on the stage, Marceau silently notes that they must have already heard the unsavory rumors surrounding her. Watching two of the actors on stage, Marceau reflects that since they still decided to show up, they either do not care about the rumors at all, or, as she observes the nervous-looking actors, they simply need the money. Marceau knows that since she is offering 10 times the highest standard pay in the industry, working for the infamous Villainess is a risk they are willing to take. On stage, the actors quietly whisper among themselves, wondering if there is a catch to such an incredibly generous offer. Horrified, they imagine Marceau as a tyrannical villainess forcing them into bizarre and humiliating situations, their faces turning pale with anxiety. Suddenly, a dramatic gasp echoes through the room as Marceau raises a sleek, glistening device high into the air. Smiling warmly, Marceau reassures them, explaining that she brought them all together today because she wants to record their performance with her new device. Stunned, the actors can only stare in silent, bewildered confusion at her sudden announcement. Ledro, the handsome blonde main lead of the play and the most popular actor among the noble ladies, steps forward to question her about the recording device. Marceau looks at Ledro, ready to explain her plan. Looking at the blonde actor, Marceau inwardly sighs, thinking that Darcy's incredible looks have raised her standards far too high for anyone else to compare. Ledro asks Marceau if she could explain what recording actually means, prompting a sheepish reaction from her as she prepares to explain. Holding the sleek camera in her lace-covered hands, Marceau explains that she intends to preserve their theatrical performances inside this enchanted device. With a bright, enthusiastic smile, Marceau eagerly asks the actors if they are ready to begin the recording. Looking through the camera's viewfinder, Marceau focuses on Ledro, who looks slightly tense and self-conscious under the lens. Ledro nervously asks if he should look directly at the lens, and Marceau encourages the group to try speaking so she can test the device. Looking through the viewfinder, the other actors awkwardly offer their greetings, saying hello and howdy with stiff expressions. The actors sit in the audience chairs, whispering in confusion about how this strange device could possibly work. Marceau wears a confident, knowing smile as she prepares to reveal the true power of her magic projection device. Marceau asks everyone to look toward the wall as the device begins to flicker and project a beam of light. The actors gasp in utter astonishment as the bright projection suddenly appears on the wall. The actors watch in awe as a perfect projection of their earlier actions plays on the wall, while Marceau proudly explains that they can now record and review their own performances. Looking serious, Marceau reassures them that she designed the magical tool herself, warning them that doubting her creations is equivalent to doubting her. Marceau reflects on the necessity of being clear from the start, knowing that magical devices carry a dark and controversial reputation in their society. She explains that this enchanted tool is designed to perfectly capture and keepsake their performances. A tense, stunned silence falls over the room as the actors continue to watch their recorded video play on the wall. Seeing their recording, the actors begin to relax and tease each other, laughing at how incredibly stiff and awkward they looked on screen. Ledro and the others stare in fascination, amazed by how natural the magic feels without any weird or uncomfortable sensations. With a gentle but firm smile, Marceau asks the actors if they are comfortable with continuing to record their rehearsal. The actors readily nod in agreement, completely won over by the incredible technology. Petal runs up to Marceau holding his script, eagerly wanting to ask her a question before they officially begin the rehearsal. Petal explains that their play, The Love Story of the Century of a Girl and a Wizard, features a wizard protagonist, but notes that wizards have an incredibly poor reputation. Petal nervously asks if it is truly all right to perform such a story, while Marceau rests her chin on her hand, reflecting deeply on the word wizards. Marceau recalls the history of wizards, gifted individuals born with magical powers who truly deserved praise for their incredible talents. However, their ambition grew as they sought greater respect and power, striving to reach the very top of society. To control them, the royal family spread malicious rumors painting wizards as dangerous, forcing some to submit to the crown while others vanished into hiding. Looking thoughtful, Marceau remembers that the rebellion led to a massive war, which allowed the male lead, Ryan, to successfully debut by leading the victory. She bitterly notes the irony that Ryan's victory was actually achieved through the magical tools of the very wizards who had submitted to the royal court. Trembling with anxiety, Petal worries that having a wizard as the lead actor will be far too controversial and suggests changing the script. Marceau reassures the trembling playwright, telling him that she is perfectly fine with it and wants him to proceed with the original script, bringing him to tears of gratitude. Leaning in with a mischievous grin, Marceau shares some of her own dramatic ideas for future plays, leaving a flustered Petal weeping tears of joy and eagerness. Overjoyed and energized, Petal calls out to the cast, enthusiastically declaring that it is time to get started. In character, Ledro wears a dark wizard hood, leaning close to the female lead with an intense, dramatic expression as the scene begins. Under the bright lights, the actors perform their roles on stage, with Ledro portraying the powerful wizard alongside his companions. Ledro delivers a powerful, emotional performance on stage, his expression intense as the dramatic scene reaches its peak. Marceau's pink eyes widen in complete surprise as she reacts to an unexpected moment during the rehearsal. Under the warm stage lights, the three actors join hands and bow deeply to mark the end of their performance. Clapping her hands with a bright smile, Marceau enthusiastically calls out "Bravi" to praise the cast's incredible effort. Marceau softly reflects to herself that pouring one's heart and soul into something is truly a beautiful sight to behold. As Marceau eagerly expresses how glad she is to have recorded the rehearsal, Ledro politely steps forward to speak with her. Ledro hesitantly asks Marceau if it would be all right for them to watch the recording together with her. Although Marceau readily agrees that they can watch it, she curiously asks them what prompted this request. Nodding earnestly, Ledro explains that watching the footage is a perfect opportunity for them to review their acting and learn from it. Hearing this, Petal's eyes light up with immense excitement as he happily exclaims, "Great, this is absolutely great!" As the actors look on in amusement, Petal frantically kneels on the floor and scribbles down notes, crying out that his creative inspiration is flowing. Looking at the projection, Ledro realizes that his performance needs to be far more expressive and resolves to make his movements more deliberate in the scene. The brown-haired actor smiles in absolute awe, whispering to Ledro about how incredibly useful this technology is for their growth. Watching them discuss their craft, Marceau smiles warmly, thinking that letting them use the device is indeed the best way to support them. In a flashback, Marceau recalls allowing them to experience the incredible benefits of her enchanted camera while they peeked in astonishment. Suddenly, a loud voice calls out from across the room, echoing with great hope, "Lady Marceau!" Petal hesitantly asks if they could please watch their next play as well, knowing that the magical device must be astronomically expensive. As the actors nervously assure her they would completely understand if she declines, Marceau reflects on how incredibly expensive magical tools are to commoners. Looking closely at their anxious, pleading expressions, Marceau considers their request in thoughtful silence. Ledro and Petal stand together in tense silence, nervously awaiting her final decision with sweat on their brows. Marceau sadly reflects that despite all her acts of charity, public opinion of her in society has never truly changed. She turns her head slightly, realizing that conventional goodwill has never been enough to fix her reputation as a villainess. Shocking everyone in the room, Marceau casually tells them to use this device for their practice, reassuring them that she can easily build another one. Gently resting her lace-gloved hand on the camera, Marceau adds that she will keep the rehearsal hall open for them until 10 o'clock every night. Stunned by her incredible kindness, Petal and Ledro stutteringly plead to at least pay a small fee or offer something in return. Resting her chin on her hand with a gorgeous smile, Marceau tells them to simply pay her back by putting on a spectacular play. Ledro gazes intensely at Marceau's back as she turns to walk away, a deep sense of admiration and warmth blooming in his heart. Flushed bright red, Ledro touches his face as his heart races, completely captivated by her beauty and kindness. As dusk falls gracefully over the grand estate, a voice calls out to Marceau from the twilight-lit gardens. Kneeling formally on one knee before her, Ledro asks how he could ever repay her, while Marceau silently notes that his acting was indeed the best of the group. Gently patting his shoulder with her lace-gloved hand, Marceau praises his performance, telling him his emotional delivery was as fluid as water. Withdrawing her hand with a warm smile, Marceau tells Ledro that he can easily repay her just by continuing to do such excellent work. Holding her hand gently with a soft blush, Ledro smiles and replies, "Yes, my lady, I hope you will come see us often." Puzzled by his uncharacteristically gentle and soft demeanor, Marceau blinks in slight confusion. Later that evening at a quiet tavern, Ledro confidently declares to his fellow actors that the rumors about Lady Marceau are completely wrong. His companion looks thoroughly confused and questions why Ledro is defending her when he originally took the job solely for the money, leaving the younger actor surprised. The older actor reveals that Ledro was desperate for money because he had proudly rejected an offer to become a wealthy noblewoman's private male mistress. As they grab some food, the younger actor gasps, "A male mistress?" while his friend explains how rich ladies often try to keep handsome lead actors all to themselves. He notes that since Ledro is usually completely grossed out by noblewomen, he has never seen him bring up a highborn lady first before. Ledro gazes down at his table and softly explains that Lady Marceau was the first noblewoman to truly look at his acting rather than just his appearance. Remembering her warm, kind expression, Ledros smiles as he thinks about how Lady Marso looked at him for who he truly is. Grinning mischievously, his friend teases him, saying it sounds like he would gladly volunteer to be her male mistress instead. Ledros simply rests his chin on his hand, smiling softly to himself as he gets lost in pleasant thoughts of Marso. Stunned by Ledros' silent, happy expression, his friend gasps in disbelief, asking if he is actually serious. The younger actor points out that every actor who has worked at the mansion lately has come out with vastly improved skills. Ledros smiles warmly as the younger actor curiously asks if Lady Marso has been giving them some sort of special training. Back in her study, Marso explains to Letty that she included strict confidentiality terms in the contracts to terminate their work if anyone talks about the recording device. Looking highly focused and determined, Marso notes to herself that her theater project is progressing incredibly smoothly. Marso happily reflects that they have already recorded 3 plays with perfected skills, while Letty silently notes how unusually good her lady's mood is. Turning to her maid with a pleasant smile, Marso asks Letty if she has discovered anything new regarding her investigation. Marso's expression turns deadly serious as she asks for updates on the investigation regarding Ryan. Letty smiles nervously as she reports to Marso that she was unable to find much useful information during her investigation. Marso assures Letty that it is perfectly fine and thanks her for looking into the matter, wondering to herself if she was simply being overly sensitive, when Letty suddenly remembers something else. Letty hands a beautifully sealed envelope adorned with a dried white flower to Marso, mentioning that Ledro asked her to deliver it. Marso stares in surprise at the letter in her hands as Letty politely takes her leave, shutting the door behind her. Marso wonders what Ledro could possibly want to say to her on a personal level before gently setting the letter down on the table to focus on her current guest. Suddenly, delicate white flower petals drift through the air as Marso turns around in surprise, hearing Darcy call out her name. Sitting across the spacious, elegant room, Darcy smirks and comments that he values punctuality. Leaning forward with a mischievous smile, Darcy curiously asks Marso what she is hiding behind her back. Flinching nervously, Marso quickly hides the letter and explains that it is just a letter from one of the actors whom she allowed to borrow the recording device. As Darcy reaches for his teacup, he questions her choice of words, prompting Marso to clarify that she decided to name the magical device he built for her. Darcy notes that everyone seems to think her magical device is absolutely incredible. Darcy mutters quietly to himself, deeply concerned that it could be highly problematic if word of his incredible magical powers gets out. When Marso asks him what he just said, Darcy quickly brushes it off as nothing and changes the subject. Darcy holds out a black camera lens-like device, explaining that attaching this new tool to the recorder will make the projection screen much larger. Marso gazes at the device in absolute astonishment, amazed that Darcy was able to create such a perfect mechanism based solely on her basic descriptions. Marso looks deeply puzzled as she wonders how someone with such incredible genius-level talent was never once mentioned in the original story's plot. She recalls the main characters of the story, thinking that Darcy should have been connected to them, but then remembers a dark and tragic possibility where he might have met an early tragic end. Shaking off her grim thoughts, Marso smiles and reasons that he was likely left out of the plot simply because he is a merchant before calling out his name. Marso asks Darcy to build her another recorder, explaining that she wants to let the actors keep using the current one while putting a new one in the theater room. Darcy taps his fingers on the table in silence before telling her that he has a very serious question to ask. Darcy gazes intensely at Marso in the dim light of the study and simply asks her, why? Darcy asks why she goes so far out of her way to help the actors when they are perfectly capable of taking care of themselves, advising her to use her magical tools for her own benefit. Leaning closer, Darcy firmly tells her that he is only warning her not to do anything foolish. Darcy's expression softens with worry as he gently warns Marso that he doesn't want her to get hurt again. Marso stands completely frozen, her eyes wide and her cheeks flushing a light pink at his sudden intense concern. In a warm flashback, Marso remembers a quiet night in the library where Darcy lounges on the sofa, realizing that he has always been there to support her. Back in the present, Marso clears her throat nervously and assures him that she expects nothing in return, insisting she only wants the actors to perform well in the play. Darcy reaches out and gently grasps her hands, softly pointing out that she always claims she wants nothing in return. Surrounded by a warm, romantic aura of white roses, Darcy holds her hands close and looks deeply into her eyes. In a comical moment, Marso instantly pulls her hands back in disgust, demanding to know why he is holding them, while a smug Darcy shrugs and says he has no idea. Marso explains that she never actually interacts with the actors directly anymore, only visiting the theater after their daily practice has completely finished. Darcy smiles warmly at her explanation, looking incredibly pleased. Darcy turns around and walks toward the window, basking in the warm sunlight of the study. Holding her burning face in her hand, Marceau tries to convince herself that she is overreacting, wondering why on earth she's blushing so much. Darcy stops walking and looks back at her in silence with a gentle, soft gaze. Darcy asks if there is any other device she needs him to build, explaining that he will be extremely busy soon and won't be able to visit her estate for a while. In a cute chibi moment, Marceau asks if his business is doing well, and Darcy laughs heartily, admitting that it is a mix of good and bad things. Marceau peers through her fingers like a camera frame, thoughtfully brainstorming her next major project. Framing Darcy's handsome figure with her hands, Marceau excitedly declares that she wants a magical tool capable of capturing and documenting single moments in time. Darcy instantly understands her request, noting that creating a tool to capture still images from a recording will actually be much easier than his last project. Marceau's cheeks flush with excitement as she comically envisions showering Darcy, whom she imagines as a magical blue helper holding precious crystals, with an absolute fortune of arcanium stones. Turning back to her, Darcy curiously asks if she isn't even a little bit interested to know when he will finally return. Walking closer, Marceau asks when he expects to be back, only for Darcy to tease her by saying he doesn't actually know. As Darcy walks toward the door, he casually suggests they head to the theater, leaving a flustered Marceau wondering why he made her ask in the first place. Marceau looks at him with a slightly startled and reflective expression, caught off guard by his playful attitude. Darcy turns his head over his shoulder and flashes her a brilliant, dazzling smile that leaves her completely breathless. A clicking sound echoes through the hall as Marceau holds her newly designed camera, thinking to herself that they are finally alone. Standing on the high balcony of the empty theater with her camera set up on a tripod, Marceau watches Darcy walk away, telling herself she must focus on testing the device. Gazing down at the stage, Marceau's eyes fill with a quiet, bittersweet longing as she realizes she won't be seeing him again for a very long time. Under a single bright spotlight in the center of the dark, completely empty theater, Marceau stands in solemn silence, surrounded by rows of vacant chairs. Gazing with an intense and captivating presence, Darcy smiles confidently as a powerful, magical aura surrounds his striking appearance. Looking back at the empty seats of the quiet theater, Marceau wonders if his secretive nature and desire to remain hidden is connected to something deeper. Watching the actors perform on the stage, she ponders whether the mystery surrounding Darcy is related to the life he has led as a wizard. Shaking off her thoughts, Marceau decides it is best not to meddle in other people's business as she walks down the sunlit hallway of her estate. As her hand reaches out to turn the golden handle of the door, Marceau silently notes that she simply wants to get along with him. Opening the door, she is greeted by a smiling Darcy holding a book who casually says, "Hey." Marceau stands completely frozen, her cheeks flushing a light pink as she looks at his dazzling smile in surprise. Darcy walks closer, holding up the book and curiously asking if she enjoys reading these types of novels, to which she quietly confirms she does. Smiling gently, Darcy notes his surprise that she enjoys romance novels given her dislike of being around people, but Marceau admits she can still enjoy the stories themselves. She explains that reading about the slow process of two people growing close enough to fully depend on each other always makes her feel better. Looking down with a warm, gentle smile, Marceau clutches her hand close to her chest as she thinks about the comfort of those stories. Darcy looks down at the book in his hand, smiling softly as he comments that she must have a remarkably vivid imagination to feel better just from reading about it. In a cute chibi moment, Marceau points out his cruel tone of voice, prompting a smug Darcy to boast that his attitude is exactly what makes him so charming. Sitting on the sofa, Marceau looks up at him and curiously asks if he has ever loved anyone before. Darcy looks out towards the bright window and quietly replies that he has never loved anyone, having never had the chance to do so. Marceau's eyes widen in surprise and empathy as she hears his quiet confession. She asks where he lives, noting that people would surely swarm him in the streets, but Darcy explains that he dislikes crowds and is quite like her, though he pauses to clarify his actual situation. Turning his back to her in a dark, somber memory, Darcy admits that his life is actually more like that of a slave. Stunned, Marceau asks what he means as Darcy explains that he spends almost all of his time secluded in his room and rarely ever comes out. Leaning in close to look directly into her eyes, Darcy softly reveals that the reason he likes being around her is because she reminds him of his own situation. Darcy steps back and smiles gently, telling her that is simply how his life has always been, but assuring her that it is perfectly fine. Looking at her with a soft, affectionate gaze, Darcy's expression is full of warmth and quiet understanding. In a quiet, nostalgic moment, Marceau remembers their time together in the library, realizing how much they have shared. Watching his figure walk away under a bright blue sky filled with flying birds, Marceau reflects on how Darcy's creation of the enchanted devices was his subtle way of letting her know a little more about himself. Looking down with a heavy heart, Marceau sadly realizes that their next meeting might very well be the last time she ever sees him. Suddenly, Darcy's voice cuts through the quiet room, asking what she is thinking so deeply about and suggesting they play the movie. The magical projection flickers to life, showing a colorful scene of actors performing a play on the screen. Hugging her pillow tightly in bed, Marceau happily notes how nice and large the new projection screen is, finding the wizard's story highly enjoyable even upon rewatching. She glances over, wondering if Darcy is enjoying the projection as much as she is, while he rests his chin on his hand in quiet contemplation. Darcy turns his head toward her, blinking in surprise as he asks what. Flustered, Marceau tells him he seemed unusually focused tonight, while Darcy notes that she put a tremendous amount of effort into getting the play recorded. Darcy looks away thoughtfully, critiquing the play by saying the spells and swordplay are far too elaborate, as he personally prefers swift and concise battles. Resting on her bed, Marceau smiles and points out that he sounds like someone who has fought in a lot of real battles. Her smile fades as a dark realization hits her, wondering if the reason this is his last visit is because he is heading into a dangerous battle. A horrific, tragic vision flashes through Marceau's mind of Darcy lying face down, lifeless on a blood-stained ground. Gasps of shock escape Marceau as she flinches in absolute terror at the grim possibility of his tragic fate. Clutching her bedsheets in high anxiety, Marceau desperately searches her memories of the original novel, frustrated that the plot provides no information to help protect Darcy. Bolting upright in her bed, Marceau looks at Darcy with intense determination and asks if he is capable of building a specific defensive tool. As night falls over the magnificent estate, Darcy announces that he must head out, and Marceau politely asks if he enjoyed watching the play. Darcy adjusts his collar and admits it wasn't bad, adding that her idea for a new device was quite interesting, comparing it to a portable cannon. Marceau smiles warmly, confident that she can successfully create the defensive device using arcanium stones to keep him safe. Darcy suddenly freezes in surprise, remembering something important, and tells her that she should read the personal letter she received earlier. Puzzled, Marceau asks what letter he is talking about, and Darcy insists it is the one from the lead actor, teasingly asking her to read it out loud because he is curious. Surrounded by a playful floral aura, Darcy mischievously offers to build her new recorder completely for free if she reads it, but Marceau flatly refuses, saying she has plenty of money. Marceau gazes ahead with a quiet, serious expression, processing his words in silence. Her eyes narrow with slight suspicion as she wonders why he is acting so teasingly familiar, noting that his behavior is just like last time. Standing up and swallowing her nervousness, Marceau tells Darcy to stop saying such things, warning him that people might think he is actually into her. Darcy smirks playfully and acts offended that she took it that way, while Marceau points a finger at him, insisting that anyone would interpret his actions that way. Marceau stands completely stunned as Darcy steps closer, staring intensely into her eyes and asking her if that is what she secretly wants. Flustered, Marceau gasps in disbelief while a smug Darcy poses handsomely amidst a beautiful background of blooming roses, confidently declaring that he already knows he is her exact type. Marceau asks in surprise how he could possibly know that, to which Darcy smoothly replies that he would have to be a fool not to notice from the way she looks at him. Smiling handsomely before a background of blooming roses, Darcy asks if she would actually like for him to be into her. Without hesitation, Marceau looks directly at him and flatly says no. As Darcy asks why not, Marceau playfully pushes him away, explaining that she simply cannot imagine him being in love with just one person. Gazing at the library bookshelf, Marceau quietly agrees with her own thought, reflecting that love is indeed not the most pleasant thing. When Marceau points out that he previously claimed to have never been in love, Darcy explains that he has simply seen many others who were. Darcy explains that, in his experience, lovers are all the same. They hold hands, hug, and kiss each other constantly just so they can't look at anyone else. Looking down with a quiet, bittersweet smile, Darcy admits that he isn't entirely sure if those actions represent true love. Darcy tells her that hearing her say those things makes him feel a bit competitive, leaving Marceau completely puzzled as she asks what he means. Leaning in close and gently taking her hand, Darcy smiles warmly as he asks her directly if she wants him to like her. Marceau's eyes widen and her cheeks flush a deep pink as she stares at him in breathless surprise, completely caught off guard by his sudden closeness. Telling herself that she shouldn't get her hopes up, Marceau tries to stay grounded as she looks at him. Looking down nervously and clutching her hands close, Marceau hesitates before telling him to just forget about it. Gently releasing her hand, Darcy tells her not to strain herself trying to find an answer, adding that he will see her again in 2 weeks. As Darcy waves goodbye and heads out, Marceau sighs to herself, noting that he always does exactly as he pleases right until the very end. Left alone in the quiet room, Marceau gazes ahead with a serious, contemplative expression as she processes everything that just happened. Watching the dark, empty space, Marceau wonders why Darcy never appeared in the original plot of the novel, anxiously questioning if it was because he was already dead. Standing alone in her spacious bedroom, Marceau thoughtfully mumbles the word wizard to herself as she pieces together the clues. Staring thoughtfully, she realizes that there is actually something highly unusual and inconsistent about the novel's original plot. She recalls that Emperor QS personally fought in the battles against the wizards every single time, earning widespread admiration for his immense bravery in the face of danger. In a memory, Prince Ryan tells a worried Lejuan that he will return safely from the front lines. Resting her chin on her hand, Marceau concentrates deeply, realizing that the timing of these events simply doesn't line up. She notes that Ryan never participated in the battles, even when the Emperor did, which makes no sense since Ryan didn't need further training, nor was the Emperor the caring type to protect his son. A striking realization dawns on Marceau as she concludes that the Emperor and the Prince were actively avoiding fighting on the battlefield at the same time. Thinking back to Darcy's warm smile and gentle touch, Marceau's heart swells with a quiet affection. Looking down with a heavy heart, Marceau softly admits to herself that she has somehow ended up getting deeply attached to him. Looking down at her shoes on the wooden floor, she hesitates as a quiet but lingers in her mind. Stepping through the grand double doors of her room, Marceau tells herself that she isn't asking for anything more than his safety. In the royal throne room, Emperor Kais announces that he is going to hunt wizards for 2 weeks and orders Ryan to stay behind and tend to the palace, to which Ryan obediently bows. Keeping his head low, Ryan's eyes burn with quiet resentment as he wonders how much longer he must sit and watch, frustrated that the Emperor never lets him address key national issues. Emperor Kais commands Ryan to lift his head, promising to grant him Sciron Castle once the mission is complete, and adding that the coronation ceremony will take place soon. Ryan is visibly shocked by the mention of Sciron Castle, a rundown, heavily guarded fortress rumored to be the horrific place where the Emperor imprisons and tortures wizards. Ryan anxiously wonders why the Emperor would grant him such a place, dreading the possibility of being entrusted with such dark and cruel responsibilities. Quickly hiding his concern, Ryan smiles politely and thanks the Emperor for his trust, resolving to seize this coronation opportunity. Leaning forward slightly, the Emperor continues speaking with a cold, calculating expression. The Emperor inquires about the daughter of Étoile, noting he has received reports that she has been laying low at her estate. The Emperor points out that her family owns 2 lucrative arcanium mines, stating that a marriage alliance would allow the Empire to completely dominate the arcanium supply, causing Ryan to flinch in shock. When Ryan protests that they already have enough arcanium, the Emperor forcefully slams his fist, declaring that they need more and demanding clear judgment. Looking directly at his frustrated son, the Emperor coldly states that he trusts Ryan will do what is absolutely essential for the royal family. Emperor Kais issues a final, non-negotiable command for Ryan to proceed with the engagement to Lady Étoile. Surrounded by a border of blue roses, a memory shows Ryan standing on a peaceful balcony with his silver-haired mistress, Germaine, whom he secretly brought in after the Empress passed away. But their peaceful days ended tragically when his beloved Germaine died, marking the dark turning point when the Emperor's descent into senseless violence began. Following her death, the Emperor's reign turned into a nightmare of senseless massacres and escalating, excessively cruel punishments. Walking down the sunlit palace corridor, Ryan firmly resolves that he cannot get engaged to Lady Étoile, knowing he must avoid it at all costs for the sake of Lejuan. Realizing he only has 2 weeks, Ryan weighs his 2 options, either convince the Emperor of the benefits of marrying Lejuan, or expose Marceau Étoile's fatal flaws, such as the rumor of her having a male mistress. Ryan decides he must activate the spy he planted in advance, hoping that Marceau will suffer just as much as he has. Looking ahead with intense determination, Ryan vows to eliminate any villain standing in their way for the sake of his and Leguan's happiness. Back at the estate, Marceau happily takes a large, satisfying bite of a delicious slice of strawberry shortcake. Surrounded by a joyful aura, Marceau sits on her comfortable sofa eating cake, surrounded by 3 personal pastry chefs, declaring that this is true happiness. As the chef proudly presents his signature tiramisu from Liberté, Marceau playfully feeds one of her staff in a cute chibi moment, realizing she can easily bypass long dessert lines by simply hiring her own personal pâtissier. Marceau decides to stop worrying about the chaotic events outside and resolves to simply enjoy the peaceful moment, no matter how small. Sitting at her table, surrounded by several delicious-looking cakes, Marceau happily contemplates what dessert she should eat next. Marceau's pleasant dessert time is suddenly interrupted when she is informed that Lady Lejuan has arrived at her estate. Looking highly displeased, Marceau immediately tells her maid to ask Lejuan to leave, but the maid hesitantly explains that there's a problem. Before Marceau can stop her, Lejuan pushes past the panicking maids and bursts straight into the greenhouse, calling out Marceau's name. A quiet, sunlit view of the beautiful glass greenhouse roof where lush green ivy hangs peacefully from decorative pots. Marceau and Lejuan are seated across from each other at a small table in the spacious greenhouse, with a maid standing nearby as a tense silence falls over the room. Marceau turns her head away coldly, refusing to even look at Lejuan, while her maid stands by with a deeply worried expression on her face. Bending down, the maid whispers to Marceau that listening to Lejuan might actually end up being beneficial for her in the long run. Marceau notes with irritation that Lejuan barged into her private greenhouse without warning, while Lejuan begins her apology, stating she has been thinking a lot lately. As Lejuan clutches a yellow gift box and admits that she has made many mistakes, Marceau internally emphasizes that the greenhouse is her own personal space. Maintaining a polite but forced smile, Marceau bluntly asks Lejuan to leave, inwardly lamenting that all of her precious personal time has now vanished. A dramatic close-up of Lejuan's vibrant green eye as she reacts in shock to Marceau's cold rejection. Looking down with a sad, pleading expression, Lejuan begs Marceau not to hate her. Marceau looks back at Lejuan with a completely blank, silent, and unimpressed expression, refusing to be easily swayed by her tears. Marceau quietly realizes that Lejuan is only desperate to reconcile because she has never experienced being disliked by anyone in her entire life except for Marceau. Marceau reflects that to someone like Lejuan, this conflict is like a tiny, glaring stain made on a pristine, all-white dress that she desperately wants to clean. Lejuan sadly admits that it simply doesn't feel good to hear that Marceau dislikes her. Marceau points out that Lejuan is only forcing a reconciliation to ease her own discomfort, which a flustered Lejuan quickly denies, claiming she genuinely missed Marceau just as much. Lejuan promises to be much more careful and considerate in the future, pleading with Marceau that they should try to get along just like they did before. Lejuan smiles beautifully and clasps her hands together, looking at Marceau with eager, hopeful eyes. Remembering the painful past where she stood isolated while Lejuan was surrounded by friends, Marceau bitterly realizes that Lejuan's idea of getting along was incredibly one-sided. Looking directly at her former friend, Marceau addresses Lejuan in a flat, serious tone. Lejuan looks up in surprise from across the table as Marceau speaks to her with sudden intensity. Marceau looks at Lejuan with a sharp, probing expression and asks her what she plans to do about Commander Kaizen. Caught completely off guard, Lejuan flushes a deep red and looks down in nervous silence, sweating as she avoids Marceau's eyes. Reaching across the table, Marceau calmly explains that she isn't saying Lejuan did anything wrong. Looking down at the yellow gift box, Marceau gently but firmly states that since their views on friendship are simply too different, it is best for them to part ways here. Marceau stands up and walks away without looking back, leaving a shocked Lejuan staring at her retreating figure. Desperate to salvage their bond, Lejuan grabs Marceau's arm with a tearful, flushed face and asks if things could change if she changes. Marceau looks back in surprise as Lejuan desperately asks if their relationship couldn't change along with her. A close-up of Lejuan's crying face with large tears streaming down her cheeks as she clings to Marceau. With a cold and final no, Marceau pulls her hand away, breaking Lejuan's desperate grip on her. Marceau turns back with a fierce, unwavering glare, declaring that she has already waited long enough. Bidding a final farewell, Marceau thanks Lejuan for the memories and turns to leave, leaving her crying in the background. Walking away through the grand greenhouse, Marceau resolves that there is absolutely no need for her to go back to a relationship that only hurts her. Exhausted from the emotional confrontation, Marceau lies down on her side on a dark plush sofa, staring blankly ahead. Fully collapsing onto the sofa, Marceau sighs deeply and admits to herself that she is completely spent. Looking up at the ceiling in deep contemplation, Marceau wonders if she would feel any better if she had just cried the way Lejuan did. Hearing a sudden noise, Marceau sits up on the sofa and wonders if her maid Letty has returned to the room. Sitting alone in the quiet room, Marceau grows suspicious as she wonders why the person outside the door isn't saying anything. Losing her patience, Marceau bursts through the door in frustration, demanding to know who keeps showing up at her door. Marceau stops in her tracks in surprise as she realizes the visitor isn't who she expected. She looks up in astonishment to find Ledros standing outside, holding a small purple gift box. Ledros stands before her with a warm, gentle smile and a light blush on his cheeks. Marceau wonders why he showed up so suddenly out of the blue, internally groaning that she is currently in no mood to talk to anyone. When Marceau asks what brings him here, Ledro warmly replies that he has something to give her. Ledro opens the box to reveal a beautiful flower-embroidered handkerchief, explaining that he and the theater staff prepared this small gift to thank her for letting them use her enchanted device. Touched by the unexpected gesture, Marceau's irritation instantly melts away as she softly asks if the entire staff got together to prepare this for her. Holding the beautiful handkerchief close, Marceau smiles warmly and thanks Ledro for the wonderful gift, humbly saying she didn't do much. Huh? Caught completely off guard, Marceau looks up in absolute shock as Ledro suddenly leans in close, leaving her utterly bewildered. Pushing him back, Marceau tells Ledro that she's fine and he should leave, but Ledro gently grabs her hand, insisting that he can be a good listener if something is bothering her. What is going on? As Marceau pulls her hand back in confusion, she anxiously wonders what on earth is going on with his sudden shift in behavior. Marceau questions Ledro's presence in her private greenhouse and asks him to leave, but Ledro softly replies that he simply wants to stay by her side. Ledro looks down with a heavily blushed, pleading expression, his eyes filled with a desperate longing as he speaks to her. I heard a rumor that you've accepted Ledro as your male mistress. Marceau suddenly recalls the rumor about her allegedly accepting Ledro as her male mistress, realizing the weight of the situation. Shivers run down Marceau's spine as she realizes with horror that the preposterous rumor might actually be unfolding right before her eyes. Ledro drops to one knee before her, humbly declaring that he would never dare to ask to be her official partner. Looking up at her with a deeply flushed face, Ledro confesses that his only wish is to remain by her side as her male mistress. Completely flabbergasted, Marceau internally panics, wondering why on earth he is proposing this and trying to figure out if he is acting or if he has genuinely lost his mind. Marceau reasons to herself that she and Ledro have barely spent any meaningful time together to warrant such intense feelings. She recalls that they have never once spent a single moment alone together, making his sudden declaration feel completely out of place. She realizes that the version of her Ledro is so deeply infatuated with is merely an idealized version existing solely in his own imagination. Marceau bittersweetly reflects that Ledro is no different from the others who project their own desires onto her, albeit with affection, noting his uninvited intrusion and physical forwardness. She notes with irritation how he acts entirely on his own whims, completely disregarding how she might actually feel about his advances. Clenching her skirt tightly, Marceau firmly and coldly states that she does not accept male mistresses under any circumstances. Furious, Marceau reprimands Ledro for crossing the line, demanding he get out of her house if his focus is no longer on acting, declaring that his behavior disgusts her. Recalling a subsequent apology, Marceau notes that in the end, everything worked out as Ledro deeply bowed and begged for forgiveness for his rude behavior. After offering a respectful apology and promising to focus solely on his acting, Marceau grants Ledro one last chance, which he accepts with deep gratitude. Sitting alone on her sofa, Marceau reflects that Darcy's advice was incredibly helpful, allowing her to handle the situation with Ledro properly. Smiling softly, Marceau happily anticipates her upcoming meeting, excited that the day to see him again has finally arrived. Darcy dramatically sweeps into the room wearing a magnificent cape and asks Marceau if he has kept her waiting long. Darcy stands tall before Marceau, looking down at her with a gentle, charming smile as she happily gazes back at him. Sliding a box across the table, Marceau explains the updated instructions for the printing device and happily offers Darcy his compensation for another perfect job. As Chibi Darcy looks in astonishment at the large pile of glowing crystals, Marceau points out that his previous warnings were entirely correct. Darcy's expression turns serious as Marceau confides in him that Ledro did indeed make advances on her. Darcy springs up from his seat, demanding to know her response, and grows slightly skeptical even after Marceau explains she flatly rejected Ledral thanks to his advice. Amused by his strong reaction, Marceau chuckles softly and playfully asks him why he is so deeply concerned about the matter. Caught off guard, Darcy blushes slightly and stammers, asking if he really seems that concerned. Darcy quickly turns away to hide his face, insisting he isn't concerned, while Marceau playfully teases him for looking so incredibly flustered. Eager to change the subject, Darcy suggests heading to the theater room, leaving Marceau slightly surprised by his sudden rush. Darcy explains the details of his latest magical device update, which allows seamless transfer of recordings between two devices. Darcy teasingly suggests they need to test if the new transfer feature is working properly, to which Marceau responds with an amused smile. When Darcy tells Marceau to wait while he fetches the recorder from the theater room, she suddenly grabs his hand and asks him to take her along. Darcy points out that others might spot them together on the way, prompting Marceau to quickly change her mind. Darcy puts on a dramatic puppy dog expression and whines that he doesn't like being left all alone, catching Marceau completely off guard. Sighing internally, Marceau easily sees through his fake distress, thinking to herself that such exaggerated acting doesn't suit Darcy's personality at all. Darcy chuckles upon realizing she didn't buy his act, while Marceau playfully threatens to confiscate his magical tools if he doesn't hurry up. Darcy agrees to escort Marceau inside first before retrieving the recorder, a plan that Marceau happily accepts. As they settle into the theater room, Darcy warns her that this play is a bit different, but Marceau nonchalantly replies that she doesn't mind. Pressing the button to start the device, Marceau amusedly wonders who could have ever imagined she would be screening K-dramas in this magical realm. Looking at the screen, Darcy asks if they can replace the main actor, but Marceau defends Lidro, stating his apology was sincere and she genuinely likes her current team. Staring at her with an incredibly soft, gentle gaze, Darcy quietly tells Marceau that she is simply too nice. Marceau internally scoffs at his words, thinking that absolutely nobody else in the world would ever call the notorious villainous Marceau nice. On screen, the dramatic play reaches a climax as the young protagonist tearfully confronts his mother, questioning if they are even his real family. The crying boy clutches his head in absolute anguish, screaming out in despair to ask why she even gave birth to him. The story outlines the classic tropes of K-dramas, emphasizing the theme of complicated family trees and illegitimate children as a shocking twist is revealed on screen. Worried that the intense, dramatic storyline might make Darcy uncomfortable, Marceau offers to change it, but Darcy reassures her that he is perfectly fine watching it. Darcy rests his chin on his gloved hand, gazing at Marceau with an incredibly warm, affectionate smile that highlights his striking blue eyes. A beautiful, nostalgic memory unfolds, showing a peaceful moment on a sunlit balcony where two lovers stand hand in hand, surrounded by lush green trees. Resting his chin on his gloved hands, Darcy gazes forward with a gentle, incredibly soft smile, his eyes reflecting a quiet tenderness. Under a breathtaking canopy of brilliant stars, the grand, illuminated mansion stands peaceful and silent in the quiet night. Darcy gently places a black vinyl record onto the ornate phonograph, which begins to glow with a magical blue light as sweet music fills the room. Standing near the glowing record player, Darcy softly tells Marceau that the movie has ended just in time for her favorite time of the day. Relaxing on the edge of the bed, Marceau smiles warmly and thanks Darcy, suggesting that he should lie down and rest as well. With a soft flop, Darcy immediately complies and lies down right next to Marceau on the spacious bed. Surprised by his forwardness, Marceau grumbles that she didn't mean for him to lie down on her bed, but Darcy playfully replies that they aren't even touching and asks if she can let it slide. As her heart beats rapidly, Marceau anxiously realizes she is lying in bed with a man, trying to convince herself it is just the delirium of staying up too late. Sensing her hesitation, Darcy gently tells her to close her eyes. Watching Darcy peacefully close his eyes, Marceau is touched by how easily he complied with her wishes. Listening to the soft music, Marceau reflects that simply existing in each other's presence is enough without any words. She wonders why it feels so strange yet comforting to feel completely at ease whenever she is with Darcy. Lying beside him, Marceau reflects that although she was certain she was done with all relationships, finding such comfort in Darcy's company might mean that she will one day find the strength to face the world again. Standing near the double doors, Darcy prepares to take his leave as Marceau agrees that it has indeed gotten quite late. Holding the magical camera in her hands, Marceau gazes after Darcy's departing figure with a lingering, thoughtful expression. Suddenly changing her mind, Marceau calls out to Darcy and excitedly suggests they take a photo together before he leaves. When a surprised Darcy questions the sudden request, Marceau blushes and excuses herself by saying they haven't tested the camera's functionality yet, prompting Darcy to chuckle and call her silly. With several bright flashes, Marceau snaps photos of Darcy, capturing his stiff and slightly awkward expressions. Looking at the Polaroids, Marceau complains that they all turned out blurry, but when Darcy insists they look perfectly fine, she playfully refuses and demands to take a better one. As the camera is set down, Marceau quietly confesses that she knows today is the very last time she will ever see him. Darcy asks what she is talking about, but Marceau replies that he dropped so many subtle hints during their last meeting that she couldn't help but notice. Marceau repeats her certainty that this is their final meeting, admitting to herself that while it was initially just a strong hunch, Darcy's melancholic silence confirms her fears. Seeing his sad reaction, Marceau notes that her suspicion is fully confirmed, but she quickly brightens the mood by teasingly asking if he will stay still for the photo this time. Standing side by side in the dimly lit room, the two pose together as the camera flashes with a loud snap, capturing their final moment. The newly printed photo develops to reveal a stiffly posed Darcy with a slight frown alongside a surprised Marceau. Marceau bursts into laughter, teasingly pointing out that Darcy looks as awkward as a little boy, while chibi Darcy peers over her shoulder to ask how the picture turned out. Smiling warmly, Marceau hands Darcy his own printed copy of the photograph as a keepsake. Marceau gently expresses her hope that the time they spent together will remain as fond memories, leaving Darcy staring at the small photo in deep, quiet wonder. Marceau steps closer and peers intently into Darcy's eyes, causing him to look away in flustered embarrassment as he stammers to find his words. Deeply flustered by her sudden closeness, Darcy grips his cape tightly, a visible blush creeping across his cheek. Amused by his uncharacteristic embarrassment, Marceau covers her mouth and giggles softly at his reaction. Marceau reflects that Darcy still feels awkward about simple gestures, hoping that one day he can escape the lonely room he has been locked up in, mingle with others, and break free from all the shackles that bind him. Moved by her kind thoughts, Darcy stares back at Marceau with wide, emotional eyes, his expression filled with a mix of surprise and deep affection. Overwhelmed by his emotions, Darcy remains silent for a moment, his lips slightly parted as if struggling to find the right words. Darcy softly asks Marceau if she would do him a favor, and Marceau kindly replies that she will gladly help if it is within her power. Without warning, Darcy pulls Marceau into a tight, emotional embrace, leaving her completely stunned as she wonders if this hug is the favor he spoke of. Burying his face in her shoulder, Darcy gently closes his eyes and softly whispers that she is incredibly warm. Holding her close to him, Darcy quietly confesses that it has been ages since he last held or hugged another person. Marceau's hand slowly rises and gently squeezes Darcy's shoulder, returning his warm embrace. A nostalgic memory surfaces of Marceau resting peacefully while Darcy stood by her side, highlighting his gratitude for her always listening to his stories. The memory continues with a close-up of a gentle younger Darcy, expressing how much her presence and thoughtful advice meant to him. Squeezing her tightly, Darcy admits that he truly wishes she didn't have to leave, though he sadly reflects that he has no right to hold her back since, at the end of the day, they are practically strangers. Recognizing her own desire to keep him at arm's length, Marceau's thoughts are interrupted as Darcy gently tilts her chin up, squishing her cheek affectionately. A flustered Marceau asks what he is doing, to which Darcy smiles warmly and replies that it feels wonderful to see her look so serious on his behalf. Marceau stammers in embarrassment, asking what on earth he is talking about, but Darcy playfully points out that she always has a worried expression about everything else except him. Leaning in close with a charming, gentle smile, Darcy confesses that he is now highly curious to find out what it would feel like to make her smile. Chuckling at his playful charm, Marceau teases him for being weird, but Darcy triumphantly points out that he successfully made her smile. Standing side by side, a comfortable silence settles between them as Marceau gazes ahead with a soft, content smile. Surrounded by a flurry of beautiful glowing blue flowers, Marceau wears a radiant, truly happy smile, her eyes sparkling with warmth. Darcy looks back at her one last time, his face softened by a gentle, peaceful smile that speaks of deep, silent affection. Raising her hand in a gentle wave, Marceau bids him a fond farewell, softly saying goodbye to Darcy. Turning back with a final warm smile, Darcy steps out through the double doors, leaving behind a beautiful memory of their time together. Under a beautiful, glittering, starry sky, Darcy softly whispers his final words, "Goodbye, Marceau, take care." In a flashback, Germaine firmly tells her young son to obey the Emperor's commands until he becomes an adult, warning him that if he doesn't, a terrible curse will make his heart explode and bring him to death. The narration explains that Darcy inherited the same rare and powerful mind control ability that his mother possessed, a power that Kai's despised but simultaneously coveted from a ruler's perspective. As a young boy is held by a maternal figure, the narration reveals that Germaine cast the curse on her own son, all because Kai's wanted to possess that powerful ability. Soon after Germaine's passing, her young, white-haired son is left standing all alone in the world, gazing at a dark, massive castle underneath a blood-splattered sky. Looming in a dark doorway, Emperor Kai's commands the young boy to stay there, wait for his commands, complete his instructed tasks, and return no matter what. Pointing his hand downward, the Emperor claims that he acts this way only because he regards him as the crown prince, as the cursed child grows into a young man who painfully recalls his past. In another memory, Darcy's mother sadly asks him as a selfish mother to please not ruin Kai's even after everything that has happened. Fortunately for Kai's, Darcy didn't care about seeking revenge. His only desire was to break free from the shackles of his parents' twisted love that had imprisoned him for so long. Looking down with a heavy heart, Darcy wonders in absolute silence why he feels this way. From within a grand room, a girl tearfully protests that she doesn't want to attend, but a man reminds her that they cannot decline a feast granted by His Majesty. Standing by the doorway with his arms crossed, Darcy overhears them discussing that this feast is a great chance to discuss marriage with Prince Ryan. Overwhelmed by a dark, oppressive aura, Darcy holds his head and wonders why he suddenly feels so incredibly sick to his stomach. Walking away from the room, Darcy looks back and realizes that this sickening feeling is the reason why it was so difficult for him to leave today. Darcy gets frustrated as he realizes that Ryan, the Emperor's other son, who studied theory and practiced swordplay as a sport while Darcy was suffering on the battlegrounds, is going to become the crown prince and marry Marceau. Angry and disgusted at the thought of a loser like Ryan being with Marceau, Darcy's thoughts race in a red, chaotic swirl, though he tries to convince himself that it has nothing to do with him. Peering out from a large arched window into the quiet night, Darcy wonders if this deep anxiety is because Marceau is the very first friend he has ever made. Realizing that it is well past the time he was supposed to leave, Darcy looks back down the long corridor as a figure walks away. Darcy stares with wide, glowing blue eyes, his face filled with conflict and concern. Darcy thinks to himself that although she puts up a brave face to look fine, he knows she is actually vulnerable and deeply hurt on the inside. Gazing at Marceau's radiant, gentle smile, Darcy realizes that he simply cannot look away from her. Overcome by his feelings, Darcy resolves that whatever this emotion is, he cannot stand to watch Marceau in pain and will do whatever it takes to protect her. Smirking with a determined expression, Darcy decides to change his plans as heavy chains shatter around him. Turning back to face the danger, Darcy realizes that to make things go the way Marceau would want, he needs to acquire far more power. Staring ahead with cold, glowing blue eyes, Darcy quietly whispers, "I'm sorry, Mother." With a sudden flash of light, a magical pink teleportation circle appears beneath Darcy's feet as he prepares to confront his father. Teleporting directly into the Emperor's dark chambers, Darcy stands silently before the double doors. The scene shows a dramatic close-up of Darcy's cold, piercing blue eyes as he focuses on his target. Sitting on his throne in a dimly lit room, Emperor Kais looks up and notes that Darcy is here already. Washing his face with splashing water, Darcy pulls up his white hood and prepares for the looming confrontation. Darcy opens a drawer to retrieve a revolver, thinking that although spells are blocked in this area, he can still use enchanted items and arcanium, which Kais likely thought Darcy couldn't obtain. Slipping the weapon discreetly behind his back under his cloak, Darcy prepares himself to strike. Resting his chin on his locked fingers, Emperor Kais coldly asks Darcy what took him so long. With a confident smirk, Darcy replies that he was just having a good time, to which the Emperor replies that he can say his farewells before he dies, as knights surround him. Surrounded by spear-wielding guards, Darcy looks around and notes that he recognizes everyone present as he calculates the time remaining before his curse lifts at 2 a.m. The Emperor smiles smugly, agreeing to grant Darcy's final wish before having him disposed of. The scene shifts to a flashback of Caius as a merciless knight and undefeated emperor who valued efficiency and gaining people's trust. Soldiers cheer for Emperor Caius, praising him for making the empire safe and showing those wizards, highlighting his desire to be a perfect emperor. The narration notes that using his illegitimate child, Darcy, to achieve his status was a no-brainer for the cold-hearted ruler. Glancing at the spears pointed at him, Darcy notes that he has 20 arcanium stones and a little time left before the curse lifts, knowing that a single wrong move means death. The flashback shows Kais getting blood on his own son's hands, forcing him to slaughter his own kind on the battlefield as a merciless weapon. Holding up his magical, glowing revolver, Darcy declares, "First, let's negotiate," before firing a sudden, deafening shot that shocks the guards. A magical bullet pierces cleanly through Kaya's hand, leaving a gaping wound and splattering blood into the air. Kayas reacts in shock, clutching his bloody hand as pain surges through him. Screaming out in absolute agony, Kais clutches his shattered, bleeding hand in sheer disbelief. With a cold, mocking smile, Darcy holds the revolver directly to Kai's forehead and asks, "Now, where were we?" Darcy sneers that if the Emperor says anything stupid, he will be greeted by all the wizards he has murdered, mockingly addressing him as "Your Majesty," or should I say, "Father." Pointing the gun at the trembling Emperor, Darcy mockingly remarks, "How the tables have turned, eh?" Darcy orders the guards not to move, threatening to shoot if anyone moves even a single hair, which causes a guard named Cylon to flinch in terror. Darcy calls out the names of the other knights, Ian, Conrad, Cartros, leaving them completely stunned and wondering how he knew their names. With cold, piercing, heterochromatic eyes, Darcy holds his ground and demands, "Answer me or the Emperor is dead." From above, the tense scene unfolds as Darcy holds the Emperor at gunpoint on the sofa, while the terrified guards below scramble to confirm their identities, stammering, "Fine, yes, that's me." Realizing he slipped up and spoke formally out of habit from years of acting properly for the Emperor, Darcy dismisses the Emperor's furious protests and coldly remarks that he will let it slide just this once. As Darcy prepares to make his move, he finds himself distracted by a sudden thought, wondering if Marceau actually prefers formal language. Recalling their first meeting, Darcy winces at the realization that he didn't make the most polite first impression, resolving to make himself much more likable the next time he sees her. Lost in his thoughts, Darcy wonders if he should practice his polite speech, leaving the sweating and terrified Emperor completely ignored in the foreground. Believing he still has 30 minutes of control left before the curse lifts, a desperate Emperor Kai stares at the wall clock, plotting to finish Darcy off within that crucial window of time. Confident in his calculation, the Emperor bursts into a fit of hysterical, mocking laughter that echoes throughout the grand room. Stepping in close, Darcy leans down and whispers Kai's full name, Kai Hector Rodrigo, before coldly reminding him that he has absolutely no power to kill him. Refusing to back down, the furious Emperor screams in defiance, "You don't think I will? You shall immediately." Before Caius can finish his command, he suddenly chokes on his own words, gasping and sputtering in sheer shock. Sinking back onto the sofa, Darcy casually looks on as the Emperor clutches his neck in agony, proving once and for all that his commands no longer have any power. With a triumphant, knowing smile, Darcy delivers the final blow to Caius's plans, revealing that the curse has already been lifted. A wave of absolute horror washes over Kais as Darcy mockingly asks if he really relied on the room's clock to tell the time, pointing out that his frantic search was entirely in vain. The grand clock sits on the wall, completely useless to the Emperor, as Darcy reveals that it is actually 30 minutes behind. Staring down at his defeated father, Darcy coldly explains that it is already past 2 a.m., making Caius understand the grim reality of his situation. The narration details the mechanics of Darcy's inherited power, explaining that making eye contact, calling on the subject's name, and receiving a response is all it takes to successfully cast the mind control spell. Turning his gaze toward the surrounding knights, Darcy notes that the exact same rules apply to them. In utter despair, the Emperor spins around only to realize that his own elite guards are already standing in a daze, their eyes glowing with the unmistakable purple light of Darcy's mind control spell. Standing victoriously in the center of the hall, Darcy casually rests his revolver in his hand and scoffs at his father's complete defeat. Recovering from his initial shock, the Emperor mockingly asks if Darcy plans to control him like a puppet, but Darcy calmly refutes this, smiling as he explains that he simply wants to negotiate. Pressing the cold barrel of the revolver directly against the Emperor's forehead, Darcy makes his first official request, to be recognized as a true prince of the Empire. Darcy demands a public announcement detailing the existence of a hidden prince who fought on the battlegrounds, giving Kais a choice between compliance or immediate absolute mind control. Darcy explains that he is letting the Emperor retain his free will only because the clearer his mind is, the more pain he will feel, before casually moving on to his second request. Pressing the weapon firmly against the Emperor's head, Darcy stares down with cold, glowing pink eyes filled with absolute determination. Darcy imagines the look on his half-brother Ryan's face, who has lived a sheltered, elegant life, when the Emperor is forced to crown Darcy instead. Underneath it all, Darcy's thoughts return to Marceau, standing alone under a shower of falling petals, as his primary motivation for acquiring power remains clear. Darcy admits that while he never cared about the title of Crown Prince when Kai has offered it before, he now truly needs that power and status. With the crown and the title of Emperor, Darcy envisions a future where Marceau will finally be free to live exactly the way she wants. With a deliberate click, Darcy prepares to seal the negotiation, holding the revolver steady. Telling the Emperor to remember his requests, Darcy ignores Kai's desperate pleas to lower the weapon and fires a sudden, deafening shot that echoes with a painful scream. Walking away as the guard's spears clatter to the floor, Darcy casually teases his father for being melodramatic enough to pass out from a mere graze. Looking down at the discarded weapons, Darcy resolves that with the Emperor's title, he will finally have the power to help Marceau find true happiness. With a soft, gentle smile, Darcy decides that the next time he presents himself to Marceau, he will do so with a proper, worthy status. Looking slightly annoyed, Darcy also resolves to look into Marceau's theater troupe, recalling a frustrating memory of another man presenting her with flowers. Realizing it is too risky to have no allies within the palace, Darcy turns back to assess the mind-controlled guards. Suddenly, Darcy freezes as he recognizes a familiar face among the knights, recalling him as a reliable comrade who is wonderful to team up with on the battlefield. A devious, pleasant grin spreads across Darcy's face as he realizes how useful this discovery will be. Calling out the name Kaisenhofen, Darcy locks eyes with the knight, who stands frozen as the purple light of the mind control spell takes hold of his gaze. Meanwhile, through a large window, a frustrated Marceau protests loudly to her father, refusing to attend the upcoming feast or see the prince. Marquise Etoile sighs in frustration, reminding her that the event is unavoidable and set for 10 days from now, adding that he thought she liked the prince anyway. Looking away with a heavy heart, Marceau realizes that her protests are completely futile and that her father will never take her feelings seriously. As the Marquis walks away rubbing his head, the narration bitterly notes that he is a father who doesn't even realize his daughter has been replaced by someone else. A flashback reveals that Marquis Etoile neglected his daughter out of grief after his wife passed away, tortured by how closely Marceau resembled her, yet unable to completely abandon her. Glaring at her father's retreating figure, Marceau reflects that despite his tragic past, it doesn't change the fact that he is a deeply selfish individual. Under the dim light of the grand chandelier, the Marquis bids her farewell, trusting that she understands the circumstances before walking away. Their footsteps echo through the empty corridors. Father and daughter walk in opposite directions, their shadows stretching far apart. Looking down at her dress, Marceau's heart grows cold as she is reminded of the harsh reality that in this new world she is completely and utterly alone with no one on her side. Hugging her shoulders, Marceau wonders in despair why she couldn't just be left alone to rot in her room in peace. Lying face down on her bed, Marceau's mind races as she tries to figure out if her own actions have altered the original story, wondering why she had to be dragged into becoming the crown princess of all things. Clenching her hand tightly onto her bedsheet, Marceau is tormented by thoughts of Ryan's wife and finds herself completely unable to sleep, deciding she needs to go somewhere more peaceful. Walking through the silent mansion, Marceau resolves to head to the theater room, but is suddenly startled when a maid calls out her name. Letty rushes over in deep concern, asking why she is up so late, to which Marceau quietly admits that she simply couldn't sleep. Letty looks at Marceau with a saddened, deeply sympathetic expression, her eyes reflecting her worry for her mistress. Clasping Marceau's hands, Letty tearfully apologizes for her past mistake, deeply regretting that she let Lady Lejeune into the garden. Feeling a surge of surprise, Marceau realizes Letty has been harboring guilt this entire time, while Letty confesses how painful it is to see Marceau suffer. Gently pulling her hands away, Marceau feels a sudden wave of bitterness, wondering if Letty also secretly looks down on her as pathetic. Marceau turns to Letty, her voice turning cold as she demands to know what her maid means by "like this." With cold, piercing eyes, Marceau stands completely still and silent, waiting for Letty to explain her words. Letty flinches under Marceau's intense, icy gaze, quickly stammering that she only meant that Marceau must be going through a very difficult time. Letty starts to speak further, expressing her growing concern about what will happen if Marceau continues on in her current state. Looking out at the vast starry sky, Marceau tries to reason that Letty is simply acting out of concern and trying her best to have her back. However, Marceau bitterly notes that Letty is ultimately just trying to push her back into conforming to societal norms and expectations. Staring at the maid, Marceau realizes with cold clarity that Letty has never walked in her shoes and doesn't truly care to understand her pain. Marceau reflects on how much she despises those standards, remembering how hard she fought to break free from what society deems normal. Turning back to Letty, Marceau acknowledges that she will accept the concern as well-meaning, but prepares to set a firm boundary. With her pink eyes glowing fiercely, Marceau delivers a chilling warning, telling Letty that she will not let such comments slide a second time and to watch her language. Looking back at her memories of lying alone in her room, Marceau recalls the comfort she found while watching the theater troupe's recordings. A glowing projection shows a lively theater performance, casting a warm, nostalgic light into the darkness of the room. Marceau remembers the peaceful afternoons when Letty would serve her tea, back when their interactions were simple and happy. Standing in the quiet hallway, Marceau reflects on all those cherished times they spent together in the past. Bowing deeply, Letty tearfully begs for forgiveness, explaining that she only spoke because she thought it was the best advice she could offer. Staring at her bowing maid, Marceau sighs internally, realizing that people simply have different values and ways of looking at the world. Softly comforting her, Marceau notes that neither of them fully knows the other's life story, gently asking Letty to simply never say such things again. Letty looks down remorsefully, mumbling that she became anxious and lost her patience with the imperial feast drawing so close. Surprised, Marceau asks if preparing for the feast with the prince has been causing Letty so much stress and extra work. Letty quickly tells her to forget what she said and asks where Marceau is going, offering to bring tea and macarons when she learns Marceau is heading to the theater room. Letty smiles warmly, turning to fetch the refreshments while promising they will help Marceau get a peaceful night's sleep. Watching Letty leave, a soft, genuine smile graces Marceau's face, deeply appreciating her maid's sweet gesture. In the quiet of the room, a grand gramophone sits silently on the table, surrounded by floating magical sparkles. A beautifully prepared tray of warm tea, sugar, and pastel-colored macarons rests neatly on the wooden table. Lying awake in the dark theater room, Marceau sighs that she still cannot sleep, her mind consumed by her inability to understand the royal family's true intentions. Marceau worries that the emperor initiated the plans and fears what will happen if Lady Lei Huan reveals their past conversation, before trying to dismiss her exhausting thoughts. Tossing and turning in bed, Marceau curls her legs up, lamenting the painful isolation of having absolutely no one she can confide in. Staring up at the ceiling with wide, restless eyes, Marceau's expression is filled with a mixture of anxiety and deep loneliness. The vast, silent room swallows Marceau's small figure as she lies completely alone in the center of the large bed. As she looks up at the ceiling, an image of Darcy's kind, smiling face flashes through her mind, reminding her of the only person who ever allowed her to truly be herself. Staring up at the deep, endless, starry sky, Marceau softly whispers into the quiet night that she truly misses him. Under the soft, shimmering glow of the starry blue night, Marceau speaks Darcy's name aloud, seeking comfort in his memory. As the days pass, Marceau relies on her archive of play recordings to endure the wait, while noticing that Ledro is working incredibly hard to maintain a professional distance. Marceau watches Ledro quickly guide another actor away, noting with amusement and mild sadness that he actively avoids her as if running into her would destroy his career. 10 days fly by and Marceau sits patiently in front of her vanity mirror while her maids carefully style her hair and prepare her dress for the feast. The final touches are completed as she fastens a brilliant blue gemstone necklace to match her exquisite floral pattern gown. The maids gasp in awe at her breathtaking appearance, showering her with compliments, which Marceau accepts with a polite, gentle smile. Standing outside the estate as her carriage awaits, Marceau steels her resolve, knowing that the day has finally arrived for her to face Ryan. Radiating elegance and grace, Marceau stands amidst the backdrop of blooming blue roses, looking every bit like a true noble lady. Inside the opulent golden banquet hall, Prince Ryan sits silently at the head of a massive dining table, his arms crossed as he waits with a cold, unreadable expression. Gliding into the grand room, Marceau gracefully holds up the skirts of her gown, maintaining her composed demeanor as she approaches. Resting his chin on his hand, Ryan gazes up at Marceau with a cool, calculative smirk, clearly amused by her arrival. The immense, gold-adorned banquet hall emphasizes the physical and emotional distance between them as the two sit silently at opposite ends of the vast dining table. Maids look on in utter shock and anxiety, sweating nervously as they hear the cold statement, "I'm glad we can finally agree on something." Prince Ryan cold-heartedly declares that he has no desire to get engaged or married to Marceau, claiming Lady Lei Huan is the only one he loves, while Marceau cynically notes to herself that she is well aware of it. The vast banquet hall emphasizes the distance between the two as Prince Ryan coldly reminds Marceau that their mutual dislike is still not enough to get her out of this unavoidable royal marriage situation. Standing in her elegant purple dress with a matching hair bow, Marceau remains silent as she faces away from the prince. Suddenly, a pair of black-gloved hands reaches out from behind, gently covering Marceau's eyes as a voice speaks, "Sorry I took so long, though it looks like I made it just in time." To Marceau's surprise, Darcy appears behind her, playfully advising her not to bother talking to the prince since her poor ears are suffering from listening to him. Marceau flinches in shock, immediately recognizing Darcy and wondering in confusion why he is here and how he can speak to the crown prince so insolently, while Prince Ryan glares at the intruder with sheer fury. When Prince Ryan demands that the intruder identify himself for entering without permission, Darcy smiles teasingly and reveals a shocking truth. "Who, me? I'm your older brother." Ignoring the tense atmosphere, Darcy gently takes Marceau's hand, admitting that he has been thinking incredibly hard and wanted to ask her something directly. Smiling warmly at her, Darcy asks Marceau if she would prefer it if he spoke to her in a formal tone instead of his usual casual speech. Darcy leans closer to tease her with some formal dialogue, asking if she needs a sample to decide, while Marceau demands to know how he is here when she thought he had left. Looking at her with gentle, sparkling eyes, Darcy softly confesses that he caught him completely off guard by looking so breathtakingly beautiful. Marceau's face flushes bright red as she tries to stop herself from blushing, asking Darcy if he was brainwashed by the palace, while Darcy playfully ignores her panic and asks again which style of speech she prefers. Stunned and confused by his unexpected charm, Marceau touches her cheek and stammeringly replies that she doesn't have a preference. Darcy happily notes that his casual way of speaking doesn't seem to annoy her, to which Marceau confirms that it actually suits him quite well. Suddenly, Darcy's tone shifts as he holds Marceau's hand, warning her in a low, serious voice never to get engaged to Prince Ryan, explaining that his urgency was the reason he had to return. Embracing Marceau gently, Darcy promises her that he will help her live the free life she has always dreamed of and make her the happiest person on Earth. A close-up of Darcy's mesmerizing lavender blue eyes reveals the deep intensity and sincerity behind his promise. Holding Darcy's hand, Marceau stares at him in complete bewilderment, trying to process the meaning behind his profound words. Suddenly, Darcy shifts his attention, swiftly drawing his elegant rapier with a sharp metallic ring. Pointing his sword at Darcy, a furious Prince Ryan warns him that pretending to be related to the royal family is a serious crime, while Darcy calmly mock-scolds his little brother for rudely interrupting their conversation. Darcy casually prepares to leave, suggesting that Marceau stay to enjoy her meal while they take their dispute elsewhere, but Prince Ryan is left deeply annoyed by Darcy's dense and mocking attitude. Fearing that Darcy will be at a disadvantage if he goes alone with the manipulative prince, Marceau quickly steps in, grabbing Darcy's sword and commanding them both to stay. Stunned and delighted by her protective gesture, Darcy's heart swells as he enthusiastically tells her how much he loves what she just said. Leaning in close, Darcy whispers a gentle reassurance into Marceau's ear, promising her that it's not what she thinks and that he will return shortly to explain everything. Looking at Darcy's confident gaze, Marceau's anxiety melts away as she nods in agreement, deciding to place her full trust in him. With a bright, cheerful smile, Darcy drags a completely dumbfounded Prince Ryan away by his collar, leaving the palace maid watching in absolute shock. As the door closes, a polite message echoes through the room, hoping that Marceau enjoys the lavish feast prepared for her. Looking down at the massive spread of delicious food, Marceau can't help but wonder why the prince's tone made it sound as if he had prepared all of this himself. Left alone in the grand banquet hall surrounded by servants, Marceau sits at the long table, resolving to wait patiently for Darcy's return and his explanation. Looking at the endless rows of glittering dishes and desserts, a chibi-styled Marceau sweat drops, feeling completely overwhelmed by the sheer amount of food. As she takes a delicious bite of meat, Marceau reflects on the novel's original plot, utterly baffled by the possibility of Darcy being a prince since it was never mentioned in the book. Chewing happily, Marceau is completely won over by the incredible flavor, instantly declaring the palace food to be absolutely delicious. Eating in peace, Marceau reflects that this is the very first time she has ever enjoyed a meal at the palace with peace of mind, though she still wonders how things are going between Darcy and Ryan. Picking up a delicate pink macaron, Marceau smiles softly as she is warmly reminded of the sweet macarons her maid Letty once brought her. Meanwhile, in a dark, dimly lit corridor of the palace, Darcy leads Prince Ryan away, his smile turning cold and calculating. Remembering Letty's kindness, Marceau makes a sweet mental note to pick up a box of fresh macarons for her faithful maid on her way home. In the dark hallway, Prince Ryan stops dead in his tracks, his eyes widening in horror as he stares at the shocking scene before him. On the cold floor of the storage room lies Marceau's maid, Letty, bound tightly with a collar around her neck, while Darcy smiles mockingly at a stunned Prince Ryan. Letty looks up in absolute terror and despair, while Darcy's voice drips with icy sarcasm as he remarks that Marceau will surely love the surprise he uncovered. Darcy mockingly praises Ryan's scum-like behavior for using Marceau's own maid as a palace spy, while Letty tearfully apologizes to the prince for getting caught. Highlighting Ryan's ruthless nature, Darcy explains that he discovered Letty after investigating the malicious rumors Ryan was spreading to ruin the engagement, uncovering all the dirty work they did behind the scenes. Holding the leash attached to Letty's collar, Darcy mockingly smiles at the prince, asking him to choose his next move very carefully. Watching Darcy closely, Ryan notes that Darcy's right hand is completely empty and wonders if this weaponless confrontation is actually a deadly trap. In a sudden, blinding flash, Darcy pulls out a sleek white revolver and presses the barrel directly against Prince Ryan's forehead, cheerfully joking that their father loved it so much he passed out. Sweat dropping in sheer shock and anger, Prince Ryan glares down the barrel of the gun, demanding to know who the hell Darcy truly is. Pointing the glowing magical weapon, Darcy reveals his true identity as the hidden Prince of Sciron from the abandoned castle, whom Ryan and his father have spent years avoiding and hiding from. Darcy leans close to a trembling Ryan, calling him by his full name, Ryan Stragan, and coldly calling him ungrateful after Darcy spared his life when they were children. With his glowing blue eye wide with terror, Ryan freezes as Darcy delivers a chilling final warning. "That's the last time I'll show you mercy." A flashback reveals a young blonde Prince Ryan looking towards the towering gates of the Grand Castle, beginning the tale of a world of abundance and established laws. A young Prince Ryan with big, curious blue eyes looks upward in surprise and wonder. A young, white-haired boy wearing a dark cloak looks down with a calm, mysterious expression as the narrative notes that he possessed an aura unlike anyone else. In a flashback, a young Ryan eagerly asks the mysterious boy to play with him, but the white-haired boy places a hand on Ryan's shoulder and commands him to erase all memories of this place. The white-haired boy tells young Ryan that forgetting is the only way he will survive, marking the first and last time the prince ever saw him. Clutching his head in distress as his memories return, Prince Ryan realizes that Darcy used mind control on him back then, which explains why Emperor Kai's coveted his immense power. Reflecting on Darcy's smug attitude, Ryan notes that controlling him must have been no easy task for the Emperor. The dark silhouette of castle guards raises a suspicious question. Is that why he tried to get rid of him in secrecy? Staring at the portrait of the late emperor, Ryan is gripped by disbelief, realizing the emperor tried to destroy all evidence by giving away Sciron Castle and wonders how Darcy could still be alive. Darcy stands calmly and coolly, holding a sleek white magical revolver in his black-gloved hand. Horrified by Darcy's capabilities, a sweating Prince Ryan anxiously wonders what could have happened to His Majesty. Darcy stands tall in the storage room and casually explains to Ryan and Letty that he spared the Emperor because he needs him to announce him as the Crown Prince. When Ryan furiously accuses him of using devilish powers to control the Emperor, Darcy mockingly asks if he thinks mind control is his only method, followed by a sudden loud gunshot. The bullet grazes Letty's ear, causing blood to splatter as Prince Ryan cries out her name in horror, while Darcy coldly warns them to be grateful he didn't kill her. Looking sinister and dark, Darcy remarks that monitoring someone's life without consent under the guise of protection makes Prince Ryan the truly devilish one here. Red-faced with rage, Prince Ryan yells that Marceau deserved it for what she did, while sweating in fear of the strange white gun. A marble statue lies shattered on the floor from a bullet impact as Darcy delivers a cold ultimatum. If you want to live, pointing his weapon at them, Darcy commands Prince Ryan and Letty to walk out through the door behind them immediately. Instantly shifting back to his cheerful self, Darcy smiles warmly and declares that he needs to go enjoy the lavish feast with Marceau. Prince Ryan is left sweating in absolute shock and silence, unable to find any words. Prince Ryan decides to retreat for the time being, telling himself that he needs to get Letty's injured ear checked. Walking out of the room with the bleeding Letty, Prince Ryan is suddenly confronted by Lady LeJoine, who stands elegantly in the bright hallway. Looking at them in shock and confusion, Lady LeJoine asks why she came out to check on them and demands to know what happened to Letty's ear. Staring at the prince and her maid, Lady LeJoine's eyes glow with intense shock as she demands to know why Letty is with the prince. In the storage room, Lady LeJoine confronts everyone, asking Letty to explain what is going on and if this is another thing done under the excuse of doing what's best for her. Letty closes her eyes, sweating nervously and remaining silent in deep guilt. Lady LeJoine stands with her back to them and bursts into a bitter, self-mocking laugh, realizing that absolutely no one is truly on her side. Turning to face Prince Ryan with a chilling, furious expression, Lady LeJoine demands to know if he is expressing hostility toward her family out of personal motives. Looking deeply nervous and flustered, Prince Ryan tries to turn it around, stammering that she seems to be the one expressing hostility. In a flashback, Lady LeJoine sits across from the prince in his office, reflecting on how she tolerated him because she knew she'd have to keep seeing him. The flashback shows Lady LeJoine looking down from a balcony at the cold prince, remembering how she sacrificed her self-respect and got hurt just to be near him. Looking back at her past self, Lady LeJoine admits that she simply wanted to improve her relationships with others. Returning to the present, Lady LeJoine steps between them and fiercely tells the prince to cut out the nonsense, declaring that he crossed the line first. Standing her ground, Lady LeJoine tells Prince Ryan that he has finally shown his true colors, having lost his morals in the name of love. Brushing his hair back dismissively, Prince Ryan coldly declares that he would do anything for his love. A close-up of Lady LeJoine's lips as she scoffs with a sharp, sarcastic laugh. Ha! Supporting the injured Letty, Lady LeJoine declares the feast over, thinking to herself that she must get Letty's ear treated and refuse to waste another breath on the prince. Looking back over her shoulder with an icy glare, Lady LeJoine tells Prince Ryan that she is no longer the Marceau who used to love him, and that will never change. In a bitter flashback, a tearful Lady Marceau is ignored by a cold Prince Ryan, who tells her never to look for him or call for him again. The flashback shows Prince Ryan protecting another woman while pushing Marceau away, as she reflects that the days she used to try so hard are finally over. Walking away into the light, Lady LeJoine silently bids a final, resolute goodbye to her past. Darcy's boots click on the stone floor as he approaches her, saying, "I'm sorry, Marceau. I was too careless." Under the soft light of the corridor, Darcy gently wraps his arms around Marceau in a comforting embrace. Darcy holds Marceau's hand, reassuring her that his feelings aren't hurt and that showing vulnerability would only give their enemies what they want. Gently cradling Marceau's face with his black-gloved hand, Darcy softly tells her that it is perfectly okay to be vulnerable with him. Surrounded by a background of blooming white flowers, Darcy smiles with breathtaking warmth and affection. Looking up at his handsome face, Marceau lets out a soft, genuine chuckle, her sadness completely melting away. Looking down at their feet, Marceau reflects that even though she met Darcy through Letty and it should be hard to trust him, her heart feels otherwise. Marceau places her hands over Darcy's as they stand close together, holding hands in a warm, unspoken bond. Looking down at her with gentle, sparkling purple eyes, Darcy softly asks what is the matter. Gazing up at his face with a brilliant, beautiful smile, Marceau replies that it is nothing and that she is just looking at his pretty face. I thought it was my job to say bad jokes, Marceau playfully remarks as she looks toward the doorway. Anyway, you're going to tell me what happened, right? Of course, Marceau, Darcy replies with a gentle, charming smile. Darcy turns back to look around her room, saying, "Thank you for having me over," to which Marceau responds, "Well, we couldn't exactly stay there for longer." As Darcy plays a song on the gramophone, Marceau is touched, realizing it is the exact song she played before and that he remembered it. Turning to face her, Darcy raises a black-gloved finger to remove a contact lens, saying, "But first, let's start by showing you my real face." Darcy reveals his true eyes, one a piercing red and the other a brilliant blue, leaving Marceau staring up at him in utter shock. Recalling his childhood, Darcy notes, "Unique colors of eyes is all there is to it, but most people are afraid of them." In the present, he tells Marceau, "If they frighten you or if you think they are weird, you can just say it." Looking down with a vulnerable expression, Darcy softly adds, "I don't want you to have to look at them if you hate them." Instead of pulling away, Marceau reaches up and gently cradles his face with a look of pure tenderness and care. Gazing deeply into his eyes, Marceau whispers, "It's like the sunset and the daylight coexist in your eyes." Deeply relieved, Darcy smiles and says, "Thank goodness, I was worried you'd hate them," prompting Marceau to tease, "You're silly for thinking that." When Darcy playfully asks to hear the compliment again, Marceau smiles and says, Sure, they are beautiful. Happy?" Looking down at her, Darcy wears an incredibly soft, happy, and loving smile. Darcy sits back on the sofa and explains, "Ryan and I are brothers. We have the same father, but different mothers. The reason why no one knows about me as royalty is because I basically don't exist in this world." Listening closely to his explanation, Marceau thinks to herself, "I had a vague notion," but Darcy continues, "I told you I'm a merchant of enchanted items, but I'm actually a wizard. For some reason, the Emperor fell in love with a wizard woman at some point, and that's how I was born." Remembering his painful past, Darcy notes, "Unfortunately for me, my ability was useful for military tactics, so the Emperor had quite an internal dilemma. The hatred he's always had towards wizards clashed with the desire to use my powers to his advantage." Recalling his confinement, Darcy explains, "As a result, when his lover passed away, he locked me up in an abandoned castle. I could only act when the Emperor commanded it, and otherwise I remained alone. It was like being dead." Darcy adds, "I prepared for an escape constantly, and eventually it became more and more difficult for the Emperor to deal with me." While Darcy explains that he wanted to escape because the Emperor was going to kill him, Marceau realizes the truth. The reason Darcy was never in the original novel is because he was already dead during its timeline. Marceau looks at him with deep sympathy, understanding why he reacted so strongly before, realizing that he spent his entire life locked up without any normal human interaction, unlike her who simply wanted to be left alone. Darcy looks up with a warm smile and says, "But you see, you saved me." Darcy looks back on the memories of when they first met, remembering how Marceau provided him with the Arcanium stones. Darcy notes that without meeting Marceau, he never would have been able to create his magical revolver. Marceau is amazed as she looks at the weapon, realizing Darcy actually implemented her ideas and that no one else would have thought of a weapon operating this way. Looking directly at her, Darcy softly whispers, "Thank you, Marceau." Marceau is deeply moved, realizing that she actually has the power to influence someone to change after all. Darcy clarifies, "I was able to get away thanks to you, but that's not the reason why I came back. So the thing is, I heard your news." Looking at her with intense sincerity, Darcy admits, "I couldn't stand seeing you marry Ryan." The music from the gramophone plays softly in the background as a heavy silence fills the room. Darcy looks down at the floor, quietly adding, "I was afraid it would make you miserable." Darcy looks back up at Marceau, a bright and radiant smile spreading across his face. Feeling a swell of emotion, Marceau silently realizes, "I see, I was the first one." Darcy explains, "That's why I decided to prolong my exit," leading a worried Marceau to ask, Does that mean you'll still leave eventually? Darcy turns away slightly, explaining, even with the royal status, I don't want to live here. I don't deserve to, and I have no ties here anyway. Darcy's expression turns serious and determined as he states, however, Darcy turns back to Marceau, reaching out with his black-gloved hand to gently lift her face. Darcy cradles her chin, looking deeply into her eyes under the soft light of the bedroom. With complete resolve, Darcy tells her, let me help you as the crown prince. Darcy smiles warmly, offering his full support to her. Marceau is completely stunned by his sudden proposal, staring at him in disbelief. The two stand close together in the quiet room, surrounded by an atmosphere of growing trust and affection. Meanwhile, back in his grand office, Prince Ryan sits alone at his desk, brooding under the dim lamplight. Ryan is haunted by the memory of Marceau coldly turning her back on him and walking away. Clutching his head in frustration, Ryan wonders, why does she keep popping up in my head? I expected her to yell and cling on to me like she did in the past, but she didn't this time. Could that be why? Ryan remembers her expression from earlier, noting with distress that she genuinely looked hurt. Overwhelmed by sudden guilt, Ryan thinks, if she's telling the truth, that makes me the bad guy who harassed an innocent person. Ryan slams his hand onto the desk with a loud tap, denying his feelings as he tells himself, nope, there's no way. Ryan scowls, trying to convince himself, that wicked woman must have done something to me. Standing up with a heavy sigh, Ryan mutters, she's up to something. Just then, an assistant enters the office and reports, the patient you've brought is doing fine. The doctor asked me to pass it on. To which Ryan flatly replies, okay, thanks. Prince Ryan broods in his office, realizing there is so much he needs to do, starting with seeing the Emperor to figure out what to do about Darcy. Clenching his fists in anger, Prince Ryan resolves to find Darcy's weakness and end him immediately if he threatens his position. A knock at the door interrupts his thoughts as Knight Commander Kaizen requests permission to enter. Knight Commander Kaizen enters the office, wearing a solemn expression as he approaches the prince. Bowing respectfully, Kaizen is asked by Prince Ryan what brings him to his office. Kaizen catches the prince off guard by asking if he has met with Lord Darcy yet. Startled, Ryan asks how Kaizen knows that name, only for the commander to declare that he believes Darcy is better suited for the throne. Angered by the betrayal, Prince Ryan asks Kaizen if he is declaring his intention to go against him. Prince Ryan dismisses the threat, reminding Kaizen of his humble origins as a former slave and claiming Kaizen is simply jealous of his ability to do so much for Lady Leguan. Prince Ryan lets out a scoff, an arrogant smirk spreading across his face as he mockingly dismisses Kaizen's jealousy. As Kaizen stands his ground, Ryan assures him that he isn't completely scum and is only thinking of the Empire's best interest. In the lavish office, Knight Commander Kaizen confronts Prince Ryan face to face, remaining steadfast in his judgment. With a sarcastic laugh, Prince Ryan asks if they are even talking about the same person, or if Kaizen is just taking out his frustration because Lady Leguan rejected him. Prince Ryan runs a hand through his hair with a sinister smile, mockingly asking Kaizen if his hostility is born out of resentment over Lejun's rejection. In a sweet flashback, Prince Ryan remembers how triumphant and assured he felt when Leguan ran crying into his arms. Hugging her tightly, a young Prince Ryan smiled with a dark sense of satisfaction, thinking that Leguan was finally his. Ryan recalls with pride how Leguan chose him over all the other men who sought her hand. A dark transition screen echoes the confusion of the moment. What are you talking about? While Kaizen angrily questions the prince for bringing up Leguan, Darcy suddenly teleports into the room, mockingly telling his brother that Kaizen simply recognizes his superior competence. Before Prince Ryan can react, Darcy delivers a powerful punch that knocks him backward onto his desk with a loud wham. Coughing violently, Prince Ryan collapses to the floor as Darcy stands over him. Darcy aggressively grabs Prince Ryan by the collar, hoisting him off the floor with a rough wrangle. Revealing his true heterochromatic eyes, Darcy coldly asks Ryan if he is slow, questioning why he allowed himself to get caught by Marceau. Wiping blood from his mouth, Prince Ryan is struck by sheer panic, realizing Darcy can use teleportation in addition to mind control. With an icy glare, Darcy slaps Ryan aside, calling him pathetic and telling him to read the room. Touching his bruised face, Prince Ryan realizes Darcy is actively targeting the position of the Crown Prince. Darcy calmly confirms his ambition, stating that keeping Ryan in that position would only annoy Marceau and get in the way of her happiness. Infuriated, Prince Ryan shouts that the position of the Crown Prince is sacred, meant only for those loyal to the peace and prosperity of the Empire. Darcy scoffs at the textbook definition, declaring his own protective motives for Marceau to be far more noble than any speech Ryan memorized. Pointing his magic revolver directly at Prince Ryan's throat, Darcy asserts that he will do anything if it is for Marceau's sake. Surrounded by white roses, Darcy smiles beautifully and menacingly as he aims his magical weapon. Knight Commander Kyson watches the tense confrontation in silence, remaining neutral. Terrified and entirely overwhelmed, Prince Ryan collapses back onto the floor with a heavy thunk. Darcy lowers his weapon and coldly tells Ryan that the people of the Empire will eventually realize who truly contributed to its prosperity. Looking back with a sharp warning glare, Darcy tells his little brother to be a good boy until then. Darcy and Kyson walk side by side down the long, red-carpeted palace corridor, their boots clicking against the floor. Noticing his companion's silence, Darcy remarks that Kyson looks like he has something to say. Kyson looks down, remembering the day he pledged his ultimate loyalty to Lord Darcy. Kyson admits that while he is loyal, he has a hard time understanding Darcy's obsession with Marceau Etoile. A dark screen highlights Kyson's warning to Darcy, "You're being tricked by her." Kyson looks deeply serious as he adds that if Darcy isn't being tricked, the alternative is even more concerning. A warm, nostalgic flashback shows a gentle young Darcy smiling in the soft sunlight. Kyson directly asks Darcy if he is in love with Marceau as the wind rushes loudly through the large arched window. A flashback shows Darcy's mother, a beautiful wizard woman, placing her hands gently on young Darcy's shoulders. Young Darcy looks up at his mother's loving face in a memory filled with quiet warmth. Back in the present, Darcy pauses in the corridor and looks back at Kyson. Standing in the grand hall, Darcy flatly denies his feelings, stating simply, "I don't love her." A dark transition panel echoes Darcy's bleak view of romance. Love can make people ugly. In a bitter flashback, young Darcy is embraced by his weeping mother as she reluctantly surrenders him to the Emperor in pursuit of royal affection. Returning to his true motivation, Darcy explains that, unlike his mother's sacrifice, he simply wants Marceau's suffering to end so she can finally be happy. Darcy looks on with a calm yet intense gaze, a subtle, confident smirk playing on his lips. Knight Commander Kyson stands before Darcy, the atmosphere between them thick with silent tension under the bright cathedral light. Kyson clenches his fist in frustration, his mind filled with prejudice as he declares that Marceau is a villain who plots evil schemes. Hearing this, Darcy lets out a sharp chuckle, scoffing at Kyson's narrow-minded perspective. Darcy confronts Kyson about the rumors surrounding Marceau, pointing out that they were manufactured by him and Ryan under the guise of punishing her to protect LeJuan. Darcy highlights how the punishments inflicted upon Marceau were always grossly excessive compared to her actual actions. Darcy reflects on how Marceau's past was sensationalized like a third-rate villain novel, where her childish jealousy was treated as a mortal sin. Darcy points out that records prove Marceau apologized to LeJuan a year ago and that all subsequent incidents were merely misunderstandings. Looking coldly at Kyson, Darcy questions his moral authority, asking how innocent he truly is to judge others. As Kyson tries to defend himself as a decent human being, Darcy sternly warns him not to take Ryan's side by claiming Marceau deserved her suffering. Leaning in close with a chilling smile, Darcy warns Kyson that if he dares to utter such words, he will make him wish he were dead. Darcy demands that Kyson stop using prejudice as a shield to justify his own wrongdoings. Turning his back, Darcy walks away down the majestic, sunlit cathedral hallway, leaving Kyson standing alone. Kyson looks down in defeated silence, unable to find a reply as Darcy's words sink in. Outside, the Grand Palace gardens bask in the warm afternoon glow, surrounding a beautiful stone fountain. Inside her bedroom, a delicious slice of strawberry shortcake and pink macarons sit neatly on a wooden side table. Lying on her bed, Marceau holds a delicate pink macaron in her hand, staring thoughtfully at it. Marceau lies flat on her spacious bed, looking up at the ceiling in deep contemplation. In a quiet flashback, Marceau recalls telling Darcy that she was doing just fine on her own. Darcy, looking elegant in his dark uniform and black gloves, had listened to her with a serious, gentle expression. Darcy's voice echoes in her memory, reminding her that humans are not meant to live in complete solitude. Marceau looks down with a solemn expression, her pink eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and conflict. Looking out at the dark castle spires under a crescent moon, Marceau admits to herself that her desire to escape wasn't just because of the Emperor. She remembers how frustrated and lonely she felt, isolated and unable to truly connect with anyone. In her memory, Darcy approaches her gently, explaining that she is simply trying to take a necessary break from an exhausting situation. Darcy reaches out, his black-gloved hand resting near her as he promises that things will be different from now on. Darcy holds her close, whispering reassuringly that she doesn't have to be alone because he is there for her. Back in the present, Marceau smiles warmly in her bed, letting out a soft giggle as she thinks about how surprisingly forward Darcy was. Marceau sits up in bed, feeling a renewed sense of energy and warmth. She sits on the edge of the bed, her long, wavy purple hair cascading down her back in the bright morning light. With a cute nom, Marceau happily takes a bite of her sweet pink macaron. Later in her study, Marceau sits at her large desk, resting her chin on her hand as she wonders what she truly wants to do next. She remembers that when she first became Marceau, her simple dreams were to travel the world and learn how to use magic. Instead, she had spent all her energy trying to set things straight and clear her name in front of those who turn their backs on her. Marceau gazes out thoughtfully, realizing how much of her life has been consumed by the drama surrounding others. She recalls Ryan's arrogant, mocking smile as he dismissed her feelings with a smug comment. She remembers the painful memory of Ryan walking away with LeGuan, telling her not to waste her time on Marceau. Ryan had held LeJohn protectively, declaring that he would do absolutely anything for her. Marceau clenches the fabric of her skirt in frustration, admitting to herself that she still deeply desires revenge on Ryan. She doesn't need a grand victory. She simply wishes for Ryan to get a taste of his own poison for the way he has always looked down on her. Sitting at her desk, Marceau resolves that she does not want her entire life to be defined by revenge. As she looks around her desk, something catches her attention, interrupting her train of thought. Her eyes land on a framed black and white picture sitting on the edge of her desk. Marceau smiles warmly as she picks up the photograph she took with Darcy. She remembers the cheerful young street photographer who took their photo using a magical camera. Looking closely at the captured image, Marceau marvels at how a photograph can beautifully freeze a single moment in time. Holding the picture close, Marceau smiles softly, realizing what a truly wonderful invention it is. A brilliant idea strikes her, and she wonders if she could popularize magical tools like these throughout the Empire. However, she realizes that once Darcy becomes the crown prince, his royal duties will make it difficult for him to help her. Looking out her library window, Marceau decides she must find other wizards who are capable of crafting enchanted tools to bring her business ideas to life. Looking out the window at a bright, clear blue sky filled with soft white clouds, Marceau wonders what the other wizards of the Empire will be like. Reflecting on her plans, Marceau recalls the rumors that wizards are incredibly prideful and prefer to keep entirely to themselves. Sitting at her desk and holding a letter, Marceau decides not to jump to conclusions, reasoning that Darcy is a wizard who turned out perfectly fine and that it is wrong to judge others based on rumors. Having formulated her game plan, Marceau is interrupted by a polite knock on her door, prompting her to call out, "Come in." A red-haired maid enters carrying a tray, offering her some warm tea, which Marceau accepts before asking for an additional favor. Taking a sip of her tea, Marceau asks the maid to summon Letty, secretly preparing herself to fire the maid who was once her absolute favorite. In a plush, dimly lit chamber, 4 incredibly attractive gentlemen in stylish black and white button-down shirts lounge together on a velvet sofa, casting alluring gazes forward. Unfortunately, Letty's dismissal is delayed as Marceau learns from the other maids in the foyer that Letty hasn't returned to the estate since that fateful day. Marceau's investigation into Letty's hiring reveals that the other staff assumed she simply had a good work ethic. Realizing that Prince Ryan flawlessly forged Letty's resume for espionage, Marceau angrily thinks that the prince is a crown criminal rather than a crown prince. After successfully carrying out her acts of forgery and espionage, Letty finally makes her return to the grand estate a few days later. Outside the grand sky-blue estate, Letty stands with her luggage in hand, facing Marceau near the courtyard gates. Looking down with a heavy heart and clutching her bag, Letty softly apologizes, saying, "I'm sorry about what happened." Marceau gazes back coldly, unswayed by the apology, and firmly replies that she did not come out there to hear her say those words. Knowing that Prince Ryan is pulling Letty's strings from behind the scenes, Marceau realizes that whatever she says to Letty will undoubtedly get back to him. With a steady hand over her chest, Marceau confidently announces to Letty that she plans to resume her social activities from now on. When Letty asks what she means by that, Marceau clarifies that it simply means she is going to start getting out of the house much more often. Although people might expect her to chase after Prince Ryan, Marceau's gaze hardens with resolve as she reminds herself that the prince means absolutely nothing to her now. Looking up with curiosity, Letty asks if Marceau has a completely different reason for stepping back into high society. Marceau runs her fingers through her long, flowing hair and confidently replies with a simple yes. Standing beneath the bright sky, Marceau wears a beautiful, subtle smile as the wind gently rustles her long purple hair amid shimmering sparkles. A cheerful playwright in a brown beret tearfully thanks Marceau, celebrating on stage with his crew because the script she advised him on has finally been released in theaters. Squeezing Marceau's hands with immense gratitude, the playwright admits he knows she dislikes leaving the house much, but eagerly extends an invitation to watch the play. A hand flips over 2 elegant gray theater tickets marked with stylized writing. Holding the tickets in her hands while seated in her carriage, Marceau realizes that attending the play presents a perfect opportunity for her plans. Seated in her elegant drawing room, Marceau reflects on how the unique script and the actors' outstanding performances have caused glowing reviews to spread, completely selling out the show. Visualizing a magical camera surrounded by glowing crystals, Marceau plans to subtly drop hints that she helped the play by providing them with a special tool, sparking curiosity among the public. With a confident clack, Marceau's boots click against the polished marble floor as her beautiful dark dress sways with her movement. While being dressed in a stunning royal blue gown by her two attentive maids, Marceau contemplates inviting Darcy since she has 2 tickets. Stepping out toward the exit, she sighs softly, thinking that he is likely far too busy with his new royal duties to accompany her. A remarkably handsome gentleman stands nearby, dressed in a tailored lavender gray coat adorned with a brilliant purple amethyst jewel at his cravat. Marceau's pink eyes widen in absolute surprise as she looks up and catches sight of the man standing right in front of her. Standing outside her carriage amidst sparkling lights, Darcy looks incredibly refined in his elegant silver-accented suit, gently holding his amethyst brooch. Darcy smiles warmly, his captivating heterochromatic eyes sparkling as Marceau asks him in surprise what he is doing there. Standing hand in hand in a grand courtyard filled with blooming white roses, the two look at each other with deep affection and elegance. As their royal carriage travels along the forest path, Marceau asks how he knew she was attending the play, to which Darcy replies that the proud playwright was boasting about her attendance. Marceau smiles warmly inside the carriage, thinking that while the playwright wasn't entirely sure she would go, she is genuinely grateful he spoke of her so highly. Noticing Darcy sitting across from her with a grumpy and sullen expression, Marceau looks at him with mild confusion and asks what's the matter. Looking at her with a mix of puppy dog sadness and gentle reproach, Darcy sulks as he asks her why she didn't invite him in the first place. In a cute chibi scene, an embarrassed Marceau stammers that she assumed he would be too busy at the palace, but Darcy quickly clarifies that he is entirely free since the official ceremony isn't until next week. Marceau points out that she hadn't actually told anyone she was going out today, and Darcy calmly responds that he didn't know she was leaving either. Surrounded by beautiful, blooming blue flowers, Darcy looks at Marceau with an adoring smile and confesses that, either way, he simply wanted to see her. Marceau turns away blushing, waving her hands in embarrassment at his forwardness, while Darcy chuckles and remarks that he's glad their plans aligned anyway. Marceau proudly mentions that she dressed up especially for today, and Darcy looks at her with an admiring, knowing smile, replying that he can definitely see that. As the carriage approaches a magnificent glowing opera house at sunset, Marceau remarks that it is her very first time attending such a grand social event. Stepping out of the carriage, Darcy sweeps Marceau up in an elegant romantic lift, holding her close as he tells her he wanted to escort her like this from the very start. Held close in Darcy's arms, Marceau's cheeks flush a deep crimson as her heart beats rapidly with a loud badum. They step into a breathtaking ballroom lit by the warm, glittering glow of massive golden chandeliers hanging from the high ceiling. Inside the grand hall, high society nobles whisper behind their fans, pointing out the arrival of the famous figures. The room is filled with active chatter as the guests discuss Darcy, noting that he is the one who will soon be appointed as the crown prince. Walking arm in arm through the crowd with striking elegance, Darcy and Marceau turn every head in the room, leaving the nobles whispering in shock that they didn't know the two were acquainted. Marceau looks at Darcy, thinking to herself that he said this is his first time in a place like this. Even though Darcy is at the center of everyone's attention, he seems completely relaxed, yet not easily approachable. Sensing the heavy gazes of the crowd, Marceau nervously squeezes Darcy's arm, causing him to look down at her in surprise. Suddenly, the playwright bursts through the crowd with an excited expression, rushing directly towards them. The playwright eagerly thanks Marceau for inviting him, to which she warmly replies that it is an honor to have him there, before he politely asks if Darcy is her fiancé. When Marceau clarifies that Darcy is just a friend, the playwright gasps in realization of Darcy's true identity and bows deeply to apologize, but Darcy gently tells him to lift his head. Darcy smiles warmly and mentions he looks forward to the play, leaving the playwright sweating nervously as he stammers out a grateful thank you. Darcy turns to Marceau and asks if they should go find their seats, and she happily agrees. As they walk up the stairs, Marceau is startled to see Lejuan and Prince Ryan standing ahead. Lejuan explains that they are just there to watch the famous play, before bowing and apologizing to Marceau for the unexpected encounter. Marceau graciously tells Lejuan that it's all right and wishes her a pleasant time at the show. As Lejuan sits in her seat, she looks down in surprise at her program, her hand trembling slightly. Lejuan thinks to herself that she had expected Marceau to attend an event like this with Ryan, wondering if Marceau has had a complete change of heart. Sitting side by side with Darcy, Marceau taps her fingers and asks if this is the same play they had previously watched in her room. Darcy looks back at her with a somber expression, remembering the tragic family-related plot, and gently asks if she is certain she wants to watch it again since it might be triggering. Marceau reassures him that it is perfectly fine, reminding him that a play is just a play and, most importantly of all, it is her own brainchild. She chuckles softly and adds that she plans to pay more attention to the production than anyone else in the audience. Under the dim theater lights, Marceau watches the stage with glowing, beautiful eyes. She quietly thinks to herself, thanking Darcy and anticipating that the show will be incredibly fun. As the performance concludes, the crowd erupts into enthusiastic applause, leaving Marceau amazed. Clapping her hands with joy, Marceau beams and declares that the production was absolutely perfect. She thinks about how beautifully the family secrets and half-brothers were portrayed, finding the comedic moment where a character is slapped in the face with a lump of dough to be an absolute godsend. Looking out at the roaring crowd, the playwright smiles proudly, realizing that this play is destined to be a massive hit. Standing on the stage, the playwright addresses the audience, asking if everyone enjoyed the show. He continues by expressing his infinite gratitude to Lady Marceau Etoile for supporting the production of this play. The playwright smiles warmly under his glasses as he delivers his speech. He announces to the crowd that Lady Marceau's treasure, the magical tool that led to the immense success of their theater company, will soon be released to the world. Standing near the balcony, Marceau looks off to the side as her name is praised. She wears a subtle, knowing smile, pleased with how perfectly her plan is unfolding. She notes that thanks to the playwright's enthusiastic remarks, she won't even need to speak of the magical tools herself to spark public interest. Looking out at the cheering audience, she smiles warmly, feeling incredibly lucky to have met such a wonderful theater crew. As they prepare to leave, Marceau remarks that the plot was captivating and the acting was outstanding, even for her second time watching it. Hearing this, Darcy scoots his hand closer to hers on the armrest and admits that he actually preferred the quiet time they spent watching it alone in her room. Darcy looks down with a soft, vulnerable expression, confessing that he is still not used to being surrounded by so many people. He gently places his hand over hers, whispering that he simply wants to listen to music in the quiet comfort of her room. Looking up at her with a captivating gaze, Darcy softly asks if she will do him the honor of inviting him over. Flustered by his gentle charm, Marceau blushes deeply, realizing that absolutely no one could have declined a request from Darcy. Back in her room, Marceau feels a wave of nervousness, thinking about how they have been traveling together all day and that she actually ended up inviting him inside. She anxiously imagines what others might think, worrying that their close association will spark rumors and cause major trouble. In a cute chibi form, a stiff and nervous Marceau warns Darcy that people love to gossip and that rumors might start spreading about them. Darcy leans in with an amused smile and asks who cares, stating that other people's opinions don't matter to them before playfully asking if she dislikes being associated with him. Marceau quickly waves her hands and stammers that she doesn't mind being associated with him at all. Darcy laughs softly, assuring her that since neither of them mind, everything is perfectly fine. Exhausted from the long day, Marceau flops back onto her bed, thinking to herself that Darcy is truly difficult to read. She watches him walk over to her music box, admiring how he never lets the opinions of others bother him. She stares up at the ceiling, lost in her thoughts about him. Darcy starts playing a soft melody and sits on the floor beside her bed, smiling warmly as he asks if she feels any better. Looking down at her gently, Darcy notes that she looks much more comfortable now than when they were out in public. Touched by his thoughtfulness, Marceau asks if he did all of this just to comfort her, and Darcy smiles warmly, replying that he would do absolutely anything for her. Changing the subject, Darcy asks about her business plans, inquiring if she was originally planning on keeping her magical tools a secret. Looking determined and refined in her deep blue dress, Marceau softly declares that while she knows it won't be easy, she is fully prepared to take on the challenge. Sitting calmly on the edge of her bed, Marceau looks up at Darcy with a gentle, questioning gaze, softly asking if doing this would truly make him happy. Under the soft, dim light of her room, a close-up reveals Marceau's captivating, glowing pink eyes filled with a mix of warmth and deep reflection. As Marceau thinks back, she remembers a bright, cheerful scene of Lejeune waving happily from a moving carriage while Prince Ryan sits beside her with a gentle smile. Marceau tightly clenches her hand against her lap as she privately resolves that helping others is not the only motivation driving her actions. With an open hand resting over her heart, Marceau looks forward earnestly, explaining that she wants to bring a sense of joy and hope to people who have suffered through situations similar to her own. A soft, blue-tinted flashback shows a weary girl sitting alone on her bed surrounded by books, as Marceau narrates her desire to offer comforting hobbies to those who feel completely burnt out and seek rest at home. The girl in the flashback gazes up at a beautiful picture on her wall, while Marso reflects that she wants to create stories and memories that will give people the strength to stand back up on their feet. Returning to the present, Marso smiles softly with a warm, elegant expression as she looks toward Darcy. Darcy sits in the shadowed room, his face partially obscured as he looks down with a somber, vulnerable, and troubled expression. Restless and uneasy, Darcy rests his hand on his knee, quietly admitting that it will be very difficult for him to offer her any help on this matter. Turning his back to her, Darcy bows his head in the dim room and softly asks if Marso would be willing to hear him out first. Meanwhile, far away at the magnificent imperial palace, a golden balance scale rests on a desk under the morning light as someone notes that Marso said something specific. Inside the palace, Prince Ryan addresses a maid named Letitia, politely thanking her and praising her for her good work. With heavy, echoing footsteps, Prince Ryan walks determinedly down the grand, sunlit corridor of the palace. Reaching a massive set of double doors, Prince Ryan slowly pushes them open with a solemn creak. Stepping inside the dimly lit chambers, Prince Ryan approaches the Emperor, his disheveled, bearded father who sits on a raised platform looking exhausted. Looking down at his father with a stern, focused gaze, Prince Ryan announces that he has fully assessed the current situation. Clasping his bandaged hand, the Emperor huffs and gasps in frustration, declaring that they absolutely must deal with Darcy. Sweat dripping from his brow, the grim Emperor mutters that they won't be able to achieve their goal alone. The Emperor urges Ryan, explaining that there is a sacred imperial treasure capable of completely breaking the curse of mind control, and that Ryan must find it. Looking intently at his father, Ryan asks if finding the treasure will make him completely immune to mind control, to which the Emperor firmly replies yes. The Emperor emphasizes that in order to strike Darcy down, they must acquire a weapon similar to or even more powerful than the one Darcy possesses. Ryan looks on with a startled expression as his father reveals his plan to make a strategic deal with the Ethicles. Surprised, Ryan asks if he means making a deal with the Ethical March, and the Emperor confidently asserts that they won't turn it down since the Marquis desperately needs Arcanium. A warm flashback shows Marquis Ethicals standing beside a smiling, lovely young Lejuan outside their grand estate. Prince Ryan points out with confusion that the Ethicals already own an Arcanium mine, asking his father what he could possibly mean by that. The Emperor looks up, his sharp, glowing blue eyes narrowing with intense seriousness. In a dark, swirling purple mist, hands hold a crumbling, glowing violet crystal as the Emperor warns that they are rapidly running out of Arcanium and that it will soon disappear entirely. Shocked by the news of the depletion, Ryan listens as the Emperor plots to pressure their captured wizards to forge a weapon vastly superior to Darcy's. Sweat beads on Ryan's face as he smiles nervously, thinking to himself that his father is in no state to have a rational, coherent conversation. Looking down at the disheveled ruler, Ryan silently decides that, for the time being, his best course of action is to contact the Ethicles himself. The Emperor looks up with a dark, cunning gaze, instructing Ryan that his next step must be to make Marso Etoile fall deeply in love with him. Ryan stands completely frozen in disbelief, sweating profusely as he wonders if his father has gone senile before stammering out a confused apology. A beautiful public announcement reveals that the reclusive prince has finally made his public debut at the theater, standing elegantly arm in arm with Marso. Public whispers continue, noting that Marso is the very first woman Darcy, who had never shown interest in anything, has ever set his eyes upon. Prince Ryan asks if this is related to Darcy, and the Emperor praises his son's sharp mind, declaring that Ryan is truly suited to be the crown prince. The Emperor explains that although Darcy rarely reveals his emotions, he has allowed Marso to get close, noting that a person's first love is always incredibly special. Ryan smiles with cold confidence as he imagines Darcy bound in heavy chains, agreeing that if they use Marso Etoile, they can easily manipulate Darcy. Ryan recalls Marso looking at him with a serious expression, thinking that while her behavior was slightly odd, she has begged for his attention for so long in the past that she couldn't possibly be over him. The Emperor confidently asserts that once Marso is granted the status and honor of being the Crown Prince's woman, absolutely no one will ever dare to mistreat her. Looking at his father, Ryan silently agrees that if Darcy becomes the Crown Prince, both he and Lejuan will be in grave danger, concluding that he must win Marso's heart for their survival. Ryan tightly clenches his fist in silent resolve, responding to his father with a firm, "Understood, Your Majesty." Standing tall in his white coat, Prince Ryan maintains a serious, determined expression as he prepares to embark on his new mission. The Emperor smiles proudly, telling Ryan that he takes after him and that winning a woman's heart should be effortless, urging his son to go and tackle his mission. Back in Marceau's bedroom, Darcy sits on the floor beside her bed, trembling slightly as he apologizes and confesses that this is very difficult for him. Looking up at her with a soft, pleading gaze and clasped hands, Darcy asks Marceau if she would please listen to a story first. Touched by his vulnerability, Marceau looks down at him with deep concern and reassures him that she will gladly listen to anything he needs to share. Under the gentle light, a close-up of Darcy's face shows him looking down, his striking heterochromatic eyes filled with a deep, quiet sadness. Explaining that it will be a very long story, Darcy softly asks if he can lie down next to her while he speaks, leaving Marceau flustered but eager to see his expressions during such a sensitive conversation. Darcy sits on the floor kneeling beside Marceau's bed, looking up at her with a gentle expression as he softly says, "All right." Leaning his head comfortably on his hand on the bed, Darcy looks at Marceau with a warm, relaxed smile and whispers, "Thanks." Touched by his vulnerability, Marceau lies down on the bed as well, resting her chin on her hands and gazing back at him with a warm smile. Beginning his long story, Darcy closes his eyes and reveals that his mother was a wizard who fell in love with the Emperor at first sight. Marceau privately thinks to herself that it is incredibly hard to imagine given the current emperor's disheveled state, but she has heard stories of how popular he was in his youth. Staring at Darcy's handsome features, Marceau silently notes that Ryan's and Darcy's good looks certainly had to come from somewhere. Darcy continues his tale, explaining that the Empire of Kais deeply hated wizards, and his mother was no exception to this deep-seated prejudice. Driven to desperation by the agonizing pain of her unrequited love, she committed a taboo act to gain the Emperor's favor by using her magical powers. Intrigued and slightly concerned, Marceau looks up and asks, "What power?" Darcy looks down with a complicated expression, quietly admitting that even now, he isn't entirely sure if revealing his power to her is a smart move. Looking at her with earnest devotion, Darcy explains that despite his hesitation, he simply didn't want her to hear the truth about him from anyone else. Marceau reflects on her knowledge of magic, noting that every wizard possesses a unique and powerful ability, which is why they were viewed as a dangerous threat by the Empire. Because of this fear, the royal family kept a paranoid and wary eye on all wizards, treating them like ticking time bombs that could attack at any moment. Staring directly into Darcy's eyes, Marceau resolves that she doesn't want to hear about him from outsiders, as their opinions would only be biased and negative. Marceau props herself up and tells Darcy directly that she feels the exact same way, wishing only to hear the truth directly from his own lips. Amused by her earnestness, Darcy smiles playfully and leans in closer, teasing that sometimes he feels like she is the one using a power on him because she always says exactly what he wants to hear. Marceau chuckles softly, replying that they must just have that much in common, to which Darcy laughs and agrees that he can't argue with that. Darcy's expression softens into quiet vulnerability as he gently rests his face in his hand and softly calls her name, Marceau. Looking directly at her with a solemn, pleading gaze, Darcy makes his ultimate confession, "I can mind control people." Marceau's eyes widen in sheer shock as she repeats the words in disbelief, "Mind control?" In a sudden realization, Marceau narrates that she already had a strong intuitive guess about this dark secret. She understood that this was the hidden truth behind how the incompetent imperial family managed to control the wizards, and how Ryan could effortlessly commercialize enchanted items at his whim. A dark memory flashes of a young, blood-spattered Darcy kept in captivity, as Marceau realizes that all of these imperial achievements were built on the suffering of Darcy, who had been cruelly imprisoned. Returning to the present, Darcy looks down anxiously, quietly telling her that if his confession freaks her out, she should tell him right away. Maintaining her composure, Marceau looks at him with gentle curiosity and asks, "How does mind control work exactly?" Darcy explains the terrifying ease of his ability, stating that all he has to do is call a person by their name and look them directly in the eyes. Startled by the power's absolute nature, Marceau sits up abruptly, asking if there is any limit since it sounds too powerful to be true, while Darcy asks if she isn't terrified of him. Darcy warns her that he could have easily controlled her without her ever realizing it, causing Marceau to sigh and flop back down onto her bed. Lying on her back, Marceau looks up and confidently asserts that her feelings for him are entirely genuine and built on her own experiences, and she knows this for an absolute certainty. Darcy looks down at her with a soft, relieved smile, expressing his deep gratitude and relief that she truly isn't afraid of him. Turning his back to her, Darcy somberly explains that his power is actually a horrific curse, revealing that it was how his mother snared the Emperor and the root cause of the ruler's burning hatred for wizards. He explains that while his mother was initially content with the manipulated kindness she forced from the Emperor, she eventually craved genuine love. Once the Emperor broke free of her control, he tried to banish her. Desperate to stay, his mother pacified the emperor's rage by offering him a terrifying bargaining, giving him a son who inherited her mind control abilities, and telling him to use the child however he pleased. Darcy clutches his chest in pain as he reveals the cruelest part of his past. His mother placed a spell on him so that if he ever disobeyed the emperor's orders before reaching adulthood, his heart would explode. Marceau sits up in complete horror, her eyes wide and sweating as she gasps out in disbelief, "What?" Darcy calmly confirms her horror, explaining that he could never deviate from the Emperor's commands and was forced to stand in his father's place on countless bloody battlefields. A dark, grim memory shows Darcy standing amidst a pile of slaughtered soldiers, forced to take the lives of countless innocent people under the Emperor's orders. Deeply saddened and overwhelmed by his tragic past, Marceau turns away, tears pricking her eyes as she whispers that his story is awful and she doesn't even know what to say. Marceau sits in a tense silence, desperately wondering if she should try to console him or if her words would only deepen his pain. Gently taking her gloved hand in his, Darcy looks at her with a quiet, bittersweet tenderness and says, "Marceau, that is why." Darcy looks down at her with a gentle, sad smile, telling her that simply wishing for his happiness is more than he could ever ask for. Under the dim light of the bedroom, Darcy looks at her with a quiet, heartbreaking smile, carrying the heavy weight of his past. Marceau stares back at him, her face filled with intense sympathy and deep sorrow for the suffering he has endured. With a sad, helpless smile, Darcy quietly states the painful truth he believes. "I don't deserve to be happy." Deeply angered by his self-blame, Marceau protests passionately, shouting that he was only being cruelly manipulated and forced into those actions. Darcy looks down, his voice soft but resolute as he replies that his manipulation doesn't change the fact that it was his own hands that took those lives. Marceau looks at Darcy, realizing with a heavy heart just how vast and deep the shadow truly is. Her glowing pink eyes fill with tears of deep empathy as she wonders how much pain and dark suffering he has kept hidden behind his gentle, beautiful smiles. The room falls into a quiet, heavy silence as the two sit together on the bed, their dark reflections mirrored on the polished floor beneath them. The dark panel closes the scene, emphasizing the tragic reality that Darcy was used, abused, and controlled his entire life. Despite everything, the path Darcy chose was not a bloody revenge against Kais, but rather self-exile. Instead of punishing the Emperor who had tainted his entire life with hatred, he chose to let go of everything, but at the last moment, instead of leaving. Marceau stands alone amidst the dark, towering trees under a branch of blooming pink cherry blossoms. Darcy gazes forward with a warm, gentle smile, his striking, heterochromatic eyes shining behind a cluster of pink blossoms. Abandoning his lifelong wish, Darcy ultimately chose my happiness. Marceau calls out Darcy's name as her gloved hand rests gently on the bed. Marceau looks at Darcy with earnest, sparkling pink eyes and tells him that if he truly wishes for her happiness, she needs him to become happy too. Darcy looks back at Marceau, completely stunned and wide-eyed at her unexpected request. Marceau stands tall, looking at him with a gentle and understanding smile. Darcy lowers his head slightly, overwhelmed by her words as her gloved hand remains extended toward him. Darcy repeats her words to himself in disbelief, wondering how he could ever be happy. As Darcy ponders the word happiness, a concept he has never tried to explore before, warm memories of Marceau and the time they spent together flash through his mind. The only thing that comes to his mind when thinking of happiness is Marceau, standing before him with a gentle, radiant smile. He recalls the serene moments when he could smile warmly while resting by her side. He remembers looking at Marceau as she slept peacefully, surrounded by a gentle, soothing aura. Returning to the present, Darcy's eye widens with a surge of intense emotion. Darcy sits on the side of the bed, looking up at Marceau as she gazes down at him with quiet concern. Staring at the lips that spoke of his happiness, Darcy gently reaches out to touch her face. He leans in close, holding her face in his hand as the space between them vanishes in a tense, romantic moment. Darcy suddenly gasps and snaps back, asking himself what he was doing and telling himself to snap out of it. Clenching his fist, Darcy resolves that he must not think of Marceau romantically, as he doesn't want to chase a fleeting emotion and simply wants to stay by her side just like this. Marceau observes him closely, her expression turning slightly worried and solemn. Marceau breaks the silence with a gentle smile, reassuring him that she knows it won't be easy and suggesting they take it little by little and talk about it some other time. Darcy blushes furiously, his cheeks turning bright pink as he looks at her in embarrassed silence. Startled and deeply embarrassed, Darcy suddenly springs up from the bed with his face turned away. Blushing intensely, Darcy covers his face and mutters that he will see her later as he quickly exits the room and clicks the door shut. Left alone in the quiet bedroom, Marceau stands in deep thought, her gaze falling upon the silver camera resting on a nearby table. Marceau contemplates that the reason Darcy is denying himself the right to be happy is likely his deep guilt over the wizards, whom he was forced to threaten and attack under Kai's orders. Marceau reaches her gloved hand toward the magical camera, wondering if there is something she can do. Marceau looks at the camera with sharp determination, wondering if she can use it to help the wizards. She recalls that the story focused on Darcy's happy life with Le Guin afterward, without putting much emphasis on the fate of the wizards. Marceau reasons that since Ryan is Kaya's son, he wouldn't have treated the wizards well, meaning they were likely exploited for their magical tools and then neglected. She remembers that the Empire regularly raided the wizards, sparing only a few who turned against their own kind and pledged loyalty to the crown. Public opinion of the wizards was highly negative, driving many oppressed wizards to rebel against the Empire in a violent, endless cycle of conflict. However, a mysterious detail remains. Even though the Emperor could have easily annihilated the wizards using Darcy's power, he chose not to. Instead, the Emperor kept the conflict alive, as if tormenting the wizards with false hope. It appeared as though the Emperor intentionally wanted the wizards to keep returning to the battlefield. The Emperor's face is shown in profile, bearing a sinister, cold smile as he masterminds the endless conflict. This leaves a burning question. Why did the Emperor do such a thing? Marceau knows there must be a hidden motive behind the Emperor's actions, even if she has yet to uncover it. She notes that the wizards, exhausted by years of oppression, eventually retreated deep into the forest. Finding the wizards, establishing a collaborative relationship, and creating magical tools together has now become Marceau's main goal. Feeling a deep empathy because of her own past struggles, Marceau is determined to reach out and offer her help to them. Chibi Marceau crosses her arms with a proud grin, thinking that since she has plenty of money to fund this endeavor, there is no reason not to try. Even if the crown spreads malicious rumors and tries to disadvantage her, Marceau confidently smiles, knowing she has already survived much worse. She fondly recalls the quiet moments shared with Darcy, reinforcing her desire to help him find happiness. Marceau sits tall in her study, her pink eyes glowing with resolved determination to see her plan through. The butler enters the study and hands Marceau a stack of letters, which she politely asks him to leave on her desk. Everyone's raving about the play. As expected, I receive letters from mostly art-loving nobles. Everyone in the social circle are potential clients. I need to get out there again. Which tea party should I attend first? Marceau looks down at her desk, her pink eyes widening in sudden shock and alarm as she notices a particular letter in the pile. What's this? Why is this name in the pile? Ryan. Holding the letter with a trembling hand, Marceau stares down in absolute disbelief and growing dread. Is this some sort of a noble way of saying it? So he can see me in person and cut my head off? Not taking no for an answer? Has he got noodles for brain? Not so long ago he had a spy on me and looked at me with such disdain. Why would I want to see him? Does he still think I like him? I need to write a rejection letter as soon as possible. Huh? There's another page. She turns to the second page of the letter, which details a grand royal event being hosted at the palace. A celebration for Darcy. In that case, I guess I have no choice but to show up. Meanwhile, in the grand hallways of the Imperial Palace, an Imperial guard walks down the corridor with a worried expression. Prince Darcy has disappeared since his last outing. He hasn't been showing up in the office for 3 days. He's got to be in here. I'm coming in, Your Highness. May I ask what you were doing? Darcy lies listlessly across a plush chair, staring up at the ceiling in a state of deep, silent melancholy. You must have a lot to think about concerning your future as a prince. Not at all. Huh? Then what are you thinking about? I don't see why I need to tell you that. Seeing you've made the hike here, you must have something to report. He's beautiful and graceful. He's a prince, all right. Things ended well. Emperor Caius met up with Prince Ryan. Pay close attention to everyone Ryan comes in contact with from now on. Report to me every single one of them. A terrifying shadow of Darcy's true dark nature looms as he imagines crushing his enemies in his palm, thinking to himself that a simple death would be no fun. He plots to give them some room to breathe, only to completely crush them the moment they begin to feel a sliver of hope. A dark and menacing memory flashes through Darcy's mind of him choking his abuser, looking forward to savoring the absolute ruin of his enemies. But I'll keep it somewhat civil. I don't want to frighten Marceau. Secretly contact all wizards that has any connections with the palace. I want to meet with them. There's arcanium embedded in that cape. It will help you stalk the prince incognito. Thank you. Oh, I heard there's going to be a party for you next week. How's the preparation going? A party? Yes, I heard that all the nobles of the empire are attending. I'm just now finding out about this. All nobles are attending, eh? I've got to look my best for Marso. Your Grace, we're all set. Are you sure you want to wear this dress and the pearl necklace? I think they look great, but they're rather modest. Don't you want a fancier dress? Nope, this is perfect. I love this look on me. I'm not the star of the show, so I don't want to steal the scene. All I need to do is get this gift to Darcy. Inside the elegant velvet-lined box sits a collection of stunning raw purple magic crystals. I hope this shows how much I care about Darcy. I want to make it clear that I fully support him as the new prince. Wow, I've never seen this many carriages in one place before. The royal palace is no joke. Marso looks out the window of her carriage, watching the vast procession of noble carriages arriving at the grand entrance of the palace. I'm sure they don't all have pure intentions. The last-minute notice of a banquet that they probably couldn't make proper preparations for, and the sudden appearance of a new prince. They'll all be gossiping about his birth story. How pathetic. Darcy. It's been a while since I last saw him. Why am I so nervous? I wonder if he's given my request some thought. Will he need more time? Sunlight streams beautifully through the tall arched stained glass windows as Marso enters the palace corridors. I can't wait to see Darcy, but I guess I should head into the ballroom first. Hey there. Hearing a sudden familiar voice behind her, Marso stops dead in her tracks, her eyes widening in recognition. Marso slowly turns around, her face turning pale as she is confronted by the last person she wanted to see. It's Ryan. Even though he's dressed up to a T for the public event, he still looks so annoying. Even his voice sounds gross. I wish I could wash it off my ears, Marso thinks in disgust as she gazes at Ryan. Marso maintains her composure, greeting him formally. It's been a while, Your Highness. I saw Lady LeJoin's carriage on the way in, so she should be stepping in any moment. Ryan glances to the side with a serious expression and says, I need to talk to you. Looking away with a cold, weary gaze, Marso requests, please make it quick then. There are eyes watching here, and Lady LeJoin will be arriving soon. Ryan opens a nearby door and gestures for her to enter. It's gonna take a while, so let's talk in this room. How exhausting. I don't want to give people anything to talk about, Marso complains inwardly. With a click, she reluctantly agrees, saying, fine. In here, huh? With a loud slam, the door shuts behind them, locking them inside the quiet room. Marso flinches in surprise as the sudden, loud sound of the door slamming behind her. Yikes, she thinks in alarm, finding herself backed against the door as Ryan towers over her. Ryan looks down at her with a smug, knowing smile, thinking, is this what she's been waiting for? Getting all close like this? Being so close to him in a closed space is repulsing, Marso thinks, quickly bringing her gloved hand up to cover her nose and mouth to shield herself from his presence. Ryan breaks the silence, speaking softly, I've given this some thought. Looking over his shoulder with a softened gaze, Ryan adds, I think I've been too harsh on you. Marso stares back, her pink eyes wide with utter shock. That must have been an unsightly scene, Marso contemplates. It's not like he's apologizing the day after finding out about the spy, but he's being pushy about accepting his apology after a brick of time. He's taking me for a complete fool, she realizes with a glare. He's expecting me to accept his sudden and unreasonable explanations without questioning any of it. Looking at him, she notes, in Ryan's mind, I'm still Marso that's in love with Ryan. Why can't he accept that things have changed? Does he wish for me to continue to like him? Marso wonders, her fingers resting thoughtfully on her lips. Looking up at him, she analyzes the situation. Why, though? Does Ryan somehow benefit from me liking him? For some reason, especially of late? She recalls the past details. It's because of Darcy. So far, I'm the only one known to be close to Darcy. So he's trying to use me, she deduces as memories of their past conflicts flash through her mind. Everything he's done makes sense now. Right, it has to take something as big as that for him to apologize. Marso looks upward with a confident, proud expression. Then it's time to deeply ingrain in his mind that Marso that loves Ryan does not exist. Feigning relief, Marso places a hand over her heart and says, I'm so glad to hear you finally believe me, she continues, offering him a gentle, seemingly sweet smile. Ryan's expression remains solemn as he responds, this means that we can finally put an end to this all. Marso plays along with a serene smile, since you've always antagonized me because of my feelings. Ryan's blue eye narrows as he asks, what do you mean by that exactly? Marso responds warmly, well, of course, you're saying you accept the fact I don't love you anymore, right? It's because you didn't accept that in the past that you've harassed me, accusing me of harming Lejean. Hearing this, Ryan stammers, harass you? Marceau quickly chimes in, oh my, you just said you'd admit that I've changed, but now you're saying something different. Sweating slightly, Ryan tries to correct himself. Well, I was saying that I believe you won't bother Lejean anymore. With a sharp, calm look, Marceau replies, I believe that means the same thing. She recalls past accusations of her pushing Lejean down. If I don't bother her anymore, he has no proof that I still like him. Ryan stares at her, looking increasingly unsettled and defensive. Realizing he is shook, Marceau takes a decisive step forward. You didn't see this coming, huh? Marceau thinks with a triumphant smile as she gets closer to him. I no longer have any feelings for you, Ryan, Marceau declares directly, leaving him completely stunned and letting out a quiet, defeated, ugh. The way he's looking at me is completely different than before. It's not hatred or disgust, but pure confusion. Finally, for the first time, the distortions and delusions are gone, Marceau thinks, imagining the false mirror image of her past self shattering into a million pieces. Ryan stands completely frozen, his eyes wide in disbelief at her sudden change of attitude. The two stand opposite each other in the sunlit room, Marceau upright and dignified, while Ryan remains completely speechless. Marceau presses on. I trust you're not the type to speak with a forked tongue. This means you will no longer get swept up by the false rumors that I'm harassing Lady Lejean, right? Now that we've cleared up our deep-rooted misunderstandings, I'll make it known to everyone that you will no longer get riled up by the rumors. Marceau's eyes gleam with a clever determination. This is my opportunity to put an end to this drama. I need to drive this in so there's no room for him to weasel out. Now, what will he do? Throw his mask off and lash out? Ryan lets out a heavy, frustrated sigh. He grits his teeth in frustration, asking, so you don't love me anymore, huh? Observing his intense reaction, Marceau thinks, he's lamenting? What the hell? Before asking aloud, isn't that what you want? I've changed, so I won't be bothering Lady Lejean, your woman. You won't? Ryan retorts, his expression darkening with a mixture of resentment and doubt. If you've really changed... Ryan takes a threatening step closer, looming over her. Why would you take back your word on staying home and come to see me? Startled by his logic, Marceau quickly fires back. What? Me staying home wasn't for you in the first place. That's why. He's scaring me. Why is he getting so close? Marceau thinks, feeling cornered as Ryan leans in near her face. Suddenly, a massive boom echoes through the room. An enormous explosion bursts right behind them. What's that? The door blew up! Marceau cries out in shock. Through the billowing smoke, a pair of boots strides in. Phew! What kind of prince pulls such a cheap stunt like this? Darcy complains as he enters, waving the dust away. With a cold, piercing gaze, Darcy looks down at Ryan and says, I already knew you're petty, but you should at least know who you shouldn't mess with. Ryan points an angry finger and yells in outrage. Do you realize what you just did has huge implications against the palace? Darcy! Darcy stands tall and smug next to Marceau, completely unfazed as Ryan looms behind them, seething with anger. Darcy closes his eyes with a sly, serene smile, looking incredibly satisfied with himself. Marceau looks upward in astonishment as she realizes that the warmth Darcy shows is reserved exclusively for her, thinking, is only for me and can only be made by me. A close-up of Marceau's face reveals her cheeks flushed with a soft pink blush as she processes her thoughts in silence. Darcy gently holds Marceau's hand as they walk away together, leaving Ryan staring in stunned, bitter silence in the background. Darcy and Marceau walk through the Grand Palace corridor arm in arm, drawing the attention of other nobles, including Lady Lejean, who watches them with a fan. The noble guests whisper frantically among themselves as they watch the pair pass by, saying, he's that guy from earlier, shh. Marceau looks to the side with a tense sweat drop, thinking, judging by the way everyone's glancing and looking away, the explosion was Darcy's doing. As they walk away from the crowd, Marceau looks up at him and asks, Darcy, why did you blow up the door? Darcy simply replies, for a couple of reasons. Darcy looks back over his shoulder with a sharp, dangerous smile and explains, it's to show the nobles what kind of person I am. It's also a warning to Ryan to watch his actions from now on. In a cute chibi panel, Marceau asks, what kind of person do you want people to think you are? Darcy happily replies, a psycho you don't want to mess with. Marceau giggles behind her gloved hand, saying, haha, well, you did the right thing then. I think it worked on Ryan, too. Smiling brightly, Marceau spins around and pats Darcy on the shoulder. Darcy freezes in surprise, thinking, pats on my shoulder? Is this like a compliment? Noticing his sudden stiff posture, Marceau asks, oh, you don't like it? I'll stop. Darcy quickly bends down, clutching his knee in a sudden movement as his hand brushes past his long royal sash. In a shocking display, Darcy drops to one knee directly in front of Marceau, looking up at her in the middle of the corridor. Darcy looks up at her with a soft, breathtaking expression, his heterochromatic red and blue eyes sparkling amidst a flurry of white rose petals. Marceau's eyes widen in sheer panic as she sweats profusely, thinking, this is a new perspective for sure. I'm in a pickle. I had the crown prince kneeled in front of me. Bending down slightly, Marceau urgently commands, "Get up, Darcy!" Darcy looks up and says with a sly smile, "I will, if you pet my head." Darcy looks at her expectantly, saying, "You only have to do it for a little bit." Marceau reluctantly reaches her hand out, sighing, "Okay, just for a second." Suddenly, Marceau freezes midair and pulls back, thinking, "Nope, no way. It's weird to pet your friend's head. I feel like I'm crossing a boundary." Marceau looks conflicted and worried, thinking, let's think about this. Darcy may not know the social rules since he's new to making friends. Clenching her gloved fist tightly, Marceau's inner monologue continues, "But I should know better." Darcy's beautiful heterochromatic eyes narrow slightly as he watches her intently from below. Darcy gently leans his cheek into Marceau's hand, looking up at her with an incredibly sweet and adoring smile that melts her resolve. In adorable chibi style, Marceau sweat drops in sighs, thinking, "And I give up," as she finally relents and gives Darcy head pats. Closing her eyes, Marceau thinks, "All right, I'll do it this once." Marceau gently places her hand on Darcy's soft white hair as he kneels before her, a peaceful smile on his face. A beautiful close-up shows Marceau's gloved hand gently petting Darcy's head under a warm, sparkling glow. Marceau looks down at him, her eyes softening as she thinks, his hair feels so soft. Darcy closes his eyes, deeply comforted by her touch. Marceau contemplates, "This may seem ridiculous, but to me, it doesn't feel so strange. It feels natural, and he looks comforted." A flashback panel shows them sleeping peacefully side by side on a couch as children. Looking down at the kneeling prince, Marceau thinks with a gentle smile, "I hope that in his future." Darcy looks up with a serious, vulnerable expression and asks, "Do you think I'm weird? How I can only bring myself to be serious over things pertaining to you?" Marceau looks at him with a warm, understanding expression and responds, "I don't think you're weird. I may have thought that if I didn't know about your past, but I do." Darcy looks away with a gentle, soft smile, admitting, "For me, I find it so difficult to define the emotions I have for you." Marceau silently agrees, thinking, "I feel the same." Marceau stands thoughtfully as she considers their relationship, reflecting, "I don't know exactly how Darcy sees me, whether it's romantic or if it's an extraordinary friendship, as it is his first one." A circular frame at the bottom depicts a memory of their childhood selves. Marceau's gloved hand rests over her dress as she admits to herself, "Plus, I'm equally confused about my own feelings." A dramatic split panel shows Marceau and Darcy looking forward with deep, contemplative gazes as Marceau wonders, "What is it that I want?" from Darcy. Surrounded by beautiful white roses, a narration box reads, "I tell myself I need to draw some boundaries." A close-up of their hands approaching each other in a glittering golden light highlights their deep connection. Framed by white flowers, Marceau's inner thoughts read, "But whenever he gets close, I helplessly get pulled in." An elegant, romantic scene shows Darcy holding Marceau close as she dips backward in a beautiful dress. Marceau wonders, do I want us to remain friends, or do I want us to be closer? Against a background of blooming white roses, Marceau continues to reflect, "There's so much I don't understand, but I know one thing for sure." Marceau looks up at Darcy with a bright, beautiful smile and says, "How about we just keep talking some more?" She suggests warmly, "Since neither of us have the answer, let's just follow our hearts." Darcy and Marceau walk side by side down the grand hall, smiling and chatting in high spirits, their worries completely set aside. An artistic, dreamlike illustration shows young Darcy and Marceau floating in a starry violet sky above winter trees. Marceau thinks, "I don't want to have any regrets when it comes to my relationship with Darcy." Darcy looks up toward the light with a calm, serene expression, while Marceau's final thoughts echo, "I don't want to hastily judge or assume the depth of his feelings." Relationships are complex, and they can't be defined by just one thing. What I'm saying is, it's okay to feel confused. Warm sunlight streams through a beautiful arched glass window in the Grand Palace corridor, casting a serene glow over the quiet hallway. Darcy looks down with a softened expression, whispering that it is a first for him, as no one has ever told him it's okay to be confused before. Marceau looks at Darcy with a gentle, warm smile, her gaze filled with understanding. Darcy gently takes Marceau's hand in his white-gloved hand, whispering that she always Darcy looks up at her with a soft, breathtaking expression, his heterochromatic red and blue eyes sparkling as he says that she always has all the answers for him and has never been wrong once. Marceau's cheeks flush with a soft pink blush as her heart beats rapidly, completely flustered by his sweet and sincere words. Darcy turns and suggests they head out, while Marceau walks along beside him, asking him to wait for her. A pair of noble ladies stand in the hallway, whispering frantically among themselves, gesturing toward Darcy as they recognize him as the man from the explosion earlier. Marceau walks stiffly as she notices more rumors brewing among the whispering nobles, while Darcy casually replies that he doesn't care. The two arrive in front of a pair of massive, elegant white double doors adorned with intricate golden patterns. Turning to Darcy, Marceau announces that they have arrived and asks if he is ready. A close-up of Marceau's profile reveals her looking serious and deeply contemplative. Darcy looks back at her with a calm, handsome smile and simply asks, "What?" Darcy looks at Marceau and says, "Remember when you said I gave you all the answers? It's your turn to give me one. What will make you happy?" Marceau stands startled as Darcy leans in close, declaring with determination that he is not backing up until she answers him. Darcy looks at her with an intense, serious gaze from his beautiful heterochromatic eyes. Darcy presses on, stating that if she doesn't tell him, he supposes he could look for the answer himself. Marceau places her white-gloved hand firmly against the grand door, preparing to push it open. As she pushes the door open, Marceau looks back at him and mentions that this is the first time she's ever asked him for a favor. With a confident smile, Marceau looks back over her shoulder and says she'll be waiting for his answer. Darcy stands quietly in the corridor, watching her walk away with a thoughtful, serious expression. Marceau steps onto the red carpet of the grand, brightly lit banquet hall filled with noble guests. A giant, luxurious crystal chandelier hangs from the ceiling, sparkling brilliantly over the ballroom. Marceau slightly squints her eyes, thinking about how the chandelier is shining so bright it could pierce her eyes blind. She is met with the sharp, dagger-like gazes of the silhouetted noble guests staring at her in the dark ballroom atmosphere. Clenching her fist, Marceau thinks it feels like she's back in high society, but she is warmly greeted by friendly nobles welcoming her back. Hearing footsteps, Marceau quickly turns her head toward the sound. Lady Lejoine stands elegantly among beautiful white flowers, looking at Marceau with a gentle expression. Lejoine curtsies gracefully and says it has been a while since they last met. After her greeting, Lejoine turns away with a cool, distant look. Marceau looks surprised and startled by Lejoine's cold departure. Marceau reflects on how Lejoine has changed, no longer approaching her warmly like she used to and expecting nothing from her. An overhead view shows Lejoine walking away down the red carpet, leaving Marceau standing with the other nobles. Marceau closes her eyes, resolving that she needs to maintain this distance to avoid getting hurt, when someone suddenly calls her name. A noble lady asks Marceau why she hasn't been coming out lately and if there's been a problem, as everyone is curious about her. A dark silhouette of Marceau is shown as she reflects on how many rumors spread after her sudden disappearance, but no one could uncover the truth. On a shattered glass background showing Lejeune and Ryan, Marceau remembers being tired of people chasing rumors and facing the main characters. Clutching her chest, Marceau reflects on how she spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to explain things, but Ryan has made it easy for her today. Marceau explains to the curious nobles that she cleared up the misunderstandings that had built up with Prince Ryan, prompting a noble to ask what misunderstandings she means. Marceau smiles gracefully, explaining that she clarified she was not chasing Prince Ryan for his love, noting how tough it was to be misunderstood. In a chibi-style panel, Marceau humorously asks the nobles if they remember how everyone thought she was jealous of Lady Lejoine. Holding her champagne glass, Marceau confidently explains that jealousy was never the case, and since the prince finally acknowledged it, she wishes them the best from the bottom of her heart. The pink-haired noble lady looks downcast and surprised, admitting she had no idea about the truth. The noble ladies crowd around Marceau, eagerly asking how she knows Prince Darcy since they seem to know each other so well and watched a play together. Looking away, Marceau thinks about how everyone is curious about Darcy and notes that he is indeed very handsome. High-angle view of the nobles talking as one of them suggests that Darcy's sudden appearance and decadent charm are not a coincidence. A close-up of Marceau raising her glass of champagne as she thinks about how much Darcy has helped her out. Marceau sips her champagne, thinking about how Darcy has also helped this entire country. A flashback displays Darcy's heroic achievements, clearing out pirates, preventing foreign invasions, stopping internal conflicts, and revealing him as the true hero falsely credited to the Emperor, showing why he is exceptionally competent in every aspect. Lady Marceau is asked if she has moved over the gifts she brought to celebrate the welcoming of the new prince, to which her attendant confirms that the box of arcanium stones is safe and ready to be delivered. The surrounding guests begin whispering in disbelief, shocked to hear that she is giving away incredibly valuable arcanium stones as gifts. Holding a glass of champagne, Lady Marceau confidently confirms to herself that she is indeed gifting him the precious arcanium stones. Instantly, the surrounding nobles crowd around Lady Marceau to invite her to their own upcoming events and mansions, creating a sudden uproar of attention. Lady Marceau suddenly looks startled as she spots something in the crowd. Turning around, she notices Prince Ryan and Lady Lejuan finally meeting up in the distance. She thinks they should just stick together, but she's stunned to see Lejuan bow and walk away with another noble, seemingly abandoning Ryan. Marceau is surprised since they always stay together at every banquet, but she quickly dismisses it, telling herself that whatever happened between them is none of her business. The high priest raises a golden crown, announcing that the crown prince's inauguration ceremony is about to begin, and asking all distinguished guests to face forward. Lady Marceau stands gracefully in the crowd, turning her attention toward the front as the ceremony commences. Darcy walks up the red-carpeted grand staircase, dressed in a magnificent black and gold royal uniform. Lady Marceau reflects on how Darcy, who lived in the shadows for so many years, is finally getting his rightful status officially recognized as he kneels before the Emperor. Sitting on his throne, the Emperor addresses the crowd, declaring that they have gathered to celebrate the birth of a new prince. The Emperor looks down at Darcy, explaining that he believes having a second prince will benefit Prince Ryan's growth. The Emperor places the golden crown onto Darcy's head, saying that this is what he wished for. Looking serious, the Emperor officially declares Darcy as a prince. With a swift motion, the Emperor turns away from the newly crowned prince. A tense, chilly silence falls over the grand hall as everyone watches the interaction. Darcy gently touches his crown with a clink, his eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Darcy twirls the crown on his finger with an audacious smirk, whispering that it might not just stop at Ryan's growth and wondering what else could happen. Shocked and angry, the Emperor turns back to glare at him, demanding to know how he dares to behave so disrespectfully. With a mischievous smile, Darcy casually tells the Emperor not to mind him, leaving the crowd whispering frantically in utter disbelief. Lady Marceau looks on, completely flustered and sweat-dropping at Darcy's bold and unpredictable behavior. Darcy stands proudly at the top of the stairs, looking down directly at Lady Marceau. A close-up reveals Darcy's heterochromatic red and blue eyes as he gazes at her with a soft, warm smile. Feeling her heart race, Marceau places her hand over her chest, thinking that his enchanting smile could easily charm anyone. Turning back to the guests, Darcy thanks everyone for showing up today, regardless of their motives for attending the event. Darcy holds his golden crown, declaring that moving forward. With a beautiful and bright smile, Darcy says he hopes everyone makes choices they won't regret, and that he looks forward to getting to know them all. Observing him, Lady Marceau thinks that the role of a prince suits Darcy perfectly, far more than being a simple merchant. She smiles softly up at him, feeling extremely proud. As the light shines over him, Marceau reflects on how naturally the spotlight suits Darcy. Looking up at him on the grand stairs, she feels captivated by his presence. Darcy stands elegantly, holding his crown and looking back down at her with a gentle gaze. Suddenly, the tense atmosphere shifts as a woman wobbles on her feet nearby, catching Marceau's attention. Lejuan faints and falls forward, prompting a shocked gasp from Marceau as she quickly catches her. Lejuan lies completely unconscious in Marceau's arms, leaving Marceau deeply worried. Marceau checks Leguan and is relieved that they avoided a serious head injury, but she is shocked by how cold Leguan's body feels, wondering if she is seriously ill. A panicked voice rings out as Leguan's grandfather, the Marquis, screams her name in horror. The Marquis and a young noble rush over to where Leguan lies unconscious, pleading with her to wake up. Marceau quietly thinks to herself that it is a relief she fell down with Lejuan, as it prevents people from falsely accusing her of pushing her. The young man quickly offers to carry Lejuan and lifts her off the ground. A close-up shows the young man firmly grasping Lejuan's shoulder to lift her. The Marquis steps in and insists on carrying Lejuan himself, stating that she is his granddaughter. The Marquis holds Lejuan close, his face filled with worry and determination. Marceau watches them with a deeply concerned expression. The Marquis grinds his teeth in frustration, muttering that they do not know what is wrong with her. Prince Ryan approaches the Marquis, offering to escort them out of the hall. The Marquis, carrying Lejuan, is escorted out by Prince Ryan as they quickly leave the banquet hall. Marceau remains kneeling on the floor, surrounded by shocked nobles who stand in stunned silence after the sudden incident. As a hand reaches out, a voice calls Marceau's name to get her attention. Prince Darcy stands elegantly dressed in his magnificent black and gold royal uniform, extending his hand towards Marceau with a warm, gentle smile. Marceau looks up in surprise and awe, gazing directly at Darcy as he reaches out to help her. Marceau tries to reassure Darcy that she is fine, but as she attempts to stand, her ankle wobbles and she loses her balance. Marceau looks down at her foot, admitting that she thinks she might have sprained her ankle but insisting it isn't too bad. Darcy closes his eyes with a soft, knowing smile, preparing to take matters into his own hands. With a swift and smooth motion, Darcy sweeps Marceau up into his arms, carrying her bridal style. Completely startled, Marceau blushes furiously and panics, not knowing where to place her hands in his embrace. The surrounding noble guests begin to whisper and gossip excitedly, fully convinced that Marceau and Darcy are in a romantic relationship. Embarrassed by all the attention, Marceau shyly suggests to Darcy that she can simply get an attendant to help her. Darcy looks down at her with an enchanting, gentle gaze, telling her that she is safest if he carries her himself. Marceau turns her face away slightly as her cheeks flush bright red, her heart racing from his sudden closeness. Darcy carries Marceau securely in his arms as they make their exit from the crowded grand hall. As Darcy walks away with Marceau, Prince Ryan watches them from behind with a dark, complicated expression. High-angle view of Darcy carrying Marceau down the red carpet, with Ryan following closely behind. Darcy turns his head slightly, his expression growing serious and cold as Ryan continues to follow them. Ryan demands to know why Darcy chose this exact moment to leave instead of waiting, and Darcy retorts that he simply wanted to follow Lady Lejeune, questioning why Ryan is asking obvious questions. In chibi panels, Ryan complains about Darcy ruining a perfect exit timing, while Darcy remains completely unfazed and indifferent. Darcy glances back, pointedly asking Ryan if he has something to say to Marceau, noting that now is the perfect opportunity. Ryan looks taken aback, his expression turning tense and hesitant. Darcy's gaze hardens with a chilly intensity, making it clear that Ryan's excuses are transparent to him. Marceau quietly thinks to herself that she doesn't need to hear anything from Ryan, realizing he still refuses to believe that she is genuinely changed. Ryan gulps nervously, while Marceau assumes his pride was simply hurt because the Marquis ignored him earlier, deciding to be the understanding one. Ryan twitches in annoyance, mentally shouting that his ego is not hurt and making excuses for why the Marquis followed Darcy. Ryan stops in his tracks, staring at Marceau and wondering if she has always behaved this calmly and distantly around him. Ryan recalls the old Marceau, remembering her as someone cold, manipulative, and only nice to him when he was of use to her. Looking at her current peaceful and mature expression, Ryan realizes this is a completely new side of Marceau that he has never seen before. Standing between memories of her dark, manipulative past self and her current graceful persona, Ryan questions which one is the real Marceau and if she has truly changed. Ryan shakes his head, convincing himself that it is too early to judge and that he must remain cautious to protect Lejeune from any potential harm. As they walk outside under the bright blue sky, Marceau relaxes, realizing that being carried in Darcy's strong arms is surprisingly comfortable. Hearing Ryan's footsteps following behind them, Marceau looks up at Darcy and reminds him that he needs to return to his own celebratory banquet since he is the star of the ball. Darcy smiles warmly down at her, reassuring her that they are almost at their destination and that he has spent plenty of time at the party already. Ryan catches up with a panicked shout asking Darcy if he is heading towards the royal physician's office. Darcy sighs and confirms his destination, while Marceau, completely oblivious to where they are going, asks him where they are headed. Darcy continues walking resolutely toward the beautiful white marble estate of the royal physician. Ryan rushes ahead, frantically explaining that the head physician, Robarda, must be busy treating the unconscious Lejeune at this very moment. Darcy glares back with a fierce, cold intensity, declaring that he doesn't care and pointing out that Marceau's injury is Ryan's fault anyway, insisting on getting her the best care. Marceau tries to protest, saying she only needs some rest, but Darcy gently shushes her and promises it will be quick. Marceau sighs with a helpless but fond smile, noting how stubbornly determined Darcy is to get her treated by the royal physician. Ryan offers to scout ahead, suggesting they shouldn't startle the physician by entering all at once, and approaches the large white doors. Ryan opens the door with a click, starting to speak hesitantly as he enters the room. A refined, silver-haired woman in a doctor's coat turns around, prompting Marceau to wonder if she is the famed head physician, Robarda. Darcy cheerfully confirms her identity as he carries Marceau closer. Ryan stands at the entrance, speaking to the calm head physician inside her office. Darcy looks closely, realizing that the office is completely peaceful and there is no sign of Lejeune being treated here. Ryan turns around to report the shocking news that Lejeune never actually came to the physician's office today. Marceau is deeply bewildered, wondering why Lejeune didn't seek immediate medical attention when her condition seemed so critical. The physician steps forward, addressing Darcy with professional respect as she recognizes him as the new prince. Robarda bows politely, expressing her pleasure at meeting the newly crowned prince. Darcy nods politely, requesting that they step inside so she can immediately examine Marceau's sprained ankle. Roberta informs Marceau that she will have to lift her dress slightly to examine her sprained ankle. Darcy stands nearby, looking slightly embarrassed as he watches them prepare for the ankle examination. Marceau tells Darcy that it is just her ankle and that he can stay, to which Darcy eagerly agrees. Roberta gently holds Marceau's foot to inspect the sprained ankle. Roberta smiles warmly, reassuring Marceau with her calm and experienced manner. Marceau blushes slightly, feeling a bit self-conscious under the physician's kind gaze. Roberta applies healing herbs to the sprain, promising that Marceau will be able to walk again in just 5 minutes. Marceau is amazed as she immediately feels the soothing relief washing over her sprained ankle. Roberta offers to package extra herbs and provide flat-heeled shoes, requesting to check Marceau for any other injuries. Marceau warmly thanks Roberta, praising her skills, and the physician kindly accepts the gratitude. Marceau rustles her dress and prepares to test if she can walk on her healed ankle. Marceau stands up in amazement, completely free of any pain from her sprain. As Darcy suggests they head back, Roberta suddenly calls out to him, stopping him. Roberta bows respectfully, hesitantly asking if she may speak with the prince. Roberta clarifies that her words do not concern Marceau, but are instead about the prince himself. Roberta asks Darcy if he would prefer to hear what she has to say in private. Darcy's expression turns grave as he contemplates her request for a private conversation. Darcy agrees to the private conversation, indicating that they can speak right there. Roberta expresses her deep joy at finally being able to face Darcy directly. Roberta looks at Darcy with a gentle smile, while Darcy is left momentarily speechless. A tense silence fills the room as Darcy swallows nervously, waiting for what she will say next. Roberta bows deeply to Darcy, confessing that she has always carried an immense sense of guilt. Darcy recalls his painful past when he was dragged around and treated as Kai's personal puppet, realizing Roberta remembers him. He remembers that even though his face was entirely hidden behind a helmet, Roberta had recognized that he was not Kai's. Roberta remorsefully admits that she lacked the power and courage to stand up for him back then, but always kept him in her thoughts. Darcy stands silently, listening to her heartfelt confession with a complicated mix of emotions. With a soft creak, Darcy opens the door and exits the physician's office. Darcy walks down the marble hallway, holding the jug of herbs as Marceau walks beside him. Marceau gazes at Darcy with deep concern, gently asking if he is all right. Darcy looks down with a melancholic expression, reflecting on how strange it is that she remembered him. Darcy dismisses his thoughts coldly, stating that it does not matter since he never asked for her help anyway. Darcy continues walking in silence, his expression hardening as he distances himself from the memories. Marceau quietly observes him, noting to herself that he still accepted the gift despite his cold words. Ryan suddenly emerges in the garden, desperately pleading with Darcy to use his magic to locate the missing Lijuan. Darcy immediately rejects the request with a flat and blunt refusal. Ryan begs Darcy to reconsider, asking him if he truly doesn't understand how desperate he is. Something in Ryan's words causes Darcy to flinch, his eyes narrowing as a tense realization strikes him. Darcy suddenly alerts Ryan that they are not alone, noting the urgent sound of multiple approaching footsteps. Marceau looks around in confusion, unable to hear the distant footsteps that Darcy has easily detected. With a swift motion, Darcy grabs Marceau and pulls her close, hiding her behind him as she complies in surprise. But Darcy explains to Marceau that it is better to hide and watch from the bushes to avoid any unnecessary hassle. Marceau flinches in shock as she spots 2 men discreetly carrying a mysterious large chest through the garden. She notices a soft purple glow emanating from the chest, wondering with dread if it could contain arcanium stones. One of the carriers loses his balance, causing the chest to tumble open and spill glowing purple crystals onto the ground. Peering through the leaves, Marceau's worst fears are confirmed as she recognizes the glowing crystals as arcanium. The lead servant angrily berates his partner, demanding that he quickly pick up the spilled crystals. Ryan whispers to Darcy, questioning if they are smuggling the crystals, as a man suddenly bursts out on a balcony. The blonde man on the balcony frantically urges the servants to bring the chest inside immediately. As the servants carry the box inside, Darcy and Marceau watch closely, noticing the others present at the scene. They watch in suspicion as the chest is brought into the annex extremely discreetly, despite the royal physician being nearby. Darcy points Ryan toward the annex where Lijuan is located, encouraging him to go and check on her. A soft creak echoes through the hallway as the wooden door of the annex slowly begins to open. Lijuan steps out of the room looking perfectly healthy, beautiful, and completely unaffected by her previous condition. Ryan gasps in shocked relief, calling out Lijuan's name as he sees her standing before him. Lijuan greets Ryan warmly, explaining that her sudden collapse and disappearance were simply due to stress and having too much on her mind lately. With a gentle smile, LeJuan asks Ryan if they should return to the celebratory ballroom together so they don't cause any more worry. Ryan readily agrees, and the two of them begin walking side by side back toward the palace ballroom. Watching from her hiding place in the bushes, Marceau is deeply bewildered by how perfectly normal and healthy LeJuan looks in such a short amount of time. Marceau wonders if the glowing arcanium stones are somehow directly connected to LeJuan's health and questions why the Marquis and Ryan are not coming out of the annex. Darcy gently calls out to Marceau from beside her, suggesting that it is time for them to quietly make their departure. Marceau agrees, and Darcy holds her hand affectionately as they prepare to leave their hiding spot in the garden. As they walk away from the garden, Marceau admits to Darcy that she doesn't really feel like returning to the crowded ballroom. Darcy looks down at Marceau with a warm, pleased smile, glad to hear she wants to spend quiet time together. When Marceau asks where they should go, Darcy suggests visiting a special place since they still have plenty of time before the banquet ends. Marceau looks up at him with a mixture of surprise and curious anticipation, wondering where he is taking her. Darcy leads Marceau into a grand, beautifully lit corridor, pointing ahead with a gentle smile. The two of them walk side by side down the spacious, elegant, white-piled hallway of the palace estate. Darcy maintains a quiet, peaceful expression as he guides Marceau closer to their destination. Darcy whispers this way as he turns the handle and opens a set of large double doors with a soft click. Marceau peers into the room with wide eyes, curious to see what lies behind the doors. Realizing this is the private room where Darcy has lived his entire life, Marceau notes that the space is slightly messy yet somehow organized, just like Darcy himself. Marceau instantly notices the fragrant smell of burning incense in the air, realizing that the head physician's medical advice was highly accurate. Noticing her reaction, Darcy turns to her and asks if the scent of the incense is too strong for her comfort, and Marceau confirms that it is. Darcy immediately decides to stop burning it, throwing the remaining incense sticks into the blazing fireplace. Darcy notes that they simply need to let some fresh air in to clear the room, and Marceau warmly agrees as she looked at the large window. Darcy says, by the way, as he begins rummaging through a nearby drawer to retrieve a special item. Darcy tells Marceau to take a look, gently placing a beautifully crafted white revolver into her hands. Marceau is surprised as Darcy explains that this is the weapon he used to threaten Kais, suggesting that she should be the one to give it a name. Darcy smiles softly down at her, waiting with patient curiosity to hear what name she will choose. Marceau simply decides to call it Gun, and Darcy chuckles, finding the straightforward name simple and fitting. Darcy crosses his arms and adopts a more serious expression as he begins explaining his strategic plans for the future. Marceau looks at him with curiosity, asking him what kind of strategy he is planning to implement. Darcy explains that he wants to develop a tactical method that doesn't rely on magic at all. Darcy points out that since Kais has already witnessed the power of this firearm, Kais will undoubtedly try to replicate it and build something similar. Darcy declares his goal to create an even more powerful weapon to prove to Kais that any desperate attempts to retaliate against him are completely pointless. Marceau asks in shock if the arcanium stones are actually beginning to run out. Darcy confirms her suspicion, explaining that arcanium is a finite resource that does not simply replenish itself endlessly. Darcy adds that the exact same issue applies to the world's population of wizards. Darcy reflects that since wizards are currently in hiding and avoiding using their magical powers, it might honestly be the safest option for everyone. Marceau looks down with a sorrowful and deeply empathetic expression, feeling the weight of the wizard's forced isolation. Marceau gently pats the seat next to her, softly asking Darcy to come and sit by her side. Darcy looks down with a quiet, slightly vulnerable expression as his gaze softens in response to her invitation. Darcy sits down close to Marceau, turning his full attention toward her as they share a quiet moment. Marceau looks at Darcy with determination and firmly states that she wants to meet the hidden wizards. Thinking she is searching for magical items, Darcy gently offers to personally craft any enchanted items she might want so she doesn't have to seek them out. Marceau clarifies that she doesn't want to meet them for personal gain, but rather to establish fair business relations so they can live openly in society and receive the proper compensation and treatment they deserve. Marceau looks at him with deep affection, telling him that because he wishes for her happiness, she wants him to be happy as well, as their happiness is intertwined. Marceau adds that she truly believes that improving the quality of life for all wizards is the essential starting point for Darcy's own happiness. Marceau gently reminds him of his own identity, pointing out that he himself is a wizard. Marceau acknowledges the heavy emotional burden Darcy carries as a wizard who was once forced to kill his own people against his will. Marceau looks at Darcy with a gentle, slightly melancholic gaze, feeling deep empathy for the heavy burdens he has carried as a wizard. Darcy suddenly becomes overwhelmed with embarrassment, blushing deeply as he covers his face with his hands. Seeing his intense reaction, Marceau sits close to him on the sofa as Darcy desperately groans for her not to look at him. Blushing furiously, Darcy peeks through his fingers, sheepishly admitting that he must look pretty dumb to her right now. Marceau looks at him with a tender smile, gently reassuring him that it is absolutely impossible for him to ever look dumb. A wave of playful silence fills the room as Darcy continues to hide his face in his hands while Marceau watches him with quiet amusement. Taking a deep breath, Darcy finally uncovers his face and tries to compose himself, murmuring that he has regained his composure. Darcy looks at Marceau with a soft blush still warming his cheeks, gently offering to arrange a meeting with the hidden wizards if she is truly determined to find them. Darcy explains that while only wizards know where their kind resides, they aren't all privy to every single hiding place, prompting Marceau to ask what he means by that. Darcy crosses his arms and lowers his gaze, asking her if she has ever heard the dark rumors about the sudden disappearance of certain wizards. Looking at her with a serious expression, Darcy quietly confesses that he was the one responsible for those disappearances. Shocked by his sudden confession, Marceau turns to him in disbelief, urgently demanding to know how and why such a thing happened. Darcy explains that while he was bound by Kai's mind-controlling spell, he was forced to kill countless wizards, though he managed to avoid killing every single one of them. He recounts how some of the wizards were instead captured and confined in cages under Kai's direct command. Darcy reveals that Kai's had specifically ordered him to spare a select few of the captured wizards. Marceau realizes that this matches the information she has, understanding the painful contradiction Darcy faced by being forced to fight wizards while secretly helping some survive. Bound by a cruel fate, Darcy was trapped in a miserable situation where his forced duties constantly clashed with his desire to save his people. Marceau quietly wonders if Darcy ever discovered the true reason behind Kai's mysterious order to spare those select wizards. Darcy sadly admits that Kai's never shared his true motives or explained why he wanted those specific wizards spared. Darcy reflects that regardless of Kai's reasons, he was powerless to disobey him, but he resolved that once he broke free of the curse, he would take action. He determined that once he gained his freedom, he would build a safe, hidden sanctuary where the surviving wizards could live in peace. Darcy looks at Marceau with a proud smile, revealing that the spared wizards are currently living safely at that very hideout. Marceau is deeply moved by his kindness, looking at him with sparkling eyes as she praises him for doing such an incredible and amazing thing. Darcy looks down with a self-deprecating sigh, muttering that his actions were merely born from guilt and that he should have never done those bad things to begin with. Marceau gently corrects him, pointing out that many people wouldn't have even tried to make amends, and some wouldn't have felt any guilt at all. Feeling relieved, Marceau asks if the wizards know he built the sanctuary for them, but Darcy reveals that they have no idea he is their benefactor. Darcy rests his chin on his gloved hand, falling into a contemplative silence as he thinks about his complicated relationship with the wizards. Darcy is startled out of his thoughts, his mismatched eyes widening in surprise at Marceau's sudden words. Marceau suggests that if the wizards knew the truth, they might actually appreciate it, pointing out that it isn't a lie since he was the one who provided the Arcanium stones. Marceau smiles warmly, teasingly asking him why he's being so shy when he is usually so bold and why he is trying to hide his good deeds. Darcy stands up and turns away, explaining that the harsh reality is that the wizards view him as their enemy, and hiding his identity is the only way she will get a chance to speak with him. Marceau knows that Darcy is right, reflecting on how tightly knit the wizards are and how fiercely they avoid outsiders. To overcome their long-held prejudices against outsiders, Marceau realizes she needs to offer them something of immense value, stepping into the role of a villainess who uses enchanted items. Although Marceau is not thrilled about reclaiming her notorious reputation as a villainess, she is willing to do whatever it takes to help the wizards. Looking determined, Marceau stands up and asks Darcy to simply tell her where the hideout is located so she can prepare something special for them. Darcy turns back to protest, expressing his deep concern for her safety, but Marceau quickly places her finger over his lips to hush him. Giving him a playful and reassuring smile, Marceau gently asks him to have some faith in her abilities. Deep in her memories, Marceau remembers how difficult it is to win over a person's heart and how tiring it can be to keep trying after failing so many times. She recalls the painful memories of being left behind and getting hurt in the past, yet her resolve to try again remains unshaken. Marceau looks up at Darcy with a sweet and peaceful expression, completely focused on the bright future they can build together. Darcy gazes at her, realizing that as long as there is even one person who truly believes in him, he will always find the strength to stand back up. He knows that no matter what challenges lie ahead or what the results may be, his heart is finally at peace. Marceau turns back toward him, her face lighting up with a radiant and breathtaking smile. Looking down at her, Darcy feels a warm wave of emotion wash over him as his expression softens with pure affection. Marceau steps forward and gently pats his chest, softly thanking him for everything he has done. Looking up at him with pride, Marceau promises that although she can't do it right away, she will one day make sure every wizard knows he was the one who built their sanctuary. Darcy's eyes shimmer with tears of gratitude, deeply moved by her unwavering belief in his goodness. A warm, serene smile spreads across Darcy's face as he looks down at the woman who has completely transformed his life. Darcy whispers that her faith in him is more than enough to make him happy. The soft, nostalgic melody of a record player fills the quiet room as Darcy warmly asks Marceau if she would like to listen to some music together. "Yeah, I listen to it when I'm alone, and it's not half bad," Darcy says with a quiet smile, standing beside his gramophone. He looks over his shoulder at Marceau and asks, "Is there anything in particular you want to listen to?" Marceau sits comfortably on the edge of the bed, closing her eyes with a serene and warm smile. "We're in your space," she replies gently. "Let's listen to what you like to listen to." "Okay," Darcy softly agrees as his white-gloved hand gently lowers the needle onto the spinning vinyl record. As the music begins to play, a sweet, melancholic melody fills the room, starting with a grand minor chord. Marceau tilts her head back, closing her eyes to fully lose herself in the atmospheric and beautiful music. Darcy crosses his arms and leans back slightly, watching her. Marceau silently observes how perfectly the elegant, slightly sorrowful melody suits him. Reaching for the small table, Darcy prepares to light some incense, murmuring, "Oops, I just caught myself." With a swift, elegant turn, Darcy stands before Marceau and halts his actions. He adjusts his white glove with a warm, subtle smile and admits, "I actually don't hate that my routine's getting disrupted by you." Marceau steps forward, smiling warmly as she holds out a ceramic pitcher containing the incense sticks. "Okay, then let's skip the incense and just set the mood," she says playfully, adding, "Here, the ones from Roberta." Darcy's crimson eye widens slightly in surprised realization. Marceau gazes up at him, her beautiful eyes filled with warmth and affection. Overwhelmed by her presence, Darcy blushes deeply, sheepishly raising his gloved hand to his face. Marceau smiles warmly at his reaction, softly murmuring, "I find your hands more intriguing than the incense." Darcy continues to blush furiously, looking down as Marceau stands close to him, gently teasing him in the cozy atmosphere of his room. Surprised and completely missing the romantic gesture, Marceau blinks in confusion, asking, "My hand? I don't see how that would be helpful." Seeing her adorable, clueless reaction, Darcy can't help but let out a soft, affectionate chuckle. In a playful, lighthearted moment, Darcy gently holds Marceau's hand, teasing her with a warm grin. Setting the ceramic pitcher down on the elegant marble table, Darcy turns his focus back to the mystery of the gift. "I wonder why Roberta gave this to me," Darcy ponders aloud, holding the pitcher up. "I'm not going to use any incense anymore, so what should I do with this?" Suddenly, a soft clinking sound echoes as a magnificent purple gemstone necklace slips out of the pitcher and into his hand. Darcy stares at the glowing piece of jewelry in utter shock, whispering, "How did she—" He holds the sparkling necklace up to the light, realizing its true value as he declares, "A royal treasure." The gemstone radiates a strong, pure, magical light, revealed to be an enchanted item specifically designed to protect the wearer from mind control spells. Darcy reflects on the history of the treasure, recalling how Kais used to wear it all the time, only stopping once Darcy was bound by his curse. Marceau looks at him with deep respect, realizing how much Roberta risked. Smuggling this out of his hands must have been difficult, even for a royal physician. "Roberta took the risk to support you. She did her best to help in her position." Deeply moved by the revelation, Darcy looks down at the necklace in his hand, murmuring with a soft smile, "And I thought she was on Caius's side." Standing before Marceau, Darcy gently offers her the necklace. "You want me to keep the royal treasure?" she asks. Darcy explains, "It will catch them off guard. No one would suspect you have it." Darcy looks at her with an intense, earnest expression, softly adding, "But most of all," Marceau looks down at the magnificent purple treasure resting in her hands, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and concern. Looking down from above, Darcy holds both of her hands tightly, his voice turning incredibly serious. "There's one thing you need to keep in mind. Ryan's looking for this." Darcy warns her that while it protects her from mind control, carrying it could put her in grave danger. Marceau squeezes the chain firmly, looking up with absolute determination as she replies, "That's okay." Keeping the necklace close to her heart, Marceau proudly asserts, "They wouldn't imagine it's in the hands of Étoiles to begin with, but even if they knew, they have no right to search the Étoile March. Also, I know you would never try to mind control me." "Why, though?" Marceau asks, wondering why she should keep it on her person rather than in a secure mansion vault. Darcy firmly responds, "Nope, it's better to have it on you." Darcy looks down at her with a gentle, slightly teasing expression, asking, "What if I try to mind control you?" His gaze turns incredibly intense, his crimson eye focusing on her with deep, unspoken emotion. Looking directly back into his mismatched eyes, Marceau thinks to herself that no matter what side of him he shows her, she is not afraid. Deep in her heart, Marceau knows that she will always recognize the true shape of Darcy's beautiful and gentle soul. She fondly recalls the peaceful memories of them lying side by side, remembering how Darcy was the very first person to truly listen to her stories and accept her for exactly who she is. With unwavering conviction, Marceau knows that the real Darcy will always exist in her heart, no matter what challenges they face. Standing close to her, Darcy's voice softens with genuine vulnerability as he says, "Marceau, I'm not kidding." Looking down with a solemn, melancholic expression, Darcy warns, "You never know what could happen. If and when I truly understand the nature of the emotions I have for you, I can be way more cruel than you think." Darcy's blue eye reflects a swirling, dark sea of dangerous emotions as he quietly admits, "Most people in love are out of their minds. I don't want to do to you what my mother did to others." An evocative, dreamy vision portrays the two of them sinking together into a vast, dark blue abyss, representing the terrifying depth of his feelings. Darcy whispers, "So, for me..." Stepping closer, Darcy looks at Marceau with pleading, earnest eyes. "Please wear the necklace. Nothing bad will happen, I promise." Darcy's expression softens into a deeply vulnerable, almost desperate plea as he quietly asks, "Please?" Feeling the profound weight of his love and fears, Marceau closes her eyes, accepting his request with a gentle, reassuring smile. Marceau raises the brilliant purple treasure in her white-gloved hand, letting the gemstone twinkle beautifully in the light. Seeing her consent, a wave of immense relief washes over Darcy, and a warm, breathtaking smile spreads across his face. Darcy steps behind her, gently brushing her dark hair aside to clasp the protective royal necklace around her neck, whispering, "In your presence." Looking down at Marceau with deep affection, Darcy admits that for some reason he becomes incredibly shy and afraid around her. As Darcy's gloved hands gently prepare to clasp the necklace around her neck, he softly confesses that he isn't usually so nervous. Marceau stands quietly, feeling the cool metal of the necklace as Darcy carefully fastens it around her neck. Darcy's touch is incredibly gentle as he focuses entirely on adjusting the delicate chain, his soft expression filled with warmth. A quiet, fluttering heartbeat echoes in the silence of the room, surrounded by an atmosphere of gentle, budding romance. Feeling Darcy's close presence behind her, Marceau holds the magical necklace close to her chest, her heart beating rapidly as she tries to hide her deep blush. Stepping back slightly, Darcy warmly announces that he is all done fastening the protective necklace around her neck. Letting out a quiet sigh of relief, Marceau touches the gemstone necklace, feeling incredibly grateful that Darcy wasn't able to see how flustered her face was. As they turn, Darcy gently catches Marceau's attention, his expression soft and expectant, as if there is something more he wants to say. Turning back to look at him, Marceau softly asks, "Yeah?" Darcy looks down with a gentle blush warming his cheeks, admitting, "There's something I'd like to do to you right now." Blushing slightly but remaining resolute, Marceau reminds him of her promise, telling him to try whatever he wishes and that she'll let him know if she doesn't like it. Realizing how her words might have sounded, Marceau blushes furiously and frantically wonders to herself if she sounded far too eager. Looking down at her cute and flustered reaction, a warm, tender smile spreads across Darcy's face. Darcy reaches out and gently takes her hand, his touch light and full of deep respect. Darcy slowly kneels down on one knee before Marceau, holding her hand as he earnestly declares, "I want the feelings I have for you to be purely beautiful and respectful." Looking up at her, Darcy's mismatched eyes shimmer with absolute sincerity and unwavering devotion. In a beautiful and solemn gesture of devotion, Darcy kneels before Marceau, pledging his pure feelings to her under the warm light of the room. With the utmost reverence, Darcy gently lifts her hand to his lips, sealing his promise with a soft, respectful kiss. Marceau's breath catches in her throat as she stares down at him, her heart pounding wildly at his incredibly romantic and respectful gesture. Looking up at her, Darcy offers a warm and breathtakingly gentle smile that melts away any remaining doubts. Gently placing his hand on her cheek, Darcy murmurs that if he doesn't keep his feelings purely beautiful and respectful, he doesn't know what else he might do. Gently caressing her face, Darcy softly promises, "I'll see you again soon." Under the brilliant canopy of a starry night sky, a voice softly calls out Marceau's name at the palace. That night, a quiet and serious atmosphere settles over the palace grounds. Outside the palace, an elegant carriage waits in the quiet courtyard under the starlit sky. Sitting inside the carriage, Lejuan's grandfather tightly clenches his fist in relief, thinking that he is incredibly glad things are under control after almost losing Lejuan. He recalls the painful past, remembering how Lejuan was abandoned by her mother after she fell in love with a good-for-nothing and how the poor child was fated to die before reaching 15. Though she spent her early years filled with joy and laughter in his arms, her fragile life eventually began to unravel, pulling her down into a dark abyss of magical dependency. When she turned 15, he managed, "I'm just a language model and can't help with that." Letting out a heavy sigh, he sits in deep distress, realizing that they desperately need more arcanium to sustain her, yet the supply is dwindling, making him incredibly anxious about Lu Huan's future. Looking at her grandfather with deep concern, Lejuan gently asks if he is feeling all right. Forcing a reassuring smile, the grandfather replies, "I'm fine. I was just a little surprised when you fell earlier." Feeling incredibly guilty, Lejuan apologizes for causing him distress and mentions that since she also caused trouble for Prince Ryan, she plans to send him a token of appreciation soon, to which her grandfather replies that the prince would be pleased with anything from her. Looking out the carriage window, the grandfather notes that Prince Ryan hasn't been visiting their mansion as often lately, and Lejeune quietly confirms that she hasn't been inviting him over. Surprised by her answer, the grandfather asks, "Why is that?" Looking down thoughtfully, Lejuan explains that she simply needs some time to reflect on herself. Letting out a warm, hearty laugh, her grandfather reassures her that she has absolutely no flaws that would warrant such self-reflection. Looking out into the starry night, Lejuan quietly admits that she used to turn a blind eye to things that didn't concern her, wanting to believe that if Prince Ryan was good to her, then he was a good person. Her grandfather looks at her with a soft, understanding gaze, gently comforting her by saying that everyone makes mistakes like that. Clenching her hands tightly in her lap, Lejuan resolutely replies, "Perhaps that's true, but I should have done something when someone crossed the line." With newfound determination shining in her green eyes, Lejuan declares that even though she may have realized the truth too late, she wants to face it properly now. Offering a radiant, beautiful smile, Lejuan softly promises, "I'll show you in time, Grandpa." Deeply moved by her strength and beauty, her grandfather looks at her with watery eyes, thinking to himself that she is a true miracle to him. As the carriage ride comes to an end, the grandfather's mind goes back to his serious conversation with the prince. In a flashback meeting with Prince Ryan, the grandfather explains their desperate need for more arcanium stones to protect Lejuan, noting that because their supply is slowly depleting, they must protect their existing inventory and gather more. Tapping his fingers thoughtfully, Prince Ryan suddenly turns and coldly proposes, "So, join me in bringing down the Étoile March," completely freezing the grandfather in utter shock. Looking down with a calculating expression, Prince Ryan offers a tempting deal. If the grandfather joins him in destroying the Étoiles, Ryan will grant him one of their wealthy arcanium mines, knowing that their current mine is already depleted. The grandfather is disgusted by Ryan's cruelty, thinking of him as an insufferable bastard who is using Lejuan's critical condition to force his cooperation instead of proposing to her. Clenching his fist in quiet rage, the grandfather resolves to accept the prince's assistance for now because of their desperate need, but vows that he will never allow such a wicked beast to marry his beloved granddaughter. Prince Ryan stands coldly in his study as an associate bows and agrees to send over the contract. On the desk nearby, a spilled golden goblet drips green poison onto the wood, releasing a dark, ominous magic. Under a bright blue sky, the grand, elegant mansion of the Étoile March stands surrounded by beautifully manicured gardens. Sitting in her study, Marceau thoughtfully reviews some documents, wondering how she should make her first move to score a contract with the Wizards. She realizes that in order to secure a deal with the Wizards, she must find a way to operate completely out of sight of Prince Ryan and Kai's. Knowing that Ryan and Kai's will likely use underhanded tricks to hinder her progress, Marceau estimates that she will need about 1 month to fully persuade the Wizards. Deep in thought, Marceau realizes she has a perfect way to take a leave of absence from high society without arousing any suspicion from others. Remembering her past reclusive behavior, she happily decides to start a rumor that she has locked herself in her mansion again, knowing that such behavior is expected of her. Stepping out in high heels, Marceau prepares to put her plan into action, entirely unbothered by the rumors of her eccentricity. Entering a luxurious boutique with confidence, Marceau sweeps her hand forward and boldly announces that she wants to buy everything in the store. The store clerks and onlookers are thrown into a clamor, clapping in excitement at her massive, extravagant shopping spree. Sipping a warm drink, Marceau calculates that the easiest way to win over the Wizards is by starting with their children, who are far more easily enticed than the adults. To sweeten the deal, Marceau plans to gift the children not just ordinary toys, but also wonderful magical items. Though it is a strategic move to win over the wizards, Marceau genuinely wishes to bring joy to these children who have spent their lives in hiding in isolation. She gazes at photographs depicting beautiful natural landscapes, hoping to bring a sense of wonder into the children's secluded lives. Marceau believes that childhood memories are the most precious, and she wants to gift the young wizards new experiences, dreams, and hope. She envisions the children's eyes sparkling with pure, unadulterated joy when they receive her thoughtful gifts. With a gentle smile, Marceau takes another sip of her tea, feeling satisfied with her strategic and compassionate plan. Sitting in the boutique, Marceau politely thanks the clerk as an enormous mountain of brightly wrapped gift boxes is prepared for her. Seeing the massive pile of gifts, Marceau amusedly notes that she will definitely need Darcy's help to transport them all to the hidden wizard village. Marceau walks out of the store with a serene smile while the store staff follow closely behind, carrying her extensive purchases. Outside the boutique, onlookers whisper and gossip in amazement as they watch a mountain of gifts being loaded onto Marceau's carriage, marveling at her immense wealth. Inside the carriage, Marceau leans against the window and sighs, amusedly preparing herself for the inevitable waves of gossip that will follow. She decides that donating a portion of the toys to a public orphanage will serve as the perfect cover story for her true objective with the wizards. Back at her desk, Marceau confidently places her hand over her plans, ready to execute her clever double-sided strategy. Knowing she can kill two birds with one stone by doing a good deed and hiding her true goals, Marceau remains completely indifferent to any rumors. On the streets of the capital, noble ladies fan themselves and gossip, wondering why Marceau bought so many toys and noting her growing intimacy with Prince Darcy. A gentleman joins the gossip, snidely murmuring that Marceau's clearly moved on from Prince Ryan, jumping from one man to another in an improper manner. Suddenly, Darcy appears behind the gossiping man, gripping him tightly with a terrifying smile as he asks what kind of interesting gibberish the man is speaking. Towering over the terrified nobleman, Darcy sends chills down his spine as he coldly whispers that a door isn't the only thing he knows how to break. Trembling with fear, the man frantically stammered that he was only expressing his worry for Prince Ryan. With a chilling, dark expression, Darcy taps a revolver against the man's chest, warning him that while he doesn't care what people say about him, insulting Marceau with such filthy words is unforgivable. Darcy looks down with cold, murderous pink eyes, his gloved hand firmly gripping the weapon. With a sudden, deafening bang, Darcy fires a warning shot right next to the nobleman's head, leaving the man screaming in absolute horror. Smiling pleasantly, Darcy holds the smoking gun and playfully apologizes, claiming he had intended to hit the man right in the temple, but caught the shoulder. Darcy then flashes an incredibly bright, flower-adorned smile while sweetly offering to kindly shove the gun directly into the man's mouth. Back in safety, Marceau gently unties the orange ribbon of a gift box that has arrived at her mansion from the Ethical March. Darcy stands by as Marceau opens the box, finding a thank you gift for her previous assistance with Lejeune. As she opens the gift, Marceau notices something unexpected tucked away on the side of the box. Marceau pulls out a folded letter and realizes with a frown that it is a secret invitation letter from Prince Ryan. Upon seeing the letter, Darcy's eyes narrow with terrifying, cold anger as he mutters that Ryan must have completely lost his mind. Marceau quickly stops Darcy from destroying the letter, telling him to save it as evidence while Darcy insists he wants to burn it on the spot. Darcy rubs his head in deep irritation, furious that Ryan has the audacity to ask for a private meeting and holds back his urge to simply get rid of him. Sensing her worry, Darcy quickly shifts to a bright, beaming smile, reassuring Marceau that he was only joking. Darcy crosses his arms, looking genuinely annoyed as he complains about how irritating it is that Ryan keeps trying to interfere with Marceau's happiness. Marceau looks at him quietly, her expression softening as she blushes slightly at his fierce protectiveness. Curious about his behavior, Marceau asks Darcy what happened earlier that day, noting that he isn't the type to cause a scene without a very good reason. Darcy offers her a warm, soft gaze, gently remarking that she is the only person who thinks so highly of him. When Marceau insists that everyone would love him if they truly knew him, Darcy leans in close, warmly declaring that he doesn't care about anyone else because she is all he needs. Darcy smiles beautifully and tenderly at her, his expression filled with absolute affection and devotion. Marceau finds herself staring back at him, her cheeks flushed with a deep blush as she melts under his loving gaze. Blushing deeply, Marceau thinks to herself that Darcy sometimes speaks with unrefined and incredibly honest words, which never fails to make her heart flutter. As Darcy's gloved hand gently brushes past her hair, Marceau feels an overwhelming sense of relief, realizing how incredibly lucky she is that he was the first person she truly met in the outside world. Standing close together against a sparkling pink backdrop, Darcy looks down at Marceau with absolute tenderness as he gently cradles her face in his gloved hand. Marceau looks up with wide, starry pink eyes as Darcy's gloved fingers gently brush against her flushed cheek. Darcy gazes back at her with a gentle, loving expression, his bright pink eyes filled with warmth and devotion. Melting under his touch, Marceau closes her eyes with a serene, happy smile, leaning her cheek comfortably into his warm hand as flowers bloom around them. Gathering her courage, Marceau looks up and asks if he would like to travel together, just the two of them, causing Darcy to flinch in complete shock. Caught entirely off guard by her bold proposal, Darcy blushes intensely, his cheeks turning a bright shade of crimson. Realizing how her words sounded, a highly flustered Marceau frantically waves her hands and stammers to clarify that she didn't mean it in that way. Marceau explains that since the children in the wizard town have lived isolated lives with limited experiences, she hopes to bring them some joy and hope. Looking at a photograph of a beautiful beach, Marceau expresses her desire to fill that gap for the children by gifting them pictures of breathtaking landscapes from other countries. Marceau stands tall and resolutely declares her strong determination to win over the wizards and secure the contracts. As her hand reaches out to his, Marceau thinks about how she genuinely wants to help those who are trapped in prejudice, but more than that. She remembers Darcy standing alone in a forest, dressed in a dark cloak, looking down with a gentle, somewhat lonely smile. Deep in her heart, Marceau's truest and most sincere wish is for Darcy to be even happier than he is now.
She hopes to bring color back into his world, so that the canvas of his life, which has been painted black by sorrow, can be filled with joy.
Marceau hopes that, like a young child meeting the world for the very first time, Darcy can experience wonders he has never known before. Darcy gazes down at her with a warm, gentle smile, his eyes filled with a deep and quiet affection. Ready to embark on their secret journey, Darcy softly says, "Let's go," as a magical shimmer begins to envelop them. Under a beautiful pink and golden sunset sky, the grand and imposing palace of Prince Ryan stands tall and majestic. A servant politely presents a sealed envelope to Prince Ryan, announcing that a letter has arrived for him from the Étoile March. Holding the open letter, Prince Ryan's face darkens with intense frustration as he realizes that Marceau has rejected his invitation once again. Clenching his fist in anger, Ryan tightly crumples the letter, wondering if she has truly changed and feeling a sickening sensation of jealousy in his gut. Deep in thought, Ryan realizes that quite apart from his feelings or plans for Luan, his obsession has shifted. Remembering how Marceau used to look at him, Ryan thinks with dark possessiveness that he wants her beautiful purple eyes to gaze only at him, gritting his teeth in denial that she could ever prefer Darcy. Ryan calculates that all he needs to do is show her a tiny drop of kindness to win her back, completely confident that he can manipulate her feelings again. Back in the study, the middle-aged noble sits comfortably with a teacup, asking Ryan how he plans to bring down the étoiles. Looking back over his shoulder with a cold, calculating smirk, Ryan reveals that his first step is to extract as much arcanium as possible from the étoiles. Ryan states that in order to seize their mine, they need a solid justification, to which the cunning noble smirks and replies that he means they should fabricate one. Citing the bad reputation of magical items, Ryan suggests that they can use the Étoile March's use of enchanted items against them to invite massive public criticism. The noble agrees, noting that since Miss Étoile's reputation is already poor, it will be easy to ruin her entirely, and Ryan smiles in cold agreement. A quiet, ominous silence hangs over the room as a lone cup of tea sits untouched on the dark table. With cold-blooded ruthlessness, Ryan muses that it would be highly beneficial if a fatal accident involving casualties were to occur due to these magical items. Under a bright, clear sky, the elegant light blue mansion of the Étoile March stands peaceful and majestic. Preparing to depart, Darcy asks Marceau if she is fully packed and has cleared her schedule, and Marceau confirms, adding that they must avoid drawing any attention. Extending his gloved hand with a radiant, enchanting smile, Darcy gently asks Marceau to give him her hand. With a gentle motion, Darcy slips a beautiful silver ring set with a brilliant blue gemstone onto her left ring finger. Marceau is captivated by the exquisite ring, admiring its beauty with wide, sparkling eyes. While she knows the rings are just magical items for teleportation, Marceau can't help but notice that they look exactly like wedding bands, especially since they are wearing them on their ring fingers. A brilliant, highly intricate purple magic circle ignites on the marble floor beneath them, pulsing with powerful ancient magic. With a sudden rush of power, a blinding column of pink and purple light erupts, lifting the hand-holding pair off the ground as the teleportation magic activates. As they arrive, Darcy pulls back his hood with a breathtaking smile, his white hair catching the gentle breeze against a bright blue sky. gasps in absolute wonder. Marceau looks out at their destination, her eyes sparkling with pure childlike joy. Together, they stand side by side on a beautiful golden beach, gazing out at the breathtaking expanse of the sparkling turquoise ocean.